Dominic and his eccentric companions strike a dramatic pose in front of a grand, luxurious mansion, ready to launch their big promotion. Suddenly, the entire group bows down in deep, formal apology. "We're a bit late promoting the South's premier getaway, Evergreen. My apologies," Dominic explains with a serious face. Under the warm southern sun, the narration begins as a beautiful ocean waves gently under a sparkling blue sky. Lies an ultra-luxury resort designed for the ultimate romantic and private escape. Become one with the turtles. Dive into the mystery and experience the breathtaking wonders of the Coral Sea. If you still haven't tried our food, then you haven't really lived yet. Indulge in diverse flavors and legendary spices found only at Evergreen. Dwarf craftsmanship is truly the best in the world. Experience unrivaled quality with luxury ceramic sets handcrafted by dwarf masters. Think the fun ends with summer? Evergreen is packed with excitement and lively festivals all year round. Come join the fun. So what are you waiting for? Come to Evergreen. Well, what do you think? Dominic asks with greedy excitement, his eyes flashing with dollar signs. But instead of excitement, a heavy silence of absolute exhaustion falls over the room as the group collapses onto the table. "Dominic, forget the money. We're freaking exhausted," Kalan groans. "How many times did you make me swing that damn walk just for one shot?" "Exactly. Working us like dogs without even feeding us meat. You're a cruel man," the dwarf master complains. "I'm so embarrassed I've lost all my strength," the blue-haired girl whines as she collapses onto the floor in tears. "You know how busy I am, yet you made me do this?" the blonde man sighs, rubbing his head in pure exhaustion. Despite their constant grumbling, Dominic just flashes a warm, knowing smile. To reward them, Dominic presents a steaming pot of delicious food, declaring nothing beats this for stamina and recovery. Soon, the team is happily eating, instantly restored by the delicious meal. This is the story of how a lord from another world feeds his people incredibly well. The scene shifts back to a few years ago under a bright full moon in the quiet, dark forest. A young man sits collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath as he clings to the last of his strength. Suddenly, a heavy boot steps into the frame. "You bastard," a rough voice sneers. "How the hell did you get here?" Kalan demands menacingly, standing alongside his shadowy crew. "What do you mean, how?" the boy weakly asks, his face half hidden in the shadows. "I walked," the boy answers simply. Hearing this, Kalan scratches his bald head in disbelief, muttering, "I see." "Right. Then tell me, you punk," Kalan says, slowly licking his lips with a sinister grin. "What are you actually good for?" Kalan mockingly laughs, while the boy looks down in silent defeat. Back in the present, a large metal soup pot is slammed down onto the green grass with a loud thud. "We make sure everyone's well fed," Dominic announces with a bright, welcoming smile as steam rises from the giant pot. "It's here, my lunch," the mercenaries roar, running in a chaotic stampede. "What took you so long? I've been dying of hunger waiting for this." "I was about to eat the chief instead," one of them yells. "Ha! I stopped working 10 minutes ago just for this," another laughs. Seeing the chaotic rush, Dominic immediately yells at the top of his lungs, "Get in line!" Hearing his fierce command, the terrifying mercenaries immediately scramble to line up in a perfect orderly row. "Smells damn good," the eye-patch mercenary says as Dominic serves him his food. "Of course it does. Look who cooked it," Dominic replies proudly. "My name is Dominic," he introduces himself to the audience. "As you can see, I'm in charge of lunch around here. And this beautiful place is called Evergreen. It is a tiny fishing village, so small that it's not even registered on any map. It was built by retired mercenaries. They look like terrifying thugs, but in this current life of mine, they're the first good people I've met. At least they aren't a bunch of fakes. Yeah, they even took me in when I was just a helpless war refugee," Dominic recounts warmly. "Can't you see I'm already wasting away?" a dramatic voice complains, recalling past hardships. "That's Village Chief Kalan," Dominic notes as the chief stands proudly with his plate under the bright sun. "I was a war refugee, treated like trash and ignored by everyone. I was ready to give up on everything," Dominic remembers. "To repay their kindness, I've been showing off my cooking skills to my heart's content," Dominic says, happily serving a hot meal to the chief. "Besides," the narration continues as Cologne takes a big, steaming spoonful of the delicious soup. "Whoa, I knew it! Dominic's cream soup is the absolute best thing I've ever tasted," Kalan exclaims, floating in sheer bliss. The meal consists of cream soup, sausages, egg salad, and soft bread. A perfect balance of carbs, protein, fat, and sodium is the absolute bare minimum for hardworking fishermen. First, saute the carrots, mushrooms, potatoes, and onions, then mix the flour roux with milk and let it simmer low, the recipe instructs. Season it with salt and add herbs for aroma, the recipe continues, though Dominic notes that black pepper is currently too expensive. It's just a basic cream soup, but nothing beats it for thawing out frozen fishermen, Dominic says, as the fishermen happily feel their cold bodies melt from the warmth. Is this the batch you made yesterday? Callan asks, eyeing a juicy grilled sausage. Yeah, I packed it with extra fat so it'll taste great, Dominic answers with a proud grin. Callan takes a bite of the grilled sausage and gasps in surprise. Let's see! Holy! Dominic grins mischievously. I'm telling you, some things just need that grease, he says, remembering how much trial and error it took to perfect this sausage recipe, one he can now sell for a fortune. Dominic suddenly pauses, turning back with a confused look on his face. Huh? Callan sits in tense silence, caught completely red-handed as he tries to eat only the sausage while leaving his salad and bread untouched. Sweating under Dominic's glare, Callan grumbles, I swear you nag more than my damn wife did. A lion doesn't eat grass. Dominic flares up in anger, roaring, Lion, my ass, you're way too old to be a picky eater, while Callan can only offer a nervous laugh. Dominic sighs, grumbling to himself, man, old habits really do die hard. I can't believe I'm still acting like this from my past life. In his past life in South Korea, he was a 30-year-old nutritionist working in schools and offices, constantly reviewing menus and food prep. His name was Han Jung-min, a dedicated professional, a stark contrast to his current life as Dominic. Dominic recalls how his past memories suddenly came flooding back, though it didn't change his pathetic reality as a war refugee. Back in the present, Callan looks over his plate and asks, Oh, Dominic, you free this weekend? Why do you ask? Dominic asks, only for Callan to casually drop a bombshell. I'm making you the village chief starting next week. Dominic freezes in absolute shock at the massive news, while Callan casually picks his nose as if it's completely trivial. Dominic explodes, screaming, How can you just slide that in like it's nothing, you old fox? Callan ducks back, yelling, watch the spit! Hey, being chief is easy. All you gotta do is attend the meeting at the Lord's castle once a month. Another villager walks up with the tray, chuckling, Chief, just be honest with him. Dominic looks back in confusion. The villager explains, last time they told the village chiefs to learn how to read, said the meetings were a mess because most of them are illiterate. But we all know our chief isn't the type to crack open a book. Callan points a proud thumb at himself and grins. You guys know me too well. Dominic flatly replies, that's nothing to be proud of. Dominic rubs his temple in exasperation. You want me to act as chief just because of that? Why don't you just learn to read yourself? When Callan claims a lion doesn't need to read, Dominic retorts, just admit you're an animal then. Callan laughs. Exactly. The higher-ups handle everything anyway. You just have to sit there. Don't worry about the cost. The village funds will cover your travel expenses. Dominic sighs, relenting. Fine. Do I start with the meeting next month? Callan flashes a grin and replies, Nope, you're leaving the day after tomorrow. Dominic's jaw drops in absolute disbelief. Haha, I'm out. 2 days later, Dominic arrives at the grand, imposing fortress of the Lord's castle. Inside the castle, a formal council meeting is underway as the presenter announces the next item on the agenda. The stern-faced presiding lord leans forward, declaring, the former lord's birthday is coming up. Let's make sure our gifts don't overlap. A long-bearded chief nods in agreement. Agreed. Last year was embarrassing. Let's get it right this time. A bald chief casually puffs on a cigarette and suggests, how about a cockfight to keep things fair, while another reminds him it's a no-smoking zone. Meanwhile, another chief shouts, my village is bringing sheep. As the chiefs bicker loudly about bringing calves and pigs, Dominic sits in exhausted silence, thinking about what a complete waste of time this meeting is. He notes to himself that the former lord seems completely obsessed with meat. Dominic recalls the rumors that the former lord rarely leaves his room because he is close to becoming a swordmaster, having once been a knight. The heavy doors swing open and a maid enters announcing, Excuse me, chiefs, eat first, then finish your meeting. Hearing this, Dominic's eyes light up. Finally, I get to taste the food at the Lord's castle, he thinks, remembering how much Callan missed these meals. He wonders what kind of spices and sauces nobles use here. As they head to the dining hall, Dominic tells himself, if it's good, I'll have to sneak a peek at the recipe. Dominic cautiously peeks past the maid's shoulder into the dining room. His eyes instantly transform into sparkling stars as he drools in excitement, shouting, Whoa! Before him lies an incredible lavish banquet table overflowing with freshly baked bread, roasted meats, hot savory soups, and exquisite side dishes. Dominic eagerly bites into a loaf of soft, warm bread, deeply moved by its perfect texture and rich flavor. He tastes a rich seafood dish, feeling a wave of culinary bliss as if diving into a sparkling blue ocean surrounded by fresh shrimp and mussels. But the best part is definitely, Dominic observes as his eyes land on a sizzling golden platter of grilled tripe. The castle chef notices his delight and asks, "Oh, you've had tripe before?" Dominic eagerly replies, "Of course, I can't get enough of it." Dominic happily drools, noting, "I can tell it was prepared perfectly. Organs can smell if they aren't cleaned right. Whoever handled this really knows their stuff." The chef laughs proudly. "Ha! This young village chief knows his business. I prepared most of the meat myself, damn right." Dominic praises his skills and asks, "Does our former lord have a thing for meat?" The chef nods, noting that he eats lamb, beef, pork, and everything, which has forced the chef to constantly improve his skills. The chef serves Dominic a generous portion of the sizzling meat. "Give it a try. The flavor changes depending on how you grill it." Dominic happily digs in, thinking, "Sweet, free food." The chef then mentions, "Right, that reminds me. Everyone's picking out birthday gifts for the former lord. Has your village decided what to give him?" Dominic chews thoughtfully, worried because it looks like everyone else already claimed all the best meats. The chef rubs his chin thoughtfully. In that case, he leans in and whispers, "Forget the meat. Just offer him a cask of booze." Dominic blinks in surprise. "Alcohol? Well, we brew beer in Evergreen, but it's not exactly high quality," Dominic explains. The chef winks and wags his finger. Real drinkers don't care about labels. The former lord has dozens of oak barrels in his collection alone." Relieved to have found a solution, Dominic bows slightly. "Wow, he must be a serious drinker then. Thanks, I'll make sure to pay you back for the tip." The chef smiles, offering, "Don't worry about it. Want some more tripe?" As Dominic happily stuffs his face, he thinks, "Let's see, that takes care of the birthday present. But eating like that every day is a one-way ticket to gout." The chef looks at him, utterly confused. Gout? What the hell is that?" Dominic explains, "Oh, you don't know? It's a disease so painful that even a light breeze hurts. Usually starts in the toes. It happens when uric acid builds up in your system. Eating foods high in purines is a recipe for disaster," leaving the chef sweating in shock. The chef quickly waves his hand dismissively. "You're talking nonsense again. Purines, schmurines, stop sounding like a snake oil salesman and just eat." Dominic sheepishly replies, "Yes, sir." As he walks down the quiet corridor, Dominic sighs. "Damn, old habits die hard. My knowledge of nutrition from my past life is useless here. Even back then, people treated me like a con artist. Stop over-explaining everything, Dominic. Get it together." Dominic's content expression suddenly turns to utter confusion and panic. "Well, at least I got my fill of those guts. Wait," he thinks as someone grabs him from behind. Covered by a heavy cloth, Dominic's muffled cries of "oomph" ring out as he is forcefully subdued. Opening his eyes in a daze, Dominic groans, "Ugh," as his consciousness slowly returns. As Dominic lies on the floor, he looks up to see several imposing figures wearing long blue capes standing over him. One of the men in blue capes commands, "Yes, sir," as they carry the bound Dominic through the dimly lit halls. Dominic gasps for air with a loud pwah as the hood is finally pulled off his head. "Finally awake, are we?" A deep, commanding voice echoes in front of him. The man sitting before Dominic says calmly, "Looks like my men misunderstood my orders." He continues with a slight wince. "I didn't expect them to be so rough with you. My apologies." Dominic laughs nervously, saying, "No, it's fine. Mistakes happen," while internally screaming, "Damn it, what the hell is going on? A kidnapping? Right here in the Lord's castle?" Staring at the armed guards standing behind the seated man, Dominic thinks in terror, and those two behind him, they're fully armed. One wrong move and I'm dead. Dominic tries to break the ice. "Anyway, may I ask who you are?" Only for a guard to instantly yell, "Silence, you insolent brat!" The guard continues to roar, "How dare you speak so freely?" before the seated man interrupts with a quiet, "Hey." Trembling in sheer agony, the bearded man glares at his guard and snarls, "Stop screaming, it's rattling my bones." "I've kept my guest waiting. I haven't even introduced myself," the Lord says, as the guard is shown physically face-planted on the floor in absolute terror. The imposing man introduces himself. "I am Theodore Sinclair, the former lord of this land," causing Dominic's eyes to widen in absolute shock. "Former lord?" Dominic stammers, while Theodore winces in pain and grunts, "Hey, I told you, stop shouting." Dominic stares in realization, thinking, "Wait, if your bones are rattling like that, then..." Dominic tentatively asks, "Is it really gout?" To which Theodore replies, "Yeah, that gout thing, or whatever you called it." Leaning forward with a dark, intense look, Theodore asks, "Tell me, what do you know about this curse?" Before adding, "I'm telling you, it feels like someone put a curse on me." Dominic is left completely dumbfounded, thinking gout is a curse? Theodore sits back and asks with a tense look, could it really be gout? Before replying to himself, yes, gout, or whatever you call it. Dominic can only stare in complete disbelief, his mind screaming, what? Gout is a curse? Dominic's inner monologue runs wild. What kind of nonsense is this? It's obviously a buildup of purine from a terrible diet. Greasy food and alcohol 3 times a day? It's so obvious. Dominic realizes the danger, but if I just say, my lord, it's a medical condition, he'll think I'm a fake dark sorcerer. He sweats nervously as he continues to calculate. Wait, if he thinks that, he'll throw me in a dungeon, not a bed. Staring at the former lord, Dominic observes this guy. Looking at Theodore's trembling, tightly clasped hands, Dominic notes he's desperate. Dominic decides to probe further, asking, Elder Lord, did it start with swelling and pain around your toes or ankles? As Theodore listens intently and says, go on. Dominic explains the symptoms. The pain is unbearable at night or in the morning. Sometimes it's not just your feet. It can start in your elbows or finger joints. Dominic continues, when it flares up, even a gentle breeze feels like torture, but on other days, the pain vanishes. It's like it never happened at all. Does that sound familiar? Theodore gulps and replies, yes, that's exactly it. Dominic declares with absolute confidence, this condition is called gout. Theodore looks up in genuine surprise, asking, it's not a curse? Theodore stands up, letting his blanket fall to the floor as he demands, then what's causing this? Tied to his chair, Dominic explains calmly, there are several factors, but the biggest cause is your diet. Dominic breaks it down. To put it simply, it's a nutrient found in rich, fatty foods. If your body doesn't flush it out, it builds up. The problem starts right at your toes. Theodore objects, but I've lived like this my entire life. I was perfectly healthy until recently. Why is it suddenly a problem now? Dominic responds, it's likely because your digestive system has weakened with age, or perhaps it's been building up for years and is only now reaching a breaking point. Dominic adds a disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, so I can't say for sure, this is just my best guess, which makes Theodore narrow his eyes in suspicion. Not a doctor? Theodore asks, then how do you know so much about this rare condition? While Dominic gulps, thinking this is it. Dominic braces himself, telling himself time to give him my prepared answer. Dominic begins his fabricated story. My master always said that if used correctly, food can be medicine. He believed that medicine and food share the same source. As a graphic of elemental energies and a yin-yang symbol appears, Dominic explains, he taught me that there are 5 vital energies in this world. By eating a diet balanced with those energies, Theodore strokes his beard thoughtfully. The 5 vital energies? Does he mean the elements that make up mana? Before asking, so what was your master's name? Dominic hesitates, whispering, June, as a dramatic single tear rolls down his cheek. Dominic bursts into hysterical fake tears, wailing, his name was Hio Junahemser. Oh, I miss him so much, master. Theodore is deeply moved, murmuring, Hio June? That's a unique name. Judging by your tears, you must have studied under a truly great master. Perhaps your master had the blood of an ancient elf. Feeling his ropes being sliced open, Dominic thinks with a sigh of relief, good, this is going smoothly. Theodore notes, come to think of it, I can't expect you to cure this disease since you aren't a doctor. And Dominic eagerly agrees, yes, exactly. Theodore suddenly grips Dominic's shoulder, a terrifying purple aura flaring around him as he declares, you'll be in charge of everything I eat. With a dark, intense gaze, Theodore adds, I need to know if you're just playing games with me, or if you actually possess the knowledge of the ancient elves, leaving Dominic crying in absolute despair as he squeaks, excuse me? The sun shines brightly on the beautiful facade of the Sinclair estate, illuminating its grand windows and towering structures. Dominic sighs as he paces back and forth along the carpeted floor, wondering what he should do next. He recalls his past life where he worked in a hospital cafeteria for about a year, meaning that preparing patient meals itself isn't a problem for him. However, he begins to panic, biting his thumb nervously as he realizes he has never done nutritional planning for a high-profile VIP before. Dominic continues to pace, thinking that this is a professional consultation rather than an ordinary cafeteria lunch, so the quality must match the price. He decides he must cut out fats and alcohol first, and hopes the Elder Lord is okay with eating vegetables. Dominic cautiously peeks out of a door to see if the coast is clear. Suddenly, a voice from behind asks where he is going, making Dominic jump and scream in absolute shock. Dominic asks the knight if he has been standing there the entire time, looking completely exasperated. The handsome blonde knight, Ian Hanover of the Sinclair estate, stands with his arms crossed and explains that the Elder Lord ordered him to serve Dominic day and night. Dominic realizes with a sweat drop that this isn't serving at all, it's complete surveillance. Dominic explains that since he must manage the Lord's diet, he needs to know his lifestyle, health condition, and meet with his personal physician, head chef, and household staff, but Ian immediately cuts him off, declaring it impossible. Dominic can only gape in disbelief, stammering, "What?" Ian explains that everything Dominic mentioned is classified information regarding the Elder Lord's private life, and outsiders are not permitted access. Dominic internally complains about how incredibly stubborn the knight is. When Dominic protests that he was told to manage the Lord's meals, Ian dismissively tells him the Lord wasn't being serious, and that Dominic only needs to make a list of healthy foods and submit it to the kitchen. Dominic begrudgingly opens the door, saying he understands, while silently resolving that if anything goes wrong, it will be entirely the knight's fault. Ian watches him go, thinking to himself in disbelief about how food could possibly cure a medical condition. But before Ian can dismiss him, Dominic calls out, "Sir Knight!" Dominic turns around with a fierce, serious expression and challenges Ian, asking if he will change his mind if Dominic can treat the Elder Lord's condition using nothing but food. Ian is caught completely off guard. Dominic stares intensely, declaring that while food is just something to eat for some, it is so much more than that for others. Ian looks down and concedes that Dominic has a point, explaining that he didn't mean to disrespect those who are hungry, but simply meant food alone cannot act as medicine. Dominic walks past Ian, stating that the Elder Lord gave him this task and he must do his best so the knight shouldn't get in his way. Ian responds with a slight smirk, asking if he's getting cocky. Dominic coolly replies, "Not at all, sir," prompting Ian to click his tongue in annoyance. Dominic walks down the hallway with a smug smile, reminding himself that even if Ian is a knight, Dominic is the Elder Lord's guest, so there's absolutely no reason to fear him. Suddenly, a sword sheath blocks Dominic's path as a voice demands to know where he thinks he's going, causing him to scream in absolute terror. Trembling like a leaf, Dominic stammers that he is going to the kitchen and nervously asks what is wrong, while Ian simply stares at him with a sweat drop. After a tense pause, Ian points the other way and tells him that the kitchen is actually in that direction. Upon entering the kitchen, Dominic is greeted by the head chef, who turns around in surprise. Dominic laughs off the situation, telling the head chef it was all a misunderstanding. The head chef admits he heard Dominic was dragged away by knights and expected him to be terrified, then asks what brings him to the kitchen. Dominic reveals that he has been put in charge of the Elder Lord's meals for the time being, causing the chef's eyes to widen in utter shock. The furious head chef grabs Dominic by his collar, screaming that a dirty rat is trying to steal his job when he has a cute kid and a powerful wife to support. Dominic desperately pleads that it's a mistake, claiming he is only there to check ingredients as the chef's subordinate assistant. The chef gives him a menacing glare before smugly accepting the explanation, noting that there indeed is a hierarchy in the Lord's castle. The chef questions what Dominic means by checking ingredients since everything on the Lord's table is already top quality. Dominic explains that he needs to find ingredients that are bad for the Elder Lord specifically, because everyone's body is different. Dominic looks into a sack of potatoes and uses an analogy, asking them if the manna they train with also has different types of energy, with one specific type always suiting them best. Ian is forced to agree, admitting that it is indeed true. Holding up a glowing potato, Dominic argues that if mana reacts to the body, then ingredients growing by absorbing the world's mana must obviously have different effects on different people. The head chef admits that although he thought Dominic was a fraud, the explanation makes perfect sense, asking if Dominic will only select ingredients matching the Lord's body. Dominic happily confirms this with a thumbs up. Internally, Dominic chuckles nervously, realizing that since this world has a very poor understanding of nutrition, he has to frame scientific concepts in terms of mana and magical energies for them to understand. Dominic asks Ian if it is true that the Elder Lord was an incredible knight in his prime, and Ian proudly confirms that he even served as a captain in the Imperial Army. Ian explains that while the Lord still trains on his own, it's nothing like when he was active, as a soldier's regime is beyond anything a normal person can imagine. Dominic inquires about the Lord's diet, asking if he kept his large portions despite training less. The head chef explains that senior servants confirm the Elder Lord's appetite has not changed at all since his younger days. The chef adds that the Elder Lord eats about 1.5 times more than a normal person, and wonders if that's why he has put on some weight recently. Dominic notes that the Lord eats large portions and eats meat for every single meal, which makes Ian realize something as well. Ian reveals that because the Elder Lord hasn't been feeling well lately, he has actually been eating even more meat on purpose to gain strength. Dominic's jaw drops in complete shock as he screams, asking if they are crazy and if the Lord is actually serious. The head chef points his finger and lectures Dominic, saying that everyone knows you must eat meat and fish when sick to gain strength and fight off illness. Dominic screams in exasperation, declaring that eating more meat is exactly what is making the Lord's condition worse. Dominic clutches his head, explaining that the Lord's high-purine diet wasn't an issue when he was active and constantly moving, but things changed entirely once he retired. Ian and the chef watch Dominic with confusion, whispering to each other, while Dominic walks off, cursing the massive dietary disaster he now has to clean up. Dominic stands tall and commands that starting today, the Elder Lord's table will no longer have red meat, fatty fish, shellfish, or alcohol. The chef and Ian scream in terror, asking if he's trying to get them killed. Dominic confidently assures them he will take full responsibility, adding that chicken, whitefish, and half portions of eggs are fine, leaving the head chef praying to God for forgiveness. Dominic grabs the head chef's hands in a desperate plea, calling out, "Head chef," as the chef looks at him in utter confusion. Dominic looks deep into the chef's eyes with intense determination, saying, "Trust me, my life depends on this too." Rain begins to fall, pattering softly against the lush green grass and the windows of the grand estate. As night falls over the Sinclair estate, a heavy downpour drenches the majestic building. A dark, towering silhouette stands dramatically in the doorway, bathed in a brilliant flash of light. Theodore gazes down with an intense, intimidating look, questioning, "This is my meal?" Standing tall and casting a long shadow, Theodore prepares to judge the healthy food placed before him. Theodore slams his fist on the table in disbelief as his son demands, "What is the meaning of this?" Theodore internally fumes, "The dinner I look forward to every day has no meat or whiskey?" A close-up shows the colorful array of vegetarian options on the table, with the narration noting that the selection looks highly unusual today. Theodore's daughter claps her hands in delight, exclaiming, "Oh, the colors are so beautiful, Father," while her brother agrees that the bright colors of the food look absolutely amazing. Caught off guard by his children's positive reactions, Theodore nervously laughs and says, "Really? Is that so?" before raising his glass, thinking, "I should try it for myself first." Taking a sip from his glass, Theodore realizes with a start, there's no wine today. His daughter sips her drink and comments, "This looks like pomegranate juice. The tartness really works up my appetite. Father, what do you think?" Swirling the red liquid, Theodore admits, "Not bad at all. A gentle acidity paired with the sweetness of seasonal fruit, with a hint of bitterness at the end." A description card reveals the benefits of the drink. Pomegranate juice is good for heart health and clear skin. Theodore highly praises it, noting that it has a complex flavor similar to high-quality wine. Wiping his mustache, Theodore turns his sharp gaze to the next dish, murmuring, "And next?" Dominic explains the appetizer from behind. Finely sliced mushrooms, asparagus, and broccoli, sautéed in olive oil, then simmered with fresh milk and heavy cream. Bowing respectfully with his hand over his heart, Dominic smiles warmly and requests, "Please, give it a try." Theodore lifts a spoonful of the creamy, steaming mushroom soup to his mouth. Theodore swallows the soup and his eyes widen in complete shock as he utters a silent, "Mm?" Seeing Theodore shake in silence, his worried children cry out in alarm, "Father? Father, are you all right?" Furious son points accusingly at the cooks, shouting, "You! What did you do to his food?" leaving the head chef sweating and trembling in absolute terror. Theodore raises his hand to stop them, asserting quietly, "That's enough." Theodore chews slowly, deeply impressed as he thinks, "A rich, nutty flavor fills my mouth, and this texture, it's so soft and velvety." A helpful recipe card details the nutritional values of the mushroom soup with asparagus and broccoli, showing that it aids digestion, prevents arteriosclerosis, and boosts immunity. Theodore is amazed by the richness of the dish, realizing that simple vegetables can create such a deep and intense flavor. Theodore gives Dominic a cold, lingering look and says, "You're not bad." Dominic swallows nervously, thinking, "If I don't satisfy you, you'll have my head, right? You're really scaring me here." Dominic claps his hands together, announcing, "Next is the main course," while feeling relieved that everything has gone smoothly so far. A maid wheels in a cart holding 3 large silver dome platters under the watchful, anxious eyes of Dominic and the head chef. The siblings look down at their covered dishes with anticipation, eager to see the main course. Theodore places his hand on the silver dome of his platter, ready to unveil his dish. Lifting the lid, Dominic presents the dish, cod steak seasoned with 5 different spices. The platter is revealed to contain a beautifully grilled, shimmering cod steak garnished with lemon slices, asparagus, and green herbs. A scroll details the incredible health benefits of the cod steak, highlighting how it recovers fatigue, boosts energy, improves heart and bone health, and aids liver function. Theodore observes the fish steak, wondering, a fish steak, huh? Is the outside fried? It looks so crispy, as he cuts into it. Taking a bite, Theodore is instantly struck by an explosion of flavor, thinking in utter amazement, the inside is so soft and juicy. How can it have a texture like this? Theodore begins to shake with emotion once again, causing his children to look at him with deep concern and murmur, "Father." Clenching his fists at the table, Theodore declares, "That's it, I can't take it anymore." Well then, Theodore's face lights up with a radiant, blissful smile as he cheerfully says, "Let's eat, it's been a long time." Before long, the plates on the table are completely clean, leaving nothing behind. A satisfied silence fills the dining room as Theodore lays down his fork on the empty plate. Crossing his arms with a look of ultimate satisfaction, Theodore declares, "This is quite satisfying." Dominic lets out a huge sigh of relief, thinking, "I'm still alive. Completely avoiding fatty meats was the right decision," before Theodore suddenly shouts, "But!" Theodore points and says, "We still don't know if this will actually help my condition," before calling out to his knight, Ian. With the dark purple aura flaring around him, Theodore commands, "Don't let our guest wander around this massive castle tonight. Make sure he doesn't leave, not even a single step." Ian salutes, responding, "Understood, my lord," while Dominic screams in panic as guards grab him, thinking, "Oh, damn it." Dominic is comically carried away over the shoulders of two burly knights, looking completely helpless and exasperated. Outside, the heavy rain continues to pour down over the Grand Sinclair estate, washing over its stone walls. Rain droplets run down the large, arched window of the quiet castle corridor. Back in his dark bedroom, Theodore sits up in bed, coughing softly as the sound of rain echoes through the night. Sitting up in bed, Theodore sweats nervously under the cover of night, anxiously wondering how long this endless night will last. Lying back down on his pillow, Theodore tells himself that backing down now would completely ruin his reputation, deciding close-up of Theodore as he closes his eyes, trying to drift off, but suddenly sensing a change. Theodore marvels at how incredibly comfortable his bed feels tonight, noting that while it has felt like pure torture lately, tonight is completely different as a soothing blue light envelops him. Floating peacefully in a glowing, bubble-filled blue light, Theodore relishes the amazingly soft and cozy sensation of his body relaxing. Floating weightlessly, Theodore reflects on his dinner, realizing that he ate his fill and yet feels wonderfully light and not bloated at all. Theodore recalls his usual heavy diet of meat and alcohol, represented by two fierce, roaring lions, but admits that tonight's light meal of fruits and vegetables felt absolutely perfect. Lush green leaves shimmer brightly against a dark background, representing the fresh, natural energy of the food. Lying serenely on the green grass between two giant sleeping lions, Theodore realizes that just as animals live in harmony with nature, meat and vegetables must work together to balance the body. With a peaceful smile on his face, Theodore admits to himself that he has been far too stubborn about his dietary habits. A finger is held up in a beautiful rose garden as a brilliant purple and blue butterfly lands gently on it, with Dominic marveling at how free it is. Dominic gazes with calm curiosity at the gorgeous butterfly resting on his fingertip. Dominic sits in a wheelchair being pushed by Ian as the butterfly flutters away ahead of them. Dominic points toward the sky, dramatically telling the knight that he wants to go over there and fly alongside the free butterfly. A close-up shows Ian trembling and sweating with absolute rage, trying to contain his frustration. Ian explodes in anger, telling Dominic to move himself since he has his own hands and feet, while Dominic yells back that he was ordered not to take a single step and complains about how frustrating it is when everything is out of reach. Dominic rages, explaining that it has already been a week since the Elder Lord went into closed-door training without even giving him permission to return home, which is why they are stuck in this situation. Trembling with deep-seated irritation, Ian bites his lip and forces himself to continue pushing the wheelchair. Ian pushes Dominic in his wheelchair along the paved pathway outside the grand estate under the bright sunshine. As they walk, Dominic asks Ian what the point of closed-door training is, and Ian explains that enlightenment is required to break through to the next realm, making closed-door training the best way to avoid distractions. Dominic realizes it sounds just like the cultivation novels he knows and eagerly asks Ian how long such training usually takes. Ian calmly closes his eyes and explains that it depends on the person, taking anywhere from a few hours to several years, which leaves Dominic screaming in absolute shock. Sweating in sheer panic, Dominic bites his fingernails, terrified that he might be trapped at the estate for years, while Ian follows behind with a silent, completely drained expression. A gust of wind blows green leaves across the courtyard path as the quiet Sinclair mansion stands tall under the clear sky. Ian looks down in surprise as Dominic slumps over in his wheelchair with a dark shadow of utter despair over his face. Looking back at the estate, Dominic points out that there was no specific order keeping him physically confined to the castle, and that he has already written a comprehensive meal plan for the head chef anyway. Dominic turns to Ian and argues that as long as he doesn't actually run away, that should be more than enough. A close-up of Ian shows him sweating and completely dumbfounded as he processes Dominic's flawless loophole logic. Sunlight shines brightly over the elegant castle towers, with a text box marking the transition to that afternoon. Dominic holds an official stamped parchment scroll stating that the village chief of Evergreen is permitted to return home, but adds that someone from the castle will visit every week to collect detailed meal plans and recipes for the Lord. Hearing that he will receive monthly gold in exchange for faithfully carrying out his duties, Dominic beams with a bright, victorious smile and enthusiastically shouts, "Yes, my lord!" Dominic internally celebrates, realizing this whole ordeal has basically turned into a highly lucrative one-week business trip. Ian stands before Dominic holding a suitcase, telling him to pack his things because it's time to go, while Dominic notes how slippery Ian is. Dominic points at Ian's bag, asking what is with the suitcase and where the knight is planning on going. Ian simply replies, "Evergreen," prompting Dominic to carry his own suitcase and skip along happily, thinking they're just traveling to his village. Dominic's cheerful face instantly freezes into a state of absolute horror and shock as the realization hits him. With a dark, terrifying purple aura flaring around him, Ian menacingly reveals that the Elder Lord ordered him to personally watch Dominic in case he tries to run away, leaving Dominic to curse the slippery bastard. Dominic and Ian walk along the dirt path carrying their luggage, with Dominic putting on a cheerful face while Ian maintains a stern, watchful gaze. Reaching the edge of the hill, Dominic happily points out Evergreen, right by the sea, reminding Ian for the dozenth time that it is a coastal fishing village. Dominic turns around in surprise as someone suddenly calls out his name from behind. A muscular, bald villager carrying a rolled-up straw mat runs over with a huge, ecstatic grin, shouting that the kid is back and safe. The bald man immediately points and orders Dominic to get over and help them, leaving Dominic and Ian standing in complete bewilderment. With a panicked face, the villager screams that the devil's hand has appeared in the sea, while Dominic stands there completely clueless. Ian gasps in absolute terror, sweating as he screams, "Devil's hand?" while Dominic sweat drops, wondering why he is the only one who has no idea what they are talking about. Dominic asks if the devil's hand has grown out of control, and the villager clarifies that a massive swarm of turtles has appeared and laid their eggs on the beach near the village entrance. Dominic looks completely deadpan and exasperated, asking what on earth they are talking about. Ian looks skeptically at Dominic, asking how he can be the village chief of a fishing village and not know this, to which Dominic sighs and explains that he isn't actually a fisherman and never wanted to be the chief in the first place. The villager looks back and explains that the devil's hand is actually a notorious sea plant cultivated by farmer turtles. The villager describes the plant as more of a giant sea tree that grows up to 3 times the height of an adult, blocking fishing boats from leaving and growing back in just a few days even when cut down, as dark, creepy hand-like silhouettes reach up through the ocean waters. The villager continues his explanation, shouting in frustration that the aggressive farmer turtles chase all the big fish away from the coast, constantly leaving the fishermen empty-handed. Ian points out that farmer turtles usually avoid beaches where humans live, but the villager sheepishly admits there is a catch. The bald villager laughs boisterously, explaining that when the village was founded, he was tricked into signing the land deed and had no idea the turtles would return every few years, leaving Dominic and Ian completely dumbfounded by his carelessness. The trio stands atop a grassy cliff overlooking the ocean, with Ian carrying his suitcase while Dominic looks out in curiosity. Looking down, they observe that a massive swarm of farmer turtles has gathered this time, growing a dense forest of nearly full-grown devil's hand seaweed beneath the water. Dominic comments that the sea looks peaceful enough and questions what the big deal is, prompting Ian to tell him to look much closer. Dominic squints his eyes, peering intently at the sparkling blue water below the cliff. Ian frantically points out that the terrifying black silhouettes of the devil's hand are growing everywhere beneath the surface. Dominic tilts his head in confusion and asks if it's just seaweed, leaving Ian completely taken aback. Ian insists that it is the notorious devil's hand, but Dominic casually explains that back where he's from, they simply call it seaweed, questioning why Ian is judging it so harshly. Looking at the giant patches of seaweed growing along the rocky shore, Dominic happily notes that it's growing incredibly well and would make a perfect bowl of soup. Ian and the villager look absolutely horrified and disgusted at the sheer suggestion of eating the notorious devil's hand. Dominic drools slightly, looking genuinely confused as to why they wouldn't want to eat something so delicious. Ian flatly states that they shouldn't eat it because it's called the devil's hand, while the bald villager blankly stares in agreement. Dominic smiles playfully and asks Ian if he wants to try some, leaving the proud knight sweating in absolute terror and disbelief. Walking ahead, Dominic and the villager happily chat about how delicious Dominic's cooking is, leaving a traumatized Ian standing frozen in the background. Sweating profusely, Ian stares blankly ahead, anxiously wondering if the two of them have completely lost their minds. Entering a cozy wooden home, Dominic happily notes that it has been a long time since he was last here, while Ian looks around the kitchen with curious eyes. Dominic proudly comments on how well organized the village kitchen is, taking credit for running it in the past. As Dominic hangs up his coat, Ian holds up a fresh bundle of seaweed, asking him what on earth they are supposed to do with it. The villager scratches his head and apologizes for storing it incorrectly, but Dominic is thrilled to find that the seaweed has dried perfectly. Turning to the villager with a bright smile, Dominic explains that having the seaweed dried like this is actually much better for what he has planned. Dominic drops the dried seaweed into a bowl of water to soak, explaining that dried devil's hand actually develops a much richer umami flavor. Brimming with confidence, Dominic rolls up his sleeves and prepares to start cooking. Standing proudly behind the kitchen counter, Dominic licks his lips, ready to show off his culinary expertise. Dominic swiftly begins his preparations, mincing garlic on the cutting board and chopping green onions while the firewood burns bright in the hearth. He heats up a pot over the open fire, sautéing fresh clams, soaked seaweed, and minced garlic together in a splash of oil. Inhaling the delicious steam, Ian is instantly mesmerized, thinking that he has never smelled anything so savory and appetizing before. Dominic suddenly turns around, catching Ian off guard and causing the embarrassed knight to quickly look away in a fluster. Smiling warmly, Dominic reflects on how exhausting it is to make traditional Korean seasonings from scratch, but feels it is entirely worth it to see people enjoy his food. Dominic pours a generous amount of freshly washed rice into a wooden bowl to prepare for cooking. Watching Ian out of the corner of his eye, Dominic notes how the knight is desperately trying to pretend he doesn't care while constantly stealing glances at the food. Determined to humble the proud knight, Dominic washes the rice and prepares to pour the starchy rice water directly into the soup pot, prompting Ian to scream in shock. Ian furiously demands to know why Dominic is pouring dirty wastewater into the soup, but Dominic angrily fires back that clean rice water is the golden rule for making a rich broth. Dominic points aggressively and lectures the knight, explaining that rice water is packed with starch, lipids, and vitamins that bind flavors, remove fishy odors, and cut bitterness. Overwhelmed by Dominic's scientific culinary knowledge, a sweat-dropping Ian admits he doesn't fully understand, but asks if it's really that good. Washing the dishes, Dominic softly speaks to Ian, noting that, unlike other arrogant nobles, the knight does not look down on commoners. Dominic adds that Ian even acknowledged his hard work as the head chef at the Lord's castle, which touches the stiff knight. Putting down a plate of fresh, bright red kimchi, Dominic playfully points out that Ian is simply far too stiff and formal. Dominic sets down a steaming hot bowl of freshly cooked white rice on the wooden dining table. Dominic proudly presents the completed meal, a comforting spread of warm rice, seaweed soup, seasoned greens, fresh kimchi, and fried eggs. Ian stares down at the steaming, aromatic bowl of seaweed soup, swallowing hard as he struggles to resist the temptation. The bald villager bursts into the dining room carrying a plate of freshly fried fish, happily joining them for the delicious meal. Ian looks down at the table in deep contemplation, trying to summon the courage to take a bite of the forbidden sea plant. Stealing his resolve, Ian takes a bite of the soup and his eyes instantly bulge in absolute shock at the mind-blowing burst of flavor. Shaken by the incredible taste, Ian questions if this dish is truly made from the devil's hand, while a detailed scroll lists the immense health benefits of clam seaweed soup. Unable to control himself, Ian desperately dumps a whole bowl of hot white rice directly into his soup. With his body moving completely on its own, Ian frantically stirs the rice into the savory broth and shovels a massive spoonful into his mouth. Dominic smirks with absolute satisfaction as he watches the proud knight completely lose his composure and greedily devour the meal. Dominic asks with a grin if the food is good, while the villager happily holds out his empty bowl for seconds, leaving Ian completely defeated by Dominic's legendary cooking. Dominic serves a bowl of rice to the bald villager, who asks what they should do with the seaweed, or rather the devil's hand, noting that they will have to pull it out by the roots if the knights help drive away the farmer turtles. Dominic lets out a wide, mischievous grin, showing his sharp fangs, telling the villager to wait. Dominic holds his chin with a sly smile, reminding the villager that he previously admitted the plant actually tastes good. Ian continues to eat his meal with his mouth full and a highly conflicted expression, while the bald villager looks on in surprise. As a carriage travels along the path near a patch of dandelions, a voice wonders if they really have to stop at this particular spot. The carriages overlook a beautiful, sunny coastal village, as the grandfather tells his companion not to judge the place so quickly by its small appearance. The grandfather warmly explains that the small fishing village might thrive in time, adding that every client matters to a merchant guild of their size. The grandson scratches his head and smiles in agreement, accepting his grandfather's advice to learn to value every single customer. Looking up at the clear blue sky, Dominic's voice notes that the name of the seaweed is indeed a bit misleading. The bald villager smiles and waves enthusiastically at the arriving grandfather, asking if the old man is finally here. The bald villager boisterously slaps Dominic on the back, declaring that he handed the annoying responsibilities of being the village chief over to him, much to the grandfather's amusement. The grandson presents sacks of rice from their carriage, and Dominic eagerly agrees to purchase the entire lot. Dominic winks playfully with a bright smile, asking the merchants if they have eaten yet. A streaming, savory bowl of seaweed clam soup is presented to the grandfather, who looks down in confusion and asks what the black stuff is. The grandfather holds his bowl as the grandson greedily slurps his soup in the background, with the grandfather encouraging him to try it to help him relax. Cheeks stuffed with food, the grandson ecstatically urges his grandfather to try it, praising the incredibly deep flavor that surpasses any seafood stew he's ever eaten. Taking a spoon of soup, the grandfather's eyes widen in absolute shock as he realizes the rich, deep taste is not coming from the meat, but from the black seaweed itself. Swallowing the soup, the grandfather realizes his sharp merchant instincts are screaming at him. The grandfather asks Dominic and the bald villager if there is another name for this mysterious seaweed they've never heard of before. Upon hearing it's called the Devil's Hand, the grandfather gasps in shock at the notorious name, but the grandson instantly raises his hand and eagerly offers to make a deal to buy it. The grandfather yells in surprise at his grandson, Anton, who passionately explains that since exotic foods like monster meat are popular in the capital, the delicious Devil's Hand will easily find buyers. Anton looks at his grandfather with absolute confidence and sparkling eyes, stating that he sees massive business potential in the seaweed. The grandfather stares blankly in shock before sighing and smiling in defeat at his grandson's unstoppable enthusiasm. Putting a warm hand on Anton's shoulder, the grandfather yields to his determination, giving him permission to try selling the seaweed his own way. Suddenly, Dominic claps his hands together loudly, drawing the startled attention of both merchants. With a terrifying dark purple aura flaring around him, Dominic licks his lips and sinisterly wonders how much seaweed soup he should whip up since they have plenty of ingredients. A few days later, the scene transitions to the magnificent, sprawling castle of the local lord under a bright blue sky. A distressed commoner with tired eyes lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh. Walking through the busy town, the man anxiously worries that his wife has been completely drained of energy since giving birth, barely eating and unable to produce milk for their newborn. The worried man suddenly stops and sniffs the air in surprise, catching an incredibly delicious aroma nearby. He turns to see Anton standing high on a pile of wooden crates, shouting through a megaphone to offer free samples of a new dish. Anton loudly advertises the soup made from the Devil's Hand, describing it as a highly nutritious sea vegetable that farmer turtles eat to recover after laying eggs. A bright announcement declares that the healthy seaweed soup is absolutely perfect for pregnant women and new mothers. The worried father stands in absolute awe, his eyes wide as he listens to the incredible health benefits of the soup. Clutching a wooden box containing the seaweed, the man walks home with a look of immense hope and anticipation. Returning home, the man warmly presents the box to his blonde wife holding their baby, excitedly explaining that he bought something highly recommended for new mothers. The man reassures his wife, mentioning that the seller even taught him exactly how to cook the seaweed soup. Back in the bustling marketplace, Anton continues to boisterously pitch his dirt-cheap seaweed packages, which come with free perilla oil. Anton turns around in surprise as a loud voice suddenly calls out to him from the crowd. The father from before runs up to Anton in complete ecstasy, slamming a gold coin down and frantically ordering 3 more sets because his wife has finally recovered her strength and is producing plenty of milk. As a clamoring crowd of eager townspeople rushes to buy the seaweed, a thrilled Anton smiles brightly, realizing his stock is selling out and that he needs to secure more from Dominic immediately. Looking into a bubbling pot, Dominic's shadow-cast face wears an evil grin as he chuckles about his wild success. Dominic jumps in pure celebration in front of the raging fireplace, ecstatically shouting that he can finally make tteokbokki now that they can afford expensive rice. Dominic grins peacefully to himself, highly pleased that the seaweed sold so well and that Anton wants to keep buying the Devil's Hand to secure their livelihood. Ian walks into the kitchen and quickly alerts Dominic that his pot is boiling over, causing the chef to panic. Looking at the spicy steam filling the room, Ian notes the strong aroma, and Dominic happily invites the knight to try a bite of his freshly made tteokbokki. Sitting at the table, Dominic cheerfully prepares to dig into a delicious bowl of red, spicy tteokbokki, while Ian drools slightly beside him. The kitchen door is suddenly slammed open as a messenger knight in a blue cape loudly summons Dominic, the village chief of Evergreen, to hear a command from the Elder Lord. A group of elite blue-cloaked knights surrounds the dining table, while unfazed Ian continues sipping his food and Dominic freezes with his fork midair. The messenger knight unrolls a large scroll and proudly declares that Count Sinclair, the lord of these lands, has officially issued a new decree. The messenger knight unrolls a large scroll and proudly declares, Dominic, village chief of Evergreen, you're ordered to report to Sinclair Castle immediately. I've sent soldiers to escort you. With an imposing aura, the messenger's scroll delivery carries a dark, non-negotiable warning. Refusal is not an option. The messenger knight indicates his companion, stating, I've also been ordered to assist this man, while Dominic looks on, sweating nervously. Sir Hanover, with a bit of red sauce still on his mouth, stares blankly in utter confusion and asks, what the hell is happening? As Sir Hanover approaches the messenger knight, the soldier explains, how could mere soldiers like us not what's on the Lord's mind? We just follow orders. Sir Hanover asks if he said anything else, to which the knight responds, he said not to waste a single second. Sir Hanover puts his hand to his chin, deep in thought, murmuring to himself, Turning to the messenger, Sir Hanover says, take him, but I'm going with you. A shocked Dominic exclaims, huh, Sir Knight? I thought you were going to help me get out of this. After all the meals we've shared, I'm not leaving you. Sighing at Dominic's dramatic reaction, Sir Hanover reassures him, seriously, if there was a real problem, he would have punished you on the spot. He must need you for something urgent. Get ready to move. Dominic looks down at his plate of freshly cooked tteokbokki and pleads, wait, at least let me finish this one big bite. But Sir Hanover sternly commands, you can cook more when we get back. Get up, now. Dominic is left staring blankly in absolute shock and disbelief at what just happened. Dominic looks down at the completely clean plate with only a smear of spicy red sauce remaining and thinks he finished the whole thing himself. Just how fast did he eat? A scenic shot reveals the magnificent Sinclair Castle standing proudly under a bright clear blue sky filled with flying birds. Dominic and Sir Hanover walk through the grand polished hallways of the castle, their footsteps echoing through the quiet corridor. Dominic trembles with anxiety, his joints creaking from nervousness as he walks alongside the calm and composed Sir Hanover. They finally enter the grand audience chamber, where the local lord, Count Patrick Sinclair, sits high on his throne, flanked by armored guards. A formal profile card introduces the man on the throne as Count Patrick Sinclair, current lord of the estate. Dominic quickly prostrates himself on the carpet, crying out, my lord, we humble ourselves before you, while Sir Hanover kneels respectfully beside him, and the Count calmly instructs, lift your head. Still bowing on the floor, Dominic grinds his teeth and silently vows, damn it, just wait, see if I ever make you tteokbokki, while Sir Hanover looks down at him with a subtle, amused smirk. Holding a bunch of dried black seaweed, Count Sinclair looks down at Dominic and says, I heard you're the one supplying this. Count Sinclair holds up the seaweed, a menacing purple aura flaring behind him as he asks, so those farmer turtles really go crazy for this devil's hand? Dominic's heart hammers in his chest as he sweats profusely, thinking, is that the truth? Honestly, I've never actually seen a farmer turtle eat it, but if he's bringing this up now, did he catch on to my false advertising? Count Sinclair presses the issue further, holding the dark seaweed as he reiterates, so you're saying farmer turtles go crazy for this devil's hand? Is that the truth? In a moment of internal panic, a white screen highlights Dominic's secret confession. To be honest, I've never actually seen a farmer turtle eat it. Dominic tries to calm his racing thoughts, reasoning, but it's true that seaweed is great for mothers who just gave birth. It's not like I'll get fined for false advertising, not in this world anyway. Time to play it cool. I can beg for my life later. Stealing his resolve, Dominic answers respectfully, yes, Elder Lord. Back in my hometown, we have a custom of cooking devil's hand for new mothers. Count Sinclair's expression softens into a warm smile as he replies, I knew you were special ever since my father put you in charge of his meals. Your homeland is truly unique. The Count then turns to Sir Hanover and asks, Sir Hanover, what's your assessment of this man's character, leaving Dominic completely startled? Terrified of what the knight might say, Dominic desperately whispers, tteokbokki, in Sir Hanover's direction, while Sir Hanover remains silent with a bead of sweat on his face. Sir Hanover delivers a glowing review of Dominic, stating, "He has a deep understanding of ingredients. He sees the world without prejudice." He continues to praise him, saying, "And has the guts to stand his ground regardless of rank. He balances ideals with reality to solve problems. My lord, you'll find him useful no matter where you place him." Count Sinclair laughs heartily at the feedback, exclaiming, "To think the picky Sir Hanover would offer such praise. Good, very good. If his character is that solid, there's nothing more to discuss." The Count then shares some happy news, smiling as he says, "The Countess recently gave birth, a healthy baby boy." Dominic's eyes go wide in surprise, and he quickly offers his congratulations. "Wait, really? Congratulations, Elder Lord." However, Count Sinclair sighs deeply, holding his forehead in distress, and explains, "But it's been 2 days since the birth, and she hasn't left her room. That's why I'm asking." He looks directly at the chef and says, "Dominic, I'm putting you in charge of her postpartum care starting today. What do you say?" Dominic is left utterly stunned, thinking, "Wait, this is a sudden job offer?" Thrilled by the incredible pay, Dominic celebrates in his mind against a beautiful sunny sky. "Yes, I want 1 gold coin a week," and joyfully declares, "My golden age has finally begun." Suddenly, a loud, angry shout echoes from behind a set of grand double doors. "I said I'm fine." Outside the room, Dominic and Sir Hanover listen as a maid pleads, "My lady, please, just listen, if you could just hear him out for a second." But the Countess furiously yells back, "I don't need it. I'm already losing my mind, and now what, a cook? Are you mocking me?" Dominic scratches his cheek in disappointment, sweating as he sighs, "Uh-oh, there goes my weekly pay," while Sir Hanover looks on with a complicated expression. As a maid walks out of the chambers, Dominic turns to Sir Hanover and asks, "Is he always this touchy?" They walk down the corridor together as Sir Hanover replies, "I've never served him directly, so I'm not sure, but he wasn't usually like this." Dominic agrees, "I don't get it either." Another worried maid with red hair approaches them, apologizing. "I'm sorry, the Countess has no appetite at all. I'll explain things to the Lord." Dominic stands thoughtfully, processing the situation. The Elder Lord said she hasn't left her room since giving birth 2 days ago. She's eating the seaweed soup, so she has an appetite. Why the sudden change? Suddenly, a realization hits Dominic like a bolt of lightning, and he gasps, "Wait!" A dark screen marks the transition to his memories of the modern world. Now that I think about it, back in my past life, when my sister had her baby, a flashback shows a modern medical building in Korea with a green cross logo and the sign reading Daejeong Postpartum Care Center. Dominic recalls a close-up of a person squeezing and drinking from a pouch decorated with pumpkin illustrations. In the flashback, the past version of Dominic looks shocked as he encounters his sister, asking, "Jung-min, is that you?" The sister, looking extremely puffy and swollen after childbirth, smiles warmly while holding her pumpkin juice pouch and replies, "What's wrong? Don't just stand there. Come in." Below, the caption reads, "After giving birth, my sister was so swollen I barely recognized her." Coming back to the present, Dominic's eyes narrow as he solves the mystery, thinking, the Countess locked herself away after 2 days too. If that's the case, the maid is startled when asked about the Countess's condition, prompting the question, "The swelling is severe, isn't it?" And she nervously responds, "How did you know?" Sir Hanover explains the physiological reason to Dominic, noting, "Your body is trying to store water and fat to produce breast milk. To fix this quickly, your diet is more important than anything else." Stealing his resolve, Dominic confidently places a hand on his chest, ready to take on the challenge of helping the Countess. The maid turns back to Dominic and Sir Hanover, politely requesting, "Please, wait just a moment." As the maid enters the room, Dominic ponders the Countess's lifestyle, realizing that a noblewoman who stayed still during pregnancy and ate nothing but greasy, salty foods with the Elder Lord would naturally suffer from severe swelling. Sir Hanover looks sideways at Dominic and admits, "When I spoke of you to my men, I focused on your strengths rather than your true nature." Sir Hanover looks back at Dominic with a serious expression and says, "I expect you to use those strengths to solve this problem too. Good luck." Dominic is left staring blankly, completely stunned by Sir Hanover's sudden words of encouragement. Dominic teases Sir Hanover in his mind, wondering, "What, did you two suddenly become best friends?" "Oh, I get it. It's because of the tteokbokki, isn't it?" Sir Hanover sighs in embarrassment and tells Dominic, "Forget I said anything," while Dominic grins triumphantly beside him. The grand doors creak open as Dominic and Sir Hanover prepare to enter the Countess's private chambers. The maid opens the door wider, nervously inviting them in by saying, "Please, come inside." Sitting on her bed, the visibly swollen Countess looks down and reluctantly says, I'll trust you since you're the one in charge of my father's meals. Observing her, Dominic notes how serious the situation is, thinking to himself that her self-esteem must be at rock bottom due to her changed appearance. Looking at her anxious expression, Dominic hopes she isn't suffering from postpartum depression, which would make recovery a real disaster. Clenching her dress, the Countess expresses her frustration, stating that they've been restricting her food but the weight won't come off, wondering if she should cut back even more. Dominic firmly advises against starving, saying, "No, you have to eat," causing the Countess to look up in absolute shock. Furious, the Countess sits up and shouts, "Is this hack mocking me? I need to lose weight and you're telling me to eat more?" To which Dominic calmly responds, "That's exactly why you must eat." Dominic confidently explains, "Just like you'd take medicine from a healer when you're sick, what I'm giving you is no different from medicine. Just stick to what I told you and your body will be back to normal in no time."
Dominic locks eyes with the Countess, pleadingly asking her, "Promise me."
He emphasizes his terms, saying, "Promise you'll follow the diet I prescribed exactly." Looking away with a sigh, the Countess reluctantly agrees. "Fine, it's not like I have any other choice but to trust you." The Countess extends her hand towards Dominic to seal their agreement. Dominic enthusiastically shakes her hand, declaring with a bright smile, "You got it, consider it done." Under a warm, glowing sunset, Dominic looks out at the sky and whispers, let's see." Looking out of a grand castle window with Sir Hanover, Dominic tells him if we manage her diet properly, the postpartum edema should clear up in no time. The problem is, I can't just give up on high nutrition meals. Sir Hanover asks if the Countess's situation is more difficult than the former lord's, and Dominic replies, Not exactly. The former lord's condition was actually more severe. Gout is a very clear-cut disease." Dominic recalls how the former lord's obvious pain actually made planning his diet much simpler because when a problem is clear, the solution is just as obvious. Walking down the hallway, Dominic explains that the Countess's case is tricky because while reducing her swelling, he also needs to boost her energy levels for breastfeeding. Sir Hanover suggests a simpler approach, asking, "Is it impossible to take it one step at a time?" leaving Dominic briefly puzzled. Sir Hanover explains his training philosophy, saying, "When I train, I'm always focused on the next move. You reach your goal by crushing the obstacles right in front of you, one by one. I'm curious if this problem is any different." Dominic realizes that Sir Hanover is right and that he was overcomplicating something simple. With a confident smirk, Dominic decides the end goal remains the same. For now, I need to focus on the edema. Please remember that I am not a medical professional. This is not medical advice or a diagnosis. Always seek care from a healthcare professional. Dominic grins, thinking to himself that Sir Hanover is actually useful for once. A scenic shot of Sinclair Castle on a bright morning as birds chirp in the clear sky. The Countess sits at the dining table, looking nervously at the breakfast tray that has been set before her. The tray features a healthy Korean-style breakfast menu, including brown rice with black beans, seaweed soup with perilla seeds, warm salad, braised lotus root and peanuts, dried grilled fish, and seasoned radish. The maid relays Dominic's instructions, stating he also gave strict orders that you must drink this after every meal. The maid places a steaming cup on the tray, explaining it's boiled pumpkin water. From now on, you're to have it after your 3 meals, and 1 more glass right before you go to bed. A small scroll highlights that boiled pumpkin water reduces swelling and flushes out toxins. Taking a deep breath, the Countess looks at her meal and says, "I have no idea what any of this is, but I'll try it. I'll find out soon enough." The Countess takes a sip of the food while the maid stands by, waiting anxiously for her reaction. Looking slightly disappointed, the Countess asks, "Emily, is something wrong with my tongue because I haven't eaten in days? It tastes a bit bland." Emily explains, "Well, they said it was seasoned lightly on purpose. Apparently, it helps the swelling go down faster." Hearing this, the Countess responds, "Really? Well, if that's the case." A close-up shows the completely empty plates and cup on the tray, indicating the Countess finished everything. Feeling full and satisfied, the Countess yawns and says, "Whew, first full meal in days. I'm getting sleepy. Maybe I'll take a nap." Emily nervously interrupts, "About that, after eating, you need to go for a light walk. Just 30 minutes will do," causing the Countess to look highly annoyed. Walking outside the grand castle, the Countess sighs in compliance, thinking, "Fine, I did say I'd do whatever you ordered." A close-up shows the Countess taking persistent, tiring steps during her post-meal walk. Out of breath and drenched in sweat, the Countess returns as Emily says, "I've prepared the water. You should wash up first. And also," prompting the Countess to ask, Is there something else?
Bowing politely, Emily delivers Dominic's final instruction. He said taking a long bath isn't good for you. He said not to soak for more than 10 minutes. Gripping her blanket in absolute agony and frustration, the Countess grinds her teeth, cursing Dominic for ruining the only pleasure she had left. A maid stands waiting inside the grand chambers, informing the Countess in a robe that it is time for her massage. The maid nervously wrings her hands, warning the Countess that the process is going to be incredibly painful, but she must endure it. Clothed in a simple robe with a towel wrapped around her head, the puffed-up Countess tearfully warns that Dominic will pay dearly if she doesn't make a full recovery. From deep within the castle walls, a thunderous scream of frustration echoes out into the bright morning sky. Dominic! In the kitchen, Dominic freezes mid-bite, his eyes widening in pure shock with a piece of sausage held on his fork. Dominic, Sir Hanover, and the head chef spin around in surprise at the kitchen table as someone speaks up asking, "Oops, did I interrupt something?" A handsome nobleman in an elegant blue attire smiles warmly as he steps into the room, holding a fork of his own. He smiles playfully, asking them, "Mind if I have a bite?" Under the starry night sky, the beautifully illuminated castle dome shines as a memory begins. We first met at a banquet after my father returned from the capital. In a brilliant flashback of the grand ballroom, the young count is captivated the moment he lays eyes on a beautiful blonde noblewoman. Looking back at him with sparkling, wide eyes, the elegant woman shares the same silent realization. It was love at first sight for both of us. The two dance gracefully together in a warm, glowing embrace, completely lost in each other's presence. The Count's father laughs boisterously as he retires, handing over the castle estate right before the Count's wife becomes pregnant, making his life busier than ever. Resting his head tenderly against his wife's pregnant belly, the Count recalls how hectic life was, yet he never neglected her, believing their love would endure forever. But the sweet memory suddenly shatters like broken glass as the Count tearfully wonders why his wife is constantly furious with him, questioning what he could have possibly done wrong. Shoveling food into his mouth and drinking heavily, the Count desperately vents to his sweat-drop Dominic and Sir Hanover about his wife's wild mood swings, lamenting that they wouldn't understand. Dominic processes the Count's complaints, reasoning that the Countess is simply stressed due to the upcoming ceremony, though he recalls her temper was indeed fierce when they first met. Closing his eyes in deep thought, Dominic realizes there's still one crucial question he needs to ask. The Count looks dejectedly at his large wooden beer mug as Dominic addresses him, saying, "My lord." With a warm, gentle smile, Dominic asks, "You still love her, don't you?" Sir Hanover casts a skeptical sideways glance at Dominic, muttering under his breath, "Is that supposed to be a comfort?" Time quickly passes, and the highly anticipated day of the blessing of birth ceremony finally arrives under a brilliant blue sky. Shading his eyes from the bright sun, Dominic gazes out in awe at the massive crowd, while Sir Hanover remarks that the entire nobility is gathered for the Count's newborn son. A massive congregation of finely dressed nobles chatters and murmurs excitedly outside the steps of the Grand Cathedral. Walking through the busy crowd, Dominic and Sir Hanover overhear a passing noblewoman whisper, "I wonder how much she's actually changed." Two malicious noblewomen whisper mockingly behind their fans, eagerly anticipating the Countess's public humiliation since it has only been 4 weeks since she gave birth. Sweating at the sheer toxicity around them, Sir Hanover asks if this is a holy blessing or a backstabbing session, to which Dominic replies that some people simply have different priorities. Sir Hanover turns to Dominic, questioning how he can remain so incredibly relaxed when it has only been 3 weeks since the diet began. Dominic confidently retorts that as long as she followed his instructions, there won't be any issues, prompting Hanover to tease him for shifting the potential blame. With absolute conviction, Dominic states that he trusts the Countess's strong will, explaining that rapidly accumulated swelling can be shed just as quickly with the right diet and habits. Sir Hanover stares intensely at Dominic, searching his face for any sign of doubt. The massive silver bells of the cathedral begin to chime loudly, echoing Dominic's words of trust across the brilliant sky. Standing tall at the altar, the high priest in white and gold robes joyfully announces, "Now let the blessing of birth ceremony begin." An aerial view of the cathedral staircase shows guests taking their places as the priest proclaims that life is sacred and asks everyone to join in blessing the child. From their spot in the courtyard, Dominic and Sir Hanover watch the sacred ceremony unfold. Spreading his arms wide, the high priest welcomes the parents as the massive wooden cathedral doors creak open, revealing a brilliant heavenly light. The cathedral choir and nuns close their eyes, lifting their voices in a beautiful angelic melody. Step by step, the Count and Countess walk side by side into the cathedral, their footsteps echoing softly on the stone floor. Sir Hanover stands quietly in the crowd, keeping his eyes fixed on the altar where the family silhouettes stand before the priest. Hanover's gaze softens as he recalls Dominic's words. I believe in her. The golden light shines brightly as Dominic's unwavering belief echoes. The Countess has the will to see this through. Standing proudly beside her husband and cradle-carrying her newborn baby, the Countess looks absolutely radiant, having fully restored her elegant and slim pre-pregnancy figure. The surrounding noble crowd gasps in sheer amazement, whispering in disbelief about how perfectly slim she looks despite her previous severe swelling. The gossiping noblewomen stare in absolute horror and shock, one of them clutching her fan so tightly that it begins to crack. The happy Count smiles warmly beside his beautiful wife and child as the crowd begins to wonder if she used some form of powerful magic. Sir Hanover analyzes the situation intensely, knowing for a fact that the village chief has absolutely no magical talent or mana affinity. Hanover watches Dominic from the corner of his eye, realizing there is something deeper at play. Looking at Dominic's peaceful, smiling face, Hanover ponders where Dominic's incredible conviction and the strange weight behind his words truly come from. Tightly gripping his cane with a clenched hand, Sir Hanover looks down in silence, whispering to himself, Standing outside the cathedral, Dominic firmly states his decision. I've decided. As soon as this party's over, I'm heading straight to Evergreen. Sir Hanover looks back in astonishment, questioning, so you're giving up the dietary manager position for the Countess? You were jumping for joy at the thought of 1 gold coin a week just a moment ago. Walking ahead, Dominic replies, I can manage her diet through weekly letters, just like I do for you, Elder Lord. My pay might take a hit, but I don't have a choice. Dominic wears a wicked grin with gold coins shining in his eyes as he declares, because right now, I can practically smell the money. Inside the brilliantly lit banquet hall, high society nobles gather under the grand chandeliers, laughing and whispering amongst themselves as the celebration continues. As the beautiful, newly slim noblewoman stands conversing happily with other guests, a sharp-eyed noblewoman with long red hair watches her closely from a distance, clutching her wine glass. Sweating slightly, the red-haired lady observes the crowd's reaction, her brow furrowing in deep suspicion as she processes the incredible transformation. The maid approaches the red-haired lady, saying, I'm back, my lady. The lady immediately turns and asks, Did you find anything out? The maid reports, Yes, apparently someone's been managing their meals professionally. Surprised, the lady repeats, Meals? So a chef? The maid clarifies, Not exactly. They said he's a specialist who provides customized meal plans. The lady quickly asks, Not a chef? Then who is he? Where's he from? To which the maid answers, He's the village chief of a small town within the Sinclair County. The red-haired lady contemplates, A village chief? It'll be hard to bring him here, won't it? Her maid thoughtfully adds, If the Sinclair family protests, it could damage your reputation. Gripping her teeth, the lady grumbles to herself, Right, if I cause a scene for no reason, I'll just end up as the center of gossip again. Looking out at the party with a serious expression, the red-haired lady resolves, But I can't just give up. As she gazes at the radiant, slender Countess Sinclair, the lady thinks to herself, If Countess Sinclair managed to bounce back like that, then surely he can fix my body too, right? Back in the peaceful countryside, a light breeze spins the windmill as the warm morning sun shines down over the village. Rubbing his sleepy eyes, a drowsy Dominic opens the door and grumbles, Who's here this early in the... Standing at the doorway is a bald, muscular elder with a thick mustache, who laughs and boisterously says, Wipe that look off your face. Is seeing me really that bad? The elder walks inside and asks, Aren't you curious about what happened in the village while you were gone this past month? Dominic replies indifferently, Not really. You said you'd send word if anything happened, but I never heard a thing. The elder tosses a heavy, bulging sack onto the table and says, Here, open it up. Confused, Dominic asks, What's this? The elder laughs heartily. Ha ha ha, the money from the seaweed sales finally came in. The Anton Trading Company sent it a few days ago. This is your cut. Check it for yourself. Dominic stares in utter amazement at the glittering gold coins filling the sack. Surprised by the business name, Dominic asks, Wait, the Anton Trading Company? Did Anton go independent from his grandfather? The elder chuckles. Yeah, he said his client list grew faster than expected, so he made the call. That kid's got some real guts. Smiling warmly, the elder expresses his heartfelt gratitude. It's all thanks to you. We've made way more than we ever did from just fishing. Thank you, Dominic. Dominic smiles gently and humbly replies, I couldn't have done it alone. How could I harvest, wash, dry, and pack all that seaweed by myself? This was a team effort by our Fishing Village Association. Turning back to the table, Dominic says, "Oh, perfect timing. Could you take a look at this?"
Dominic unrolls a large, detailed map across the wooden table as the village elder leans in to get a closer look. The elder's eyes widen in sheer bewilderment as he asks, "What the hell is this, Dominic?" Leaning over the table with a clever smirk, Dominic confidently asserts, "Won't ever have to worry about food again." Looking out at the quiet coast, Dominic notes, "The water here is shallow, and since the coastline curves inward like this, the waves are incredibly calm." The elder agrees, explaining, "Exactly. Because of that, fishing boats can pull their nets through here. It's basically a dead zone. It's just a place for brats to splash around." Admiring the landscape, Dominic smiles. "Wow, this location is actually perfect." The elder turns to him skeptically, asking, "All right, Dominic, what kind of crazy idea are you cooking up now?" With an ambitious grin, Dominic explains, "We're going to sell a back-to-nature concept. Total relaxation is the main draw, a place to heal both body and soul." Dominic proudly announces his grand vision. In short, we're building a luxury resort, leaving the elder and the nearby villagers utterly speechless and confused. Under the brilliant blue sky, the sounds of intense construction begin to echo throughout the peaceful coast. Sir Hanover stands near the construction site, looking absolutely flabbergasted by the chaotic activity surrounding him. Gazing at the bustling beachfront construction, Sir Hanover mutters in disbelief, "What kind of madness is this?" Villagers shout words of encouragement, "Come on, we can do this," as they hammer heavy wooden planks together. Holding a measuring rod high in the air, a worker calls out, "Let's make it official." Workers swing their mallets with immense power, securing the wooden frames tightly with loud, rhythmic strikes. Meanwhile, Dominic humorously tests a pair of wooden drumsticks, tapping them together repeatedly with a serious yet playful look on his face. Sir Hanover approaches Dominic from behind, asking dryly, "What are you doing here?" Dominic turns around with a bright grin, replying, "What does it look like? I'm supervising the construction project." Skeptical, Sir Hanover sighs, "That's the weirdest supervising I've ever seen. Hurry up and get ready. You're coming with me." Confused, Dominic stops tapping his sticks and asks, "Where are we going?" Sir Hanover glances back with an annoyed and weary look, waiting for Dominic to stop playing around. A narrator announces the transition to the next phase of events. Let's move on to the next agenda. At a formal meeting, a stern village representative speaks up. "Since we're preparing clothing gifts for the Lord's newborn son, it's best if we don't pick the same colors. We shouldn't overlap with other villages." One village chief declares, "In that case, our village will prepare green clothes," prompting another to say, "All right, then we'll take blue." This immediately sparks a loud dispute as a third representative shouts, "Hey, you bastard, I already said I wanted blue, you senile old geezer." As the chiefs continue to bicker, with one yelling, "Hey, put out that damn cigarette before you talk, it reeks," Dominic sighs in exasperation and mutters, "Let's just draw straws if we're going to fight over colors." A maid enters the room to announce, "Village chiefs, the soldiers are currently conducting field training outside. After the Lord finishes his speech, he plans to dine with all the troops." Hearing this, one of the chiefs eagerly exclaims, "Oh, then we should head over there right now." The village chiefs quickly leave, with one saying, "Getting to see the Lord up close, we're really lucky today," and another agreeing, "Exactly, I agree." Dominic stands behind, thinking in disbelief, "Lucky? They're making a huge fuss just to see some guy's face." Walking out of the room with a deep sigh, Dominic grumbles to himself, "What a pain. Whatever, I'll just hang out in the back." Observing the training field, an onlooker clicks their tongue, remarking, "Tisk tisk, look at them. Their training is so half-hearted. They look exhausted and they just started." An elder chief gestures dramatically, complaining, "Good grief, is there even a war going on? This isn't training, it's just a casual stroll." While another joins in, declaring, "Back in my day, it was way worse." Dominic looks back at them, amused by their criticism. As Mickey, a red-haired soldier clad in heavy silver armor, violently vomits a colorful rainbow stream, a caption humorously asks, "Explosive diarrhea?" Running across the dusty training grounds, Dominic calls out to the sick soldier, "Hey, when did the vomiting start?" To which a panting Mickey weakly replies, "Huh? Me?" Dominic supports the exhausted, sweating soldier as he asks, "Any other symptoms? Nausea, chills, diarrhea, fever, anything like that?" Mickey weakly answers, "I've been nauseous since this morning, and now I've got the chills. My stomach, too. It feels like it's being twisted in knots." Mickey suddenly clutches his stomach, his cheeks bulging as he prepares to gag and vomit once more, leaving Dominic to watch him in deep concern. A large spiked speech bubble exclaims in complete disbelief, "Since this morning?" Inside the bustling castle kitchen, the head chef looks back over his shoulder with a cheerful grin and says, "Oh, you finally showed up?" The chef enthusiastically welcomes him, saying, "I heard the village chiefs were meeting today, so I figured you'd swing by. You're going to help me out, right?" But Dominic quickly cuts him off, asking, "Forget that for a second. More importantly, chef, mind if I take a quick look at your kitchen?" The chef waves him off, saying, "Sure, go ahead. But everything's fine here. Business as usual. Looking for something specific?" As Dominic suddenly gasps in realization, "Aha!" Dominic points directly at a large wooden crate filled with chilled oysters on a bed of ice, confidently declaring, "Found it." Dominic asks, "Chef, these shellfish, they came in yesterday's shipment, right?" To which the chef reassuringly replies, "Yeah, that's the one. Don't worry, they're not spoiled. We packed them in plenty of ice yesterday, so they're still cold and fresh." Dominic shakes his head and asks, "That's not the problem. Did anyone eat these oysters yet?" To which the chef thoughtfully replies, "Oh, yeah, I gave a little bit to Mickey earlier." The chef fondly recalls, "That kid is obsessed with seafood. Every time a shipment arrives, he shows up pretending to help just so he can get a special portion," imagining Mickey happily eating a raw oyster. Dominic visualizes a beautifully prepared raw oyster and thinks, ceviche, raw seafood mixed with lemon juice, vegetables, and spices, it's usually considered a luxury dish. Holding an oyster shell, Dominic reflects, since this region is right on the coast, people here eat this way more often than those inland. But that's the problem. Raw food is exactly where disasters like this start. The chef protests, "Hey, I told you it's not spoiled. I checked it myself." But Dominic confidently asserts, "It's tainted, chef." Dominic deadpans, "It's called shellfish flu," leaving the veteran chef sweating in sheer shock as he gasps, "Shellfish flu?" The chef bursts into boisterous laughter, teasing, "Wow, look at you, Mr. Village Head, knowing about shellfish flu and all? You've been studying hard, haven't you? But here's the thing, shellfish flu only happens in the winter. It's the wrong season for that." The chef's expression darkens as he warns Dominic, "I'm holding back because we're old friends and we've worked together a lot. But if you walked into any other chef's kitchen and started this kind of drama, you know exactly what would happen. You'd better think this through carefully." Unfazed, Dominic holds open an oyster shell and firmly states, "Shellfish flu doesn't just vanish because it's summer." Dominic explains, "In this heat, people are usually too scared to eat raw shellfish because it spoils fast. That's the only reason you don't see this illness much in the summer." Dominic points to the oyster and presses the chef, "Have you seen Mickey? He's vomiting his guts out. He's got explosive diarrhea, the chills, and his whole body aches. And it all started this morning, right? Right after he tasted your food?" The horrifying realization hits the chef as he screams, "What? Are you serious? Is he really that bad?" Dominic adds, "None of the other soldiers have symptoms, only Mickey. And since the symptoms just showed up this morning, that means it takes 1 to 2 days for the incubation period. Now, chef, think carefully. What do you think the real cause is?" A cold sweat runs down the chef's face as the gravity of his massive oversight completely sinks in. Staring down at his trembling hand, the chef panics in his thoughts. "Normally I wouldn't sweat it, but we're in the middle of training the Black Dragon Squad, and the Lord himself is coming for an inspection. This isn't some amateur drill." The chef imagines his entire life falling apart, panicking. "If this drags on, I'm definitely going to get fired. If I lose my job, how will I pay for my daughter's education? She's as cute as a little bunny. And what about my retirement savings for me and my wife? Wait, even worse, my wife will literally kill me." Clutching his head in pure despair, the chef cries, "Hold on, this is getting worse. What if the whole squad collapses because of rotten ingredients and I end up in prison? I'm doomed." When suddenly Dominic places a hand on his shoulder and offers, "I'll help you," prompting a shocked, "What?" Dominic smiles with a highly confident, devious smirk, knowing he has successfully gained the upper hand. With tears of gratitude and hope welling up in his eyes, the chef stares back at Dominic, seeing him as an absolute lifesaver. Rolling up his sleeves, Dominic confidently orders, "Lunch is coming up soon. Let's hurry and change the menu," causing the sweating chef to stammer in surprise. But the chef looks on anxiously as he reflects on the situation, thinking, training in this extreme heat is done under the assumption that this is a real battlefield. Food is no exception. On a raised platform, a stern nobleman in a regal blue suit holds a document, overseeing the training with a commanding and critical eye. Dominic gets to work, declaring, "All these oysters infected with shellfish flu have to be thrown out immediately," causing the chef to clutch his head in panic and protest, "Wait, why throw away such good stuff? Just cook them until they're done." The chef looks completely dumbfounded, sweating as he asks, "Huh? Cook them? These oysters that already have the flu? Dominic explains with a silly illustration of a sick oyster in a hot pot. Look, when people have the flu or a cold, we give them hot food to make them sweat it out so they get better, right? Well, shellfish flu is the same. Just boil them long enough or cook them thoroughly and the virus will be wiped out. The chef is easily convinced, happily exclaiming, "Aha, that actually makes sense. I knew I could count on you, village head. When it comes to ingredients, nothing escapes you." As the chef busily writes down the advice, Dominic looks on with a sweat drop, thinking to himself, shellfish flu is actually norovirus, a type of food poisoning virus. If heated above 85 degrees C for 90 seconds or more, the virus dies instantly, but if I start spouting numbers like that, he'll just call me a fraud again, won't he? The chef peers into the oyster crate and asks, "So, what are we doing with these oysters?" To which Dominic replies, "Something we can turn into a cooked dish." Dominic looks up, smiling with absolute confidence as he prepares to lead the culinary transformation. Under the blazing hot summer sun, the green leaves of the trees rustle as loud, energetic shouts of "Ha!" echo across the training camp. Rows of sharp, polished steel spears are raised high into the bright blue sky during training drills. The elite soldiers stand in perfect rows on the training ground, thrusting their spears and shouting "Ha!" as the Lord observes their movements from the balcony. The Lord suddenly stops, his eyes widening slightly as a savory, mouth-watering aroma wafts up to the balcony, prompting him to wonder, "What's that smell?" Inside the hot kitchen, oysters coated in rich egg batter are placed into a sizzling pan with plenty of oil. The head chef busily flips the sizzling oysters, repeating Dominic's instructions. Coat the oysters in egg and pan-fry them with plenty of oil. We're making pancakes. Dominic barks out orders to the busy kitchen staff, instructing, "Squeeze the lemons and mix it with sugar. They need that refreshing kick to beat the heat." A young kitchen helper carrying a crate of raw chickens approaches and says, "Chief, I was going to shred the chicken for a salad," to which Dominic instructs, "We have to use this up. Can we turn it into a soup instead?" Dominic smiles warmly, extremely pleased with how smoothly the kitchen is running under his direction. Dominic lays out the final touch of the plan, saying, "We can't get enough rice for all the soldiers on such short notice, so let's use flour noodles instead," as a blonde female officer watches him intently from the doorway. The beautiful blonde officer stares closely at Dominic, her expression cold and analytical as she observes his masterful command of the kitchen. Back on the hot, dusty field, the exhausted soldiers focus on thrusting their heavy spears under the blistering sun, shouting "Ha!" with all their remaining energy. However, the incredibly rich and savory aroma of freshly pan-fried oyster pancakes drifts over the training ground, instantly making the soldiers' mouths water and completely breaking their concentration. Looking over the elite soldiers as they finish their rigorous training drills, the Lord takes in the savory aroma drifting from the kitchen and wonders, "What's for lunch? It smells incredible." Pleased by the wonderful scent, the Lord turns to his knight and commands, "Good, halt the training, let's eat. And remember, the soldiers eat first." Upon hearing that it is finally time to eat, the exhausted soldiers erupt into jubilant cheers, chanting "Food, food!" with tears of excitement in their eyes. As the soldiers eagerly head to lunch, the Lord watches them thoughtfully, reflecting on the nature of leadership and reminding himself that loyalty isn't free. Looking down at his troops with a calm yet determined expression, the Lord understands the weight of the responsibility he carries on his shoulders. The Lord realizes that to truly earn his soldiers' trust, he must seize every single opportunity to connect with his men on a personal level. A simple yet beautifully prepared feast is laid out on the table, featuring a fresh vegetable salad, golden oyster pancakes, and a piping hot savory chicken soup. The head chef nervously trembles as he apologizes for the simple spread, but the Lord warmly reassures him, saying, "It's fine, we're in the middle of training after all." When the Lord inquires about the appetizing yellow dish, the sweating chef explains, "This yellow dish is made by mixing chopped oysters and vegetables, coating them in egg wash, and pan-frying them in oil." The chef presents the beautifully golden oyster pancakes, explaining their incredible nutritional benefits, including their ability to speed up recovery and boost stamina. Pointing to the steaming red chicken soup, the chef warns that it is quite spicy, presenting it as a powerful, stamina-boosting meal filled with nutrients. Taking his first bite, the Lord's eyes widen in sheer delight and surprise as he inwardly exclaims, "Wow, this is amazing!" Nearby, the soldiers eagerly gobble down the spicy chicken soup, sweating and teasing each other as they find themselves unable to stop eating. Hearing his men talk about the heat, the Lord looks down at his bowl with curiosity, wondering, is it really that spicy? The Lord carefully dips his spoon into the rich red broth, blowing on it before taking a mouthful of the steaming soup. The moment the broth hits his tongue, the Lord's eyes bulge from the intense heat, realizing it is a completely different kind of spice from the tteokbokki he had tried before. Despite the blistering heat, a wave of pure ecstasy washes over the Lord as he beams happily, thinking that the spicy soup is thoroughly cleansing his soul. Letting out a satisfied sigh, the Lord praises the meal enthusiastically, saying, "Phew, this is great, really great," while the head chef looks on with deep relief. Overwhelmed by the Lord's high praise, the veteran chef closes his eyes as silent tears of absolute gratitude and relief stream down his face. From a distance, Dominic looks out at the satisfied soldiers and the Lord, feeling immensely relieved and glad that everyone is thoroughly enjoying the meal he helped prepare. Standing beside his companion, Dominic admits with a gentle smile that he was initially worried the strong, spicy aroma might be too overwhelming for some people. The blonde knight approaches Dominic and asks, "Do you really intend to hide your contribution from the Lord?" To which Dominic casually replies, "Why wouldn't I?" The knight looks at Dominic seriously and points out, "From what I've seen, you and your village desperately need the Lord's support. Shouldn't you use this chance to claim a reward?" Hearing this, Dominic covers his mouth and chuckles slyly, teasingly telling the noble knight, "Sir Knight, you're way too naive." Dominic casually gestures with his hand as he explains, "When the achievement is this obvious, do I really need to brag about it?" leaving the knight completely puzzled. Dominic wears a knowing, highly confident smirk, while the blonde knight stares at him in silent disbelief, unable to decipher his true intentions. The head chef rushes over to Dominic with tears of joy, happily shouting, "We made it through thanks to you. The Lord even gave us a special bonus." Shaking the ecstatic chef's hand, Dominic asks with a playful, devious grin, "Oh, you're not going to keep it all for yourself, right?" To which the chef quickly replies, "Of course not. My entire share is yours." The chef explains that while he would gladly give Dominic the entire bonus, he must fairly distribute the shares meant for the hard-working kitchen staff. The head chef smiles warmly and winks, deeply appreciating Dominic's understanding and maturity regarding the kitchen staff's hard work. Suddenly, a sophisticated butler with silver hair approaches Dominic and commands, "Dominic, village chief of Evergreen, follow me." Adjusting his monocle with professional poise, the butler advises, "You'll be meeting the Lord shortly. I suggest you fix your clothes." Dominic bows politely and replies with a calm, cooperative smile, "Understood." As Dominic turns to follow the butler, a sudden dark, scheming expression washes over his face, leaving the blonde knight watching him in utter confusion. With a wildly sinister and triumphant grin, Dominic gloats in his thoughts. "See? I told you I didn't need to brag." Seeing Dominic's ridiculous, self-satisfied smirk, the blonde knight's brow furrows as a vein of pure irritation pops on his forehead. While the knight silently fumes, thinking, "I really want to punch him," they arrive at the grand golden castle where Dominic politely greets the Lord. Kneeling respectfully before the throne, Dominic listens as the Lord praises him, saying, "Right, I heard the soldiers would have suffered greatly if you hadn't stepped in. I've lost count of how many times you've helped me now." The Lord smiles warmly and acknowledges his expertise, saying, "Shellfish flu, was it? Thanks to you, it was a delicious meal." Dominic humbly replies, "You're too kind," while silently analyzing that since the Lord eats the chef's food daily, he must have realized immediately that someone else prepared the meal. Licking his lips in satisfaction, the Lord looks at Dominic with high regard, thinking, "But to already have confirmed the shellfish flu, he's good at his job." Leaning forward from his throne, the Lord delivers a shocking proposition, asking, "If I were to offer you charge of the castle's kitchen and internal affairs, would you refuse?" Bowing low, Dominic respectfully declines the offer, pointing out that the castle already has a talented chef and revealing that his village is currently staking its future on a new business project. After Dominic explains that he cannot afford to leave his village right now, the Lord touches his chin in intrigue and inquires, "A business project?" Recognizing the perfect opportunity to pitch his idea, Dominic's eyes sparkle with excitement as he thinks to himself, "Now's the time." Dominic speaks with solemn gravity, explaining, "Evergreen, your territory, has always been a barren fishing village with no local specialties." Showing a vivid memory of the ocean, Dominic notes that while things improved recently by selling seaweed, that prosperity will vanish once the farmer turtles leave, forcing him to rack his brain to prevent starvation. Listening intently from his throne, the Lord asks, "I see, and this business you're pushing for is the result of that effort?" To which Dominic confidently confirms, "Yes, my lord." Amused and deeply impressed by Dominic's dedication to his people, the Lord chuckles softly and says, "You've been doing my job for me. I'm impressed." The Lord generously declares, "Very well, I'll support whatever you have planned," while Dominic bows respectfully, secretly thinking, "I don't need a handout, Count." Dominic and the veteran chef kneel respectfully on the carpeted floor of the throne room as the Lord gazes down at them from his golden throne. The beautiful blonde knight stares in complete shock, uttering, "Ha?" while the Lord looks back at Dominic with a surprised and highly intrigued expression. As the warm sunset glows over the quiet village streets, a faint, pained voice groans, My stomach.
The master of the Rondo Merchant Guild, Rondo, grimaces in annoyance while puffing on his pipe, muttering to himself, "Damn, it hurts." Slamming his fist in rage, Rondo fumes that if Anton hadn't started selling seaweed, he would still have an absolute monopoly on the food trade, shouting that some teenager is about to steal his entire market share. Rondo furiously roars at his subordinates, "You useless bastards, don't just stand there, give me a solution." The three hired thugs sweat nervously under their master's intense wrath, exchanging glances as they try to come up with a plan. When one thug suggests wrecking Anton or torching his warehouse, Rondo snaps in anger, demanding if they think he is a common criminal, and reminding them that he retired from the mercenary life to become a legitimate merchant a decade ago. Sweating nervously, the brown-haired henchman reports, "Guildmaster, word is Anton's success is all thanks to the village chief of a small place called Evergreen. They say that chief is the one who figured out how to make that seagrass edible." Rondo puffs his pipe thoughtfully, listening intently before coldly asking, "And?" The thug confidently proposes that they can easily force the pathetic fishermen into submission and seize the highly profitable seagrass trade for themselves. Hearing this ruthless but clever plan, the other two thugs stare in awe, thinking to themselves, "Genius!" A sinister smile spreads across Rondo's face as he grins wickedly and mutters, "Good." Surrounded by a terrifying, burning aura of absolute malice, Rondo commands with a wicked grin, "Take everyone. Go find that chief and break him." Back in the grand throne room, the Lord asks in surprise, "You don't need my help?" To which Dominic firmly replies, "Yes, my lord, I don't want a handout." As Dominic explains that he is asking for an investment instead of a charity handout, the Lord touches his chin in deep curiosity, repeating, "An investment?" Bowing his head respectfully, Dominic proposes, "Yes, if you provide the seed capital, I'll return it with a significant profit." The Lord stares blankly for a brief second before his face scrunches up as he desperately tries to hold back a burst of laughter, letting out a muffled "p." Throwing his head back, the Lord laughs heartily, exclaiming that Dominic is far more interesting than he thought, and marveling at the fact that while everyone else tries to pick his pockets, Dominic wants to make a deal and promises a return on investment. The Lord smiles and says that if it is a deal, there must be clear terms, to which Dominic confidently responds, "Of course. Please look over these documents," as he reaches inside his vest. The professional silver-haired butler steps forward, taking the rolled parchment documents from Dominic and respectfully presenting them to the Lord on his throne. As the Lord carefully reviews the documents, he chuckles, saying, I see. You want the money, but you don't want me meddling. Is that it? Good. I like your guts." The Lord generously declares, "I'll give you what you want. I'll order the financial officer to release the funds. The repayment term is 10 years, while his loyal butler quickly notes down the commands. Dominic beams with sheer joy and victory, his eyes sparkling, while the blonde knight stands behind him looking absolutely stunned and sweat-dropping at how easily he secured the deal. The Lord smiles warmly at Dominic, encouraging him by saying, "Don't let me down." Kneeling down and bowing his head completely to the blue-carpeted floor, Dominic shouts with absolute gratitude, "Thank you for your immense grace, my lord." The Lord watches Dominic with a warm, approving smile, silently thinking to himself, "Yes, perhaps." As seagulls fly over the beautiful harbor village of Evergreen, the Lord's thoughts continue, hoping their territory might finally get a landmark that even the snobbish capital nobles will envy. While back in the village, a voice screams in disbelief, "Is this a dream or what?" The old village chief stares at the contract with sparkling, emotional eyes, crying out in pure joy. "The Lord is actually investing in our village? Kid, you really pulled off something huge." Dominic smiles wryly and points out, "You're holding the paper upside down," to which the embarrassed old man quickly replies, "Oh, am I?" Dominic happily declares, "Now that we have the funds, let's speed up the construction." And the old man enthusiastically agrees, laughing, Right, money was the only thing stopping us, but now we're set." Under the warm, colorful sunset sky, the villagers rejoice, proposing a feast to grill meat, drink, and celebrate, chanting, "Woo! Meat! Meat! Long live Dominic!" Meanwhile, a sinister figure wearing a black mask over his face rides a horse, looking down at the peaceful village of Evergreen from a high cliff as the sun begins to set. The horseman lowers his mask to reveal a wicked, cruel grin, chuckling maliciously, "It's been a while since we've had some real fun." As night falls over the harbor, a bright bonfire illuminates the village clearing where the villagers celebrate, with the old chief shouting, "Damn, I knew our Dominic was special. I really did." Holding his wooden beer mug high, the old chief laughs boastfully, declaring, "Dominic actually went out and secured all this investment for Evergreen. This all happened because I have a great eye for talent."
The other villagers laugh heartily and tease him, saying, "Old man, you just dumped the job on him because you didn't want to learn how to read." To which the chief furiously protests, "No, I saw his potential with my dragon's eye." Dominic chuckles playfully and cracks a joke, asking, "You mean your dung eye?" Making the old chief roar in embarrassment. "Hey, you want me to shave your head?" Suddenly, a young villager stops mid-bite, hearing an unusual sound and turning his head in confusion as he mutters, "Huh?" Peering into the dark grassy field, the young villager points out, "What's that? Someone's coming," as a group of mysterious horsemen gallops towards him. As the armed, masked horsemen ride closer, the villagers realize they look like trouble, with one of them complaining in annoyance, "Who the hell interrupts a barbecue?" Heavy footsteps of the armed intruders stride confidently onto the grassy clearing, stepping right into the middle of the village feast. Instead of being frightened, the buff and battle-hardened villagers stand up, cracking their knuckles and glaring menacingly at the intruders as one of them demands, "You want to die?" Dominic sweats nervously as he watches his villagers, inwardly reflecting that these men always had gentle smiles after fishing, and wondering, were they always this savage? The noble blonde knight steps forward to join the defense, saying, "I'll join you," which makes the old chief grin widely and cheer, "Oh, Sir Knight, I feel much safer now." The knight turns to tell Dominic to leave the clearing and hide, but is completely interrupted by Dominic waving and cheering loudly, "Go get him, Sir Knight!" A vein of pure irritation pops on the blonde knight's forehead as he glares back at Dominic, who is safely hiding behind a giant rock and waving, grumbling, "Something about him is really annoying." The masked horsemen burst into the clearing with swords drawn, shouting, "Who's the chief of this place? Everyone on your knees! Eyes shut!" Drawing his weapon, the blonde knight calmly commands, "Take them alive. We need to find out who's behind this." And the old chief grins fiercely, responding, "Got it." With a powerful surge of energy, the blonde knight leaps forward, launching a swift and decisive attack against the incoming bandits. With a powerful strike, a bandit is sent flying off his horse, initiating a fierce clash in the dark. The old village chief and the blonde knight leap into action, delivering devastating blows to the invading bandits. Bandits look on in sweat-dropping shock as their comrades are easily overpowered, with one of them crying out in disbelief at how strong these supposed fishermen actually are. As the chaotic brawl unfolds on the grassy field, the bandits realize they are outmatched and desperately order everyone off their horses to fight back with lethal force. The battle-hardened villagers land brutal, consecutive punches right on the faces of the masked intruders. Another bandit takes a heavy, direct fist to the face, completely dazed by the villagers' terrifying physical strength. Amidst the chaotic fight, a villager yells to just knock the intruders out instead of killing them, leaving one of the hiding bandits to wonder if these fishermen hired elite mercenaries. Safely hiding behind a giant rock, Dominic happily munches on a meat skewer, thinking that watching his villagers fight is far more exciting than any school fight he ever saw. Unaware of a masked bandit sneaking up behind him, Dominic happily resolves to prepare even better meals and snacks on time for his hard-working villagers. The bandit suddenly grabs Dominic from behind and holds a sword to his throat, screaming that he found him, while Dominic shrieks in utter terror. The bandit holds Dominic tightly, looking at a sketch in his hand and confirming with a grin that Dominic looks exactly like their target. Holding Dominic hostage, the bandit bellows at the top of his lungs, commanding everyone to halt or their chief will die. The old chief and the other villagers turn around in shock and anger, shouting at Dominic for failing to hide safely. The captor demands that the villagers drop their weapons and put their hands up immediately. The bandit threatens the villagers to comply with his demands, completely unaware that the blonde knight is stealthily approaching behind the rocks. The blonde knight pulls up his black mask and holds a finger to his lips, silently gesturing for the villagers to stay quiet. Moving with incredible speed and agility, the knight leaps forward to sneak up on the hostage-taker. The knight nimbly vaults over the rock, drawing the attention of the tense villagers. Looking highly distressed, the villagers clench their fists and beg the bandit to release Dominic, promising to do whatever he wants. Touched by the deep loyalty and concern of his villagers, Chibi Dominic sheds comic tears of gratitude. The bandit furiously barks at the villagers to shut up and surrender immediately, while the knight closes in on him from behind. One of the defeated bandits on the ground tries to warn his leader that the knight has snuck up right behind him. The lead bandit gasps in surprise as he hears the warning, while Dominic quickly reacts to the sudden distraction. The blonde knight lunges forward with a determined expression to rescue Dominic. Sensing his defeat, the desperate bandit raises his sword to plunge it into Dominic, roaring that he will take the chief down with him. The villagers watch in absolute horror, screaming Dominic's name as the blade is about to strike. The blonde knight's eyes widen in sheer panic as he calls out in terror. In a flash of lightning-fast reflex, Dominic's hand reaches up and firmly grips the bandit's wrist, stopping the sword midair. With a massive surge of power, Dominic executes a flawless shoulder throw, slamming the heavy bandit forcefully onto the grassy ground.
Dominic stares blankly at his own hands in complete shock and disbelief, muttering, "Huh."
The old chief runs up in utter amazement, asking what kind of move that was, while Dominic's sweat drops and sheepishly replies that it was a shoulder throw.
Another villager praises Dominic for his impressive moves, leaving Dominic to wonder if he actually pulled off such a feat himself. As the bandit leader lies completely knocked out on the ground, Dominic begins to wonder if he might actually be some kind of martial arts prodigy. The villagers burst into hearty laughter, playfully asking Dominic to try the move on them, while the blonde knight watches him with a deeply contemplative and serious gaze. Staring intently at Dominic, the blonde knight reflects deeply on what he just witnessed.
The chief playfully locks Dominic in a headlock, while the knight observes closely, wondering if he just saw a surge of mana emanating from the young chief.
Recalling the moment Dominic grabbed the bandit's wrist, the knight is certain that mana had definitely moved in that very split second. Analyzing the incredible shoulder throw, the knight realizes that a powerful flow of mana had surged through Dominic's body during the execution of the move. In his mind's eye, the knight visualizes the immense power and technique Dominic displayed during the throw. Watching Dominic laugh and get teased by his villagers, the knight continues to observe him with profound curiosity. Sweat trickling down his cheek, the knight narrows his eyes, realizing the gravity of what he has discovered. As Dominic struggles comically in the chief's playful headlock, the knight smiles inwardly, deciding that he now has another compelling reason to keep a very close eye on the young chief. All the captured bandits are bound tightly with ropes in the village warehouse, as a villager identifies them as members of the notorious Rondo Merchant Guild. Anton explains that he was already worried because they had been loitering around their shops and wonders if they always resort to such dangerous methods. Anton angrily explains that the guild's reputation is absolute trash, known to do any dirty job for money, but he never expected them to resort to such a blatant robbery. The tied-up bandit leader sneers arrogantly, mocking them, claiming that they are bandits who don't take orders from anyone, let alone Rondo. The other tied-up bandits nod in agreement, sweat dropping as they play along to hide their true employer. A terrifying, dark smile spreads across Dominic's face as he leans in incredibly close, asking with a chilling voice if they truly don't know who Rondo is. Smiling menacingly, Dominic sighs and mentions that he was actually planning to let one cooperative person walk free, leaving the captive bandits sweating in sudden regret. Desperate to save his own skin, one of the tied-up bandits instantly screams out at the top of his lungs, claiming the reward for himself. Captive young man eagerly yells out, "Me!" hoping to be chosen to cooperate. Desperate to save their own skin, another captive cries out, "I'll talk, pick me," while the angry leader next to them grumbles in frustration, accusing them of breaking their word about being bandits. Dominic looks at the captive who had a change of heart, amusement in his eyes, and remarks on how quickly they abandoned their tough act. Dominic points his fingers playfully like a gun and chuckles, saying, "That makes you even more of a prick." The captive bandit stares in absolute horror and shock as Dominic dramatically declares, "You're out." The other captured bandits watch with starry eyes, cheering yes, justice prevails, completely overjoyed at their comrade's elimination from the selection. Dominic looks at the remaining captives and calmly asks if there are any other volunteers to cooperate. A teary-eyed young captive bandit confesses that he has only been with the guild for 3 months and this was his first raid, begging for forgiveness and promising to turn his life around. Inspecting the young man's bound hands, the blonde knight notes that his hands are still soft and confirms that he doesn't seem to be lying. Dominic smiles warmly and tells the young bandit to follow them, while the knight gently guides him. Sniffling with comical tears of gratitude, the young captive looks back and cries, "Thank you!" A quiet night scene of the house under a bright full moon sets the stage for Dominic's detailed inquiry. Sitting at the table, Dominic reviews the information, asking, "So let me get this straight. The Rondo Merchant Guild gets cheap supplies because they run their farms for next to nothing?" To which the young man replies, "Yes, I don't know the details, but..." Holding a cup of warm tea, the young man sadly explains that the farmers are people who couldn't pay back their debts and that the guild seized their land through usury. Startled by the word, the blonde knight asks, "Usury? Isn't there a legal limit on interest rates in the Count's territory?" Dominic turns in shock and asks, "What? There's such a thing?" While the knight looks at him and confirms, "Of course there is." Pouting slightly, the young man mutters that the village chief only knows this because he is smart and can read, wondering how common folks like them are supposed to know about complicated things like the law. Dominic sighs in quiet contemplation, realizing that some things and people are the same no matter the world. Dominic asks what else the young man heard while at the Rondo Merchant Guild, and the youth reveals that they frequently raided small villages and shops to threaten and assault people. Gasping in shock, Anton covers his mouth, realizing with horror that the Rondo Merchant Guild was behind that particular incident. The blonde knight points out that they will need proof that Guildmaster Rondo ordered all of it, prompting the young man to nervously search his pockets, saying, "Oh, I don't know if this helps, but..." The young man holds out a piece of paper and explains, "We get promissory notes when we finish a job. Though I got this for a different task. It was issued under Guildmaster Rondo's name. Will this work?" Dominic, the knight, and Anton stare in wide-eyed, stunned silence at the ironclad evidence handed directly to them. A terrifying, scheming grin spreads across Dominic's face as he realizes they just hit the jackpot. The young youth sweat drops, looking completely bewildered by Dominic's sudden, suspicious-looking grin. Anton smiles and reassuringly tells the young man that there is such a thing as mitigating circumstances. Dominic smiles warmly at the boy, promising that their village will protect him until all of this is over. Comical tears stream down the young man's face as he is deeply moved by the village's kindness and protection. In a transition frame under the bright night sky, the young man is heard sniffling and crying in relief, saying, "Thank you, I'll live an honest life." In a grand courtroom, Guildmaster Rondo screams in absolute panic and fury, shouting, "This is unfair, Your Honor!" Standing bound before the judge, Rondo desperately protests his innocence, crying out, "This is all a setup. I didn't do any of it." From the spectators' gallery, observers look on in utter disgust as Rondo continues to lie despite the overwhelming evidence, muttering that he is beyond saving. Standing beside the blonde knight, Dominic calmly watches Rondo frantically plead, "I'm being framed, Your Honor." Glaring down from his high bench, the judge slams his hand down and booms, "Enough! You dare lie to the end despite all these witnesses and evidence?" The judge proudly announces the final verdict, passing judgment on Rondo, guildmaster of the Rondo Merchant Guild, for arson, assault, fraud, usury, human trafficking, extortion, and robbery, ordering all of his assets seized as payment. The judge fiercely roars that a portion of the assets will be used to compensate the victims and sentences Rondo to forced labor without possibility of pardon, commanding, "Take him to the Bailey Mines." Gripped tightly by the guards, Rondo's sweat drops in utter panic, crying out, "No, this can't be! What are those bastards I paid off doing?" From behind, the lord of the territory watches with crossed arms as Rondo is dragged away kicking and screaming, wondering if there are actually people taking bribes from such a contemptible person. Turning to the Lord, the judge bows and resolutely declares, "Yes, my lord, I will hunt them down and root them out," to which the Lord calmly approves. "Good." An official hands over a thick brown envelope containing the detailed list of the Rondo Merchant Guild's seized assets. Flipping through the documents, the Lord remarks that there is quite a lot to seize, ordering everything easy to liquidate to be put up for auction immediately to compensate the victims. Walking through the courtroom benches, Dominic and the knight watch the proceedings as the knight replies, "Yes, I'll start the auction right away." The blonde knight asks Dominic what his plan is now that the trial is over, and Dominic smiles confidently, replying that he is going to get as much as he can from the auction, especially the farm Rondo used for his ingredients. Surprised by the answer, the blonde knight asks, "A farm? Not the Merchant Guild?" Dominic explains that he needs that farm to launch the care center properly, leaving the knight sweat-dropping in confusion as he asks, "Care center? Didn't you call it a resort last time?" Not that I know what a resort is either. An official stands before the crowd gathered in the auction hall and loudly announces that the auction is about to begin, but adds that he has an announcement before they start. The official declares each person can only bid on 2 items in today's auction, instantly causing an uproar among the bidders who shout in disbelief. The official firmly explains that this is the count's decision, believing it is unfair for a few wealthy individuals to monopolize the seized goods, and advises everyone to exercise restraint. The bidders grumble in deep frustration, sweat dropping as they try to figure out what items they should focus on bidding for. Looking back over his shoulder, Dominic catches the eye of the Lord sitting in the back of the hall, who offers a subtle, knowing nod and a calm smile. Dominic smiles broadly and celebrates the count's decision, cheering, "Yes, nice call, my lord." In the grand courtroom, the clerk reads the list of items up for auction, beginning with the guild building, Rondo's residence, the manor, carriages, horses, and jewelry. Dominic desperately clasps his hands together and prays with all his heart that he will get chosen to bid on his desired farm, begging the heavens to pick him over everyone else. As his turn finally approaches, Dominic's eyes sparkle with excitement, and he determinedly declares, "All right." Dominic confidently points out that the bidding limit will keep the competition low, while other bidders in the hall nervously sweat and hope they are the only ones bidding. Dominic licks his lip and intensely prepares himself as the official announces the start of the auction. The official commands next item as workers carry out boxes and push a large object covered with a red sheet. The official pulls away the sheet to reveal a frilly pink gown, awkwardly explaining that it is a high-end dress Rondo kept for his personal taste. The crowd of bidders looks on with sweat drops of sheer awkwardness as the official announces the start of the bidding. Dominic whispers in disgust to the blonde knight, saying he wouldn't even take the dress if he were paid to do so. To Dominic's surprise, a smug, muscular man confidently raises his hand to place a bid on the dress. The burly bidder smiles proudly, boasting that he will give the high-end dress to his wife as a gift. Dominic and the blonde knight stare in sheer, sweat-dropping disbelief, unable to comprehend the bidder's taste. Dominic suddenly looks up with a bright, hopeful expression as the next item is announced. The clerk clears his throat with a loud ahem to command the room's attention. The clerk loudly reads the description of the farm, pointing out that it is surrounded by mountains. He explains that since the workers were victims of Rondo's illegal high-interest loans, they will all be sent home immediately. Two skeptical observers whisper that the farm will take forever to turn a profit due to the high cost of road construction and expansion. The blonde knight turns to Dominic and worriedly asks if he is truly planning on buying such difficult land. Dominic merely smiles with absolute confidence, proudly raising his paddle number 36. Two wooden mugs of foaming beer clink together in a celebratory toast. Gathered around a table in a bustling tavern, the villagers raise their mugs and congratulate Dominic on winning the farm at its starting price, calling it serious luck. Dominic laughs off their compliments, jokingly claiming that the heavens are simply rewarding him for being such a good guy. Anton leans in and curiously asks why Dominic bought that farm, wondering if he intends to turn it into a community farm. Dominic scratches his cheek and evasively replies that it is nothing special, while Anton hopes to get the first batch of whatever amazing crops are grown there. Dominic shifts the subject, asking Anton to source some seeds for him. Anton agrees and asks what kind he needs. Dominic places a piece of paper on the table, saying, "Here's the list." Anton reviews the document, noting that matching the right fertilizers for such a wide variety of seeds might take some time. Dominic surprises Anton by telling him that he has no need for fertilizers at all. Dominic proudly winks and declares that he is going entirely organic for his new crops. Anton tries to lecture Dominic on how farming works, but Dominic firmly corrects him, stating he is not a fisherman and knows plenty about farming. Dominic insists on his all-natural organic method, leaving the knight and Anton sweating in utter confusion about his plans. Anton agrees to deliver the seeds in 4 days, and Dominic happily asks if he can pay for them using seaweed and dried mussels. They clink their wooden mugs together once more, cheerfully shouting, "Then let's drink!" On the bumpy carriage ride to the farm, Dominic groans in severe motion sickness while the knight holding the reins points out that they didn't do this on purpose. Dominic looks utterly green and miserable, complaining that the rough ride makes no sense. The knight sighs with a slight tongue click, unimpressed by Dominic's dramatic groaning. The knight reminds Dominic that they were warned about the rough mountain road and tells him he shouldn't have drunk so much beer last night. As Dominic groans miserably, the knight calmly tells him to just hang in there. The carriage wheel spins along the dirt road and the knight jumps down to step onto the solid ground. Dominic lets out a tired sigh, carrying a massive backpack and looking exhausted with deep, dark circles under his eyes. Looking out over a beautiful valley, the knight notes that the land is officially called a farm for a very good reason. Dominic smiles and steps onto the dark, fertile soil, marveling at how rich and perfect it is for growing crops. Dominic immediately drops his bag by a campfire ring and suggests they handle the most urgent task first, leaving the knight to ask, "Urgent stuff?" Dominic grins mischievously and reveals that the most urgent task is making a hangover cure. Hanging a black cooking pot over the fire, Dominic tells the knight that the land isn't going to run away and invites him to eat. The water in the black cauldron begins to boil rapidly over the hot campfire. Dominic pulls out a glass bottle filled with a dark red liquid, saying that nothing beats it for a hangover soup. Dominic pops the cork off the fresh bottle of red liquid while the knight watches him with intense curiosity. Dominic turns back with a terrifying, scheming grin, chuckling menacingly as he prepares his special remedy. Pointing out the deep red liquid, Dominic explains that it is congealed ox blood, prompting the blonde knight to look incredibly green and ask in utter disgust, "Ugh, surely you're not planning to eat that?" Pouring the dark red blocks into the hot, bubbling campfire pot, Dominic calmly replies, "Well, some people just can't stomach it. I'll give you yours without the Sianji, Sir Knight." Rubbing his hands together excitedly and licking his lips, Dominic eagerly prepares to move on to the next step of his cooking process, declaring, "All right then." While the Seonji and organ meat simmer, Dominic takes pre-boiled ujoji greens and seasons them with soy sauce, chili paste, chili flakes, pepper, soybean paste, minced garlic, and ginger before tossing everything back in for a hard boil. Inhaling the delicious steam rising from the cauldron, Dominic smiles with sharp, eager teeth and exclaims, "Man, that smell is incredible. I feel better just smelling it." Enticed by the mouth-watering aroma, the blonde knight reluctantly changes his mind, standing behind Dominic and requesting, "That Seonji stuff, put some in mine too," leaving Dominic quite surprised. Gulping nervously as Dominic notes that Yangpyeong Haejeongguk isn't the same without Senji, the knight sweat drops and resolutely declares, "I'll give it a try." For the ultimate finishing touch, Dominic uses a pair of kitchen scissors to slice fresh, green Cheongyang chili peppers directly into the steaming pot. To accompany the hearty soup, Dominic scoops out a generous portion of hot, fresh, pot-cooked white rice into a bowl. The steaming Yangpyeong Haejeongguk is finally served, representing a miracle remedy for hangover relief, fatigue recovery, and anemia prevention, packed with protein, iron, and essential vitamins. Looking down at the massive cooking pot bubbling over the campfire, Dominic sweat drops and wonders, did I make too much? I've been cooking for those guys so long, I've started making huge portions without thinking. Shrugging it off with a cheerful hum and a lick of his lip, Dominic decides, well, if there's leftovers, we can just eat it tomorrow. Blowing gently on a steaming spoonful of white rice soaked in the rich, spicy broth, Dominic happily prepares to take a massive bite. Exhaling a warm puff of steam in pure bliss, Dominic sweats with satisfying relief and cheers, nothing beats Haejeongguk for a hangover. With fire blazing in his eyes, Dominic eagerly devours the soup, declaring that pizza, burgers, and cold noodles are nothing compared to a hot, spicy bowl of Haejeongguk, while the knight watches him in sweat-dropping silence. Staring at the delicious meal, the blonde knight gulps hard as his appetite gets the better of him. Stirring the spicy, red soup filled with seonji and bean sprouts, the knight hesitantly wonders if it is truly safe to eat, realizing he still has a long way to go to understand commoner life. Taking a deep breath, the blonde knight blows on a small spoonful of the hot broth and tentatively takes his very first sip. Suddenly, a loud voice booms from across the field, shouting, "There they are!" interrupting Dominic, who has his mouth completely stuffed with food. Turning around, Dominic and the knight spot a large crowd running toward them carrying tools, prompting Dominic to guess that they are the farmers who work on the land. Seeing the furious expressions and raised pitchforks of the approaching crowd, the blonde knight warily comments, "It doesn't look like we're very welcome." Charging fiercely across the dirt path, the farmers run forward, convinced that even though they escaped Londo, the new owner won't be any different. Holding their tools high, the angry farmers shout in unison, declaring that they must guarantee their rights and show the new owner who is boss right from the start. Confronting the two travelers, the lead farmer aggressively demands, "Are you the new owner of this farm?" To which the knight calmly steps forward and replies, "Yes, that's right." Slamming his wooden pitchfork firmly onto the ground, the lead farmer commands, "Now listen closely, owner." Glaring with intense rage, the blonde farmer raises his pitchfork and fiercely bellows, "We will not be your slaves." Chewing blankly with stuffed cheeks, Dominic looks completely unfazed and dumbfounded, replying, Sure, but you aren't slaves to begin with." Looking down from above, the angry farmers are instantly deflated, with the leader scratching his head in utter confusion as he asks, "Wait, really?" While Dominic asks if they've been lied to their whole lives. As they stand in awkward silence, a young boy from the crowd walks up to Dominic, catching him by surprise. Looking up with bright, sparkling eyes and a joyful grin, the young boy happily gasps, "Village chief?" Recognizing the boy, Dominic's face lights up with a warm, cheerful smile, while the knight stands behind him in quiet observation. Lackey happily explains that the promissory note Dominic gave him was a massive help, and Dominic smiles, replying that he is glad to hear it and notes that he only just returned himself. Lackey eagerly turns to his father and introduces Dominic as the kind village chief of Evergreen, causing the stunned father to gasp in absolute shock. Instantly bowing deeply in shame, the father apologizes for their hostility, explaining that he has heard all about Dominic's kindness from Lackey. Laughing off the misunderstanding, Dominic warmly tells them not to worry about it, adding that thanks to Lackey, they were able to catch the culprit and settle everything. Dominic sweatingly explains that Lackey was forced into the scheme anyway, and notes that he was actually able to purchase this farm because of how everything turned out. Suddenly, a massive, echoing growl rumbles from the father's stomach, causing him to clutch his belly and blush in sheer embarrassment. Smiling warmly, Dominic kindly holds up a steaming bowl of his freshly made Haejeongguk to share with the hungry farmers. As the grateful farmers sit down and happily devour the soup, Dominic looks at the massive crowd and realizes that there won't be enough soup to go around for everyone. Looking around for a quick solution, Dominic spots a lush potato plant with white flowers and decides to put it to good use. Dominic quickly unpacks his large bag, setting down seasoning bottles, flour, and salt onto the dirt ground. Reaching into the dark, fertile soil, Dominic pulls up a fresh, plump bunch of golden potatoes. Sitting on the ground, Dominic quickly begins peeling the fresh potatoes with practiced culinary skill. Eager to assist, the blonde knight steps up and asks what he can do to help, so Dominic hands him the peeled potatoes and asks him to julienne them. Dominic strictly instructs that the potato slices must be thin and uniform, causing the knight to sweat nervously as he replies, "I got it." Taking a deep, focused breath, the knight firmly grips a large, gleaming kitchen knife. Channeling his elite swordsmanship skills, the knight chops the potatoes at blinding speed, creating a blur of perfect uniform cuts. The farmers watch in absolute shock and awe as potato slices fly through the air, completely amazed that a knight can handle a kitchen knife with such incredible precision. Mixing the julienne potatoes with flour and salt, Dominic smiles with satisfaction and announces, "Now that the batter of potatoes, flour, and salt is ready, shall we start frying?" He places the seasoned potato batter onto a hot pan over the campfire, letting it sizzle into a perfectly golden and crispy potato pancake. Dominic smiles eagerly as he prepares the finishing touch for his next culinary creation. Sizzling on the hot pan, the crispy golden brown potato pancakes are finally complete. Not only delicious, but also packed with health benefits like protecting the stomach lining and aiding fatigue recovery. Dominic and the blonde knight proudly carry plates piled high with the fresh, steaming potato pancakes, inviting everyone to dig in and dip them in the rich, dark sauce. The hungry farmers stare in anticipation, gulping nervously as they prepare to taste the mouth-watering food. Using a small fork, a crispy piece of the golden potato pancake is sliced off, releasing a gentle puff of steam. The piece of warm, crispy potato pancake is dipped directly into the savory dark sauce. Taking a big bite, the lead farmer's eyes fill with tears of pure delight as he cries out in joy at how incredibly delicious it is. Watching the farmers devour the potato pancakes with absolute satisfaction, Dominic and the knight smile proudly. Suddenly, Dominic remembers something important, gasping in realization as he calls out. Turning to the group of farmers, Dominic explains that since they are all gathered together, he has a question. Does anyone have other plans for the future? Chewing on his food, the lead farmer looks up in mild confusion, wondering what Dominic means by other plans. Dominic warmly explains that now that they are free and have received their rightful compensation from the Rondo Merchant Guild, he wants to know if they have any specific path in mind. The farmers look at one another in silence, unsure of what their future holds now that they are no longer bound by their past struggles. Looking down with a humble expression, the lead farmer admits that they have done nothing but farm for their entire lives. Clasping his hands nervously, the farmer hesitatingly asks if Dominic would allow them to keep working and farming on this very land. Grabbing the farmer's hands in a firm, passionate grip, Dominic happily exclaims, "Oh, thank you!" Dominic enthusiastically shakes the stunned farmer's hands, beaming with excitement while the farmer sweat drops in confusion. Dominic suddenly pulls out a stack of documents and eagerly asks if they should sign their new employment contracts right away, leaving the farmer completely bewildered. Holding a feather pen with a mischievous grin, Dominic tells them that their only job is to farm well, though there is one specific condition. Writing quickly on the contracts, Dominic explains that he will take all the crops for his own needs, but in return, he will pay them generous wages in gold 4 times a year and hire extra hands during the busy harvest season. The farmer looks incredibly puzzled and asks if Dominic really wants them to farm without using any fertilizer, to which Dominic smiles and confirms that it is indeed a strict requirement. After a quiet moment of reflection, the farmer looks at Dominic seriously and asks if the 2 travelers would mind following him for a moment. The farmer leads Dominic, the knight, and young Lockie across the dirt path toward a large wooden barn. Pushing the heavy wooden doors open, the farmer stands back and quietly announces that they have arrived. Stepping inside the dimly lit warehouse, Dominic and the knight stare in awe at the massive sacks piled high with fresh, vibrant crops. When the farmer reveals that all these crops were grown completely without fertilizer, Dominic is absolutely stunned, yelling out in disbelief. The farmer explains that after his son was dragged away for forced labor, the only reward he and his wife received for their hard work was a meager amount of famine relief crops. Looking down at Laki, the father solemnly admits that they believed they were doomed either way, which led them to experiment by not using any fertilizer on half of their land. With a hopeful but anxious expression, the farmer asks Dominic if he thinks they will actually be able to sell all of these stored crops. Dominic beams with a joyful smile, reassuring them that he will pay for these crops separately and thanking them for helping him secure exactly what he needed. Approaching Dominic, young Lockie holds out a piece of parchment and asks the village chief to take a look at it. Unrolling the parchment, Dominic discovers a beautifully detailed, hand-drawn map of the farm's sectors and happily thanks Lockie for his thoughtful initiative. Staring at the map, Dominic is deeply impressed by Lockie's sharp instincts and clever mind. Smiling to himself, Dominic realizes that if Lockie learns how to read and write, he will undoubtedly become an incredibly valuable asset to the farm. Turning to the boy, Dominic surprises him by asking if he would like to take full charge of managing the farm's production and harvests. Dominic gives Lockie a confident wink and a proud grin, fully trusting in the boy's potential. Lockie's eyes shine with determination as he silently resolves to work hard, learn how to read, write, and master mathematics to fulfill his new role. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Lockie bows deeply and eagerly promises to give it his absolute all, while the farmers join in thanking Dominic as the embarrassed village chief quickly tries to get them to stand up. Meanwhile, at the bustling mercenary guild, a client asks about a place called Evergreen. The guild receptionist explains that Evergreen is a small fishing village on the coast of the Sinclair estate that is currently looking for a mage who can perform basic second-class utility magic like alarm or copy. A mysterious, cloaked traveler with long blue hair listens closely to the request, wondering why a quiet fishing village would ever have a need for a mage. Looking down at the low-paying request, the receptionist notes that because the pay is minimal and the location is so remote, none of the guild mages are willing to accept the job. Suddenly, the cloaked traveler slams her hands firmly onto the wooden counter. Pulling back her hood, a cheerful young female mage with sparkling green eyes and a large witch hat eagerly declares that she will take the job. Under the warm sunshine, a wooden carriage wheel rolls smoothly along a dirt path lined with beautiful yellow wildflowers. Holding her suitcase, the blue-haired mage happily strolls through the lush green fields, passing by a majestic windmill. Suddenly, the young mage gasps in awe, her eyes wide with absolute wonder as she looks ahead. Looking down from the grassy hill, she beholds the breathtaking coastal village of Evergreen, with its gleaming lighthouse, turquoise waters, and beautiful seaside houses. Passing by the local children who are playing and laughing happily in the sunny streets, the mage smiles warmly, realizing that she has finally found the peace and quiet she always wanted. Sitting down to rest, she gently places her witch hat on her lap with a sigh of content, ready to embrace her peaceful new life. Looking out at the glistening turquoise ocean from her bench, the blue-haired mage happily thinks to herself that despite her initial worries about the countryside, she is going to have a wonderful time over the next 3 months. A gentle breeze blows through her long blue hair as the young mage smiles warmly, fully content with her new surroundings. Suddenly, a loud, echoing rumble erupts from her stomach, causing her to blush in deep embarrassment as she clutches her belly. Sweating nervously, she stands up and looks around, wondering if it is already this late in the day. Clutching her suitcase, she continues walking through the lush green fields as her hungry stomach lets out another loud growl. Drooling slightly, her eyes pop open in excitement as she sniffs the air, realizing she smells something absolutely delicious nearby. She eagerly follows the mouth-watering aroma, thinking there must be a lady with incredible baking skills nearby, and resolving to ask if she can buy some of her fresh bread. Peeking through an open window, she spots a group of men gathered around a table, with one of them loudly declaring that since he is the oldest, the food is rightfully his. Gripping a small spatula, Dominic sweat drops and argues that since he is the one who made it, they should let him have it, while the blonde knight casually notes that he has only had 2 pieces so far. On the wooden table sits a hot, perfectly golden and crispy waffle. The men continue to bicker as one accuses the other of using unfair physical force, while the larger man tells him to start working out instead of complaining. Looking through the window, the young mage gasps in absolute shock as she realizes they are fighting over the very last piece of food. She bites her lip in sheer desperation, reflecting on the fact that she hasn't eaten a single thing since morning and that there are no restaurants anywhere in sight. Taking a deep breath, the mage decides that she has no other choice but to resort to a desperate measure. Casting aside her pride, she summons her magical power, declaring that a hungry stomach is far more important than her dignity. Inside the room, the 3 men watch in utter disbelief as the delicious golden waffle is suddenly enveloped in a glowing magical aura and begins floating right off the plate. Floating the hot waffle directly into her open mouth, the blue-haired mage happily cheers and thanks them for the meal. Chewing happily with stuffed cheeks, the cheerful mage muffledly declares how delicious it is, leaving the 3 stunned men staring at her in complete silence. Dominic, the knight, and the larger man stand frozen, looking at her with wide eyes and speechless, bewildered expressions. Gulping down the food, the girl sheepishly winks and apologizes, explaining that she was simply so hungry she lost her mind for a moment before introducing herself as Parrot Diane, a third-class mage sent by the Mercenary Guild. Dominic's expression softens as he enthusiastically shakes her hand, welcoming her to Evergreen and introducing himself as the village chief, while a remorseful Diane promises to pay for the waffle she snatched.
Intrigued by her reaction, Dominic smiles and asks her a question regarding the waffle she just ate, causing Diane to look up curiously. Diane's eyes sparkle with pure delight and she drools with excitement, loudly declaring that she has never tasted anything so incredibly delicious in her entire life. Sweating nervously under her intense gaze, Dominic listens as Diane eagerly clasps her hands and asks if she can buy more, wondering if the guild's room and board includes extra snacks. A mischievous, plotting grin spreads across Dominic's face as he realizes her obsession with his food can be used to his advantage. A few days later, a teacher's cheerful voice echoes from a beautiful country house, telling the children to hurry up and pull out their homework as they happily reply in unison. Inside the sunny classroom, Diane stands proudly in front of a chalkboard, smiling warmly as she gathers the homework worksheets from the enthusiastic children. Looking through the window, Dominic proudly comments that if the children keep learning like this, they will make excellent clerks, to which the blonde knight replies that Dominic is probably the only person crazy enough to hire a mage to teach reading and math. Smiling as they walk away, Dominic casually points out that they managed to secure a high-quality education for the village children simply by offering the mage one extra snack a day. The blonde knight sighs in relief, admitting that while he wasn't sure if the plan would actually work, he is glad everything turned out well. As they stroll through the sunny fields, Dominic explains that with construction nearly finished, he will soon be busy preparing for the grand opening, hiring staff, and training them to target noblewomen. Dominic turns to the knight and notes that while the concept is solid, marketing remains their biggest challenge, as he needs to create a massive buzz right from the very start. Looking down at the breathtaking coastal resort with its pools and grand buildings, Dominic notes that since the facility is designed for noble women's postpartum recovery, inviting a lady who is about to give birth would be the ideal promotion. The knight asks if they should write a letter to the countess, but Dominic looks skeptical, explaining that it wouldn't make for a very effective before and after marketing case. Suddenly, a brilliant idea strikes Dominic, his eyes lighting up as he realizes that even if the resort is modeled after a postpartum care center, there is no strict rule stating they can only accept new mothers. He realizes that he does not need to limit his target audience or keep himself trapped in a single mindset. Firm, confident footsteps tread across the lush green grass as a plan begins to fall into place. Dominic smiles as he envisions the wealthy noblewomen who are constantly in need of physical healing and who love to spread gossip and share recommendations with one another. A confident, clever smirk spreads across his face as he realizes there is one perfect candidate who fits the description perfectly. A few weeks later, an elegant white carriage pulled by majestic horses travels smoothly down the scenic road toward the coastal village of Evergreen. Inside the luxurious carriage, a beautiful noblewoman with striking red hair is introduced as Viscountess Noella, who observes that the coastal village is surprisingly well maintained. Sitting beside her, her husband, Viscount Noella, scoffs in annoyance, muttering that it is likely just a fancy inn and questioning why she wants to recruit this particular village chief so badly. Turning to him, the Viscountess firmly explains that he only says that because he hasn't seen the incredible transformation of Countess Sinclair, declaring that she absolutely must recruit the chief as her personal chef. Looking out the window, she ponders the rumor that the chief didn't even bother sending an invitation to Countess Sinclair, wondering if he was insulted by the meager amount of gold coins she gave him. As the carriage rolls along, she smugly resolves to show him just how generous she can be, believing that if he decides to leave with her willingly, the Sinclair family won't be able to complain. Clenching her hands with determination, the Viscountess resolves that during their stay she will do whatever it takes to recruit the chief to her estate. Bowing politely inside the stunning sunlit lobby of the resort, Dominic warmly welcomes his guests, introducing himself as the resort manager and the chief of Evergreen. Standing before the elegant noble couple, Dominic expresses how deeply honored he is that a distinguished VIP like her would remember him. Looking slightly startled, the Viscountess lowers her fan in confusion and repeats the unfamiliar term, wondering what he means by VIP. Laughing sheepishly, Dominic quickly clarifies that VIP is simply a special slang term his staff uses to refer to a very important person. Showing a humble, slightly nervous expression, Dominic apologetically explains that he was simply so anxious in their presence that the words slipped out, asking for their kind understanding. Flattered by Dominic's polite flattery, Viscountess Noella hides her smirk behind her fan, laughing delightfully and noting that he certainly has a way with words. Smiling warmly, Dominic claps his hands together and cheerfully announces that his staff will take care of the couple's luggage. Politeness radiating from them, the resort staff members guide the noble couple down the sparkling hallway, wishing them a wonderful stay. Walking through the gorgeous sunlit corridor, the Viscount silently approves of Dominic's respectful attitude, but skeptically thinks to himself that since it is just a fancy inn, he might get bored over the next 3 days. Standing in the middle of the grand lobby, Dominic watches from behind as the couple is escorted to their suite. A devious, confident grin spreads across Dominic's face as he quietly challenges the Viscount's assumption that he will be bored. Upon entering their private quarters, both the Viscount and Viscountess stand frozen in absolute jaw-dropped shock at the sight before them. They find themselves staring at a breathtakingly grand, palatial building that looks far more like a royal estate than a simple country inn. Absolutely enchanted by the sheer luxury, the Viscountess thinks to herself that the place feels like a private villa, making her feel as though they are on their honeymoon all over again. The polite resort guide gestured toward the luxurious sun-drenched chambers, explaining that one area serves as the bedroom while the other can be used as a study. Looking out from the balcony, a gorgeous view of a private beach with crystal-clear turquoise waters and soft white sand stretches out before them. Blushing deeply under the romantic and serene atmosphere, the noble couple stands side by side, completely speechless as they take in the gorgeous scenery. Feeling a sudden wave of affection, the Viscount gently and firmly grasps his wife's hand. Turning to his wife with a warm, loving smile, the Viscount tenderly calls out to her. Looking back at her husband with soft, enamored eyes, the Viscountess replies sweetly, completely swept up in the romantic atmosphere. Gentle turquoise waves wash smoothly onto the pristine, glistening, white sandy shore of the resort's private beach. Standing on a grassy hill overlooking the magnificent resort, the blonde knight looks down at Dominic, who is relaxing on a sun lounger, and comments on how successful the opening day has been. Relaxing back with his arms behind his head, Dominic smiles and replies that avoiding complaints on opening day is half the battle won, enjoying the peaceful quiet. Suddenly, a loud, frantic shout calling for the chief echoes across the hill, catching both Dominic and the knight off guard. Diane, the blue-haired mage, storms up to them with a red, furious face and clenched fists, loudly declaring that this is just too much. Standing before Dominic, Diane fumes with intense anger, shouting that she is being pushed far beyond her limits. Clenching her teeth in sheer frustration, Diane complains about her grueling schedule of teaching staff etiquette in the afternoon and fixing magic devices in the evening. Unfazed by her anger, Dominic sits up with a cheerful grin and casually asks her about the status of the temperature-controlled oven she recently built. He suddenly holds out a beautifully packaged pink box filled with colorful, perfectly round macarons. Dominic enthusiastically explains that while macarons are incredibly difficult to make, people absolutely go crazy for them, prompting Diane to yell back that he is crazy if he thinks she'll fall for his food bribery again. Swiftly catching her off guard, Dominic pops a delicious macaron right into her open mouth, telling her to stop complaining and just give it a try. Stomping away in an angry huff while happily chewing the delicious treat, Diane frustratedly admits how annoying it is that his food tastes so good, while Dominic casually shouts after her to make a temperature control device for the private spa next. Gritting her teeth in defeat, a chibi-style Diane screams in anger, reluctantly agreeing to do the job. Watching them, the blonde knight sweat drops and shakes his head in utter disbelief, thinking to himself that neither a chief who exploits a mage with food nor a mage who constantly falls for it is normal. Dominic sits up on his lounger and notes that all they have left to prepare is the morning exercise program and the meal plan, prompting the knight to skeptically ask if noble women would actually want to exercise. With a confident smirk, Dominic raises his finger and tells him to just wait and watch. When the knight proudly declares that a noble knight does not engage in trivial bets, Dominic mockingly asks if he is simply too scared to bet 1 gold coin. The next morning, Viscountess Noella is seen sweating profusely and shaking as she struggles to hold a difficult core exercise pose on a mat. On a scenic wooden deck overlooking the ocean, a large group of noblewomen in activewear are seen sweating and panting as they follow the fitness instructor's rhythmic counting. Grinning triumphantly, Dominic holds out his hand to collect his winnings from the defeated knight, who reluctantly pulls out his coin pouch in annoyance. Suddenly, a resort staff member runs up to them in a panic, sweating profusely as he frantically yells that they have a major emergency. Dominic and the knight gasp in shock as the staff member breathlessly reveals that Lady Owen has suddenly gone into labor. The 3 men sprint down the resort pathways as Dominic frantically questions how this is possible when her delivery was still a month and a half away. The staff member assures Dominic that the midwife and healer are already following their rehearsed protocols, adding that the priest rushed over first, which brings a relieved, confident smile to Dominic's face. Inside a luxurious resort suite, Lady Owen screams in intense agony as her labor contractions take over. The midwife and her assistant stay by her side, gently encouraging Lady Owen to take long, deep breaths and praising her efforts. Sweat dripping down her pale face, Lady Owen hyperventilates in sheer panic, crying out in fear that something might go wrong. Clenching her eyes shut as tears stream down, she worries that since the baby is coming far too early, her child might not be safe. Suddenly, a warm, sparkling light envelops her, causing her to open her eyes in stunned wonder as a soothing sensation washes away her fear. Standing beside her bed, a priest in holy white garments gently prays, casting a warm, comforting, divine healing light over her. Her panic instantly replaced by calm determination, Lady Owen takes a deep breath and realizes there is nothing to fear with the priest and midwife right beside her. Resolving to be strong for her child, she prepares herself to push with all her might so her baby can be born safely. The loud, healthy cries of a newborn baby echo from the windows of the grand coastal resort, carrying up into the bright blue sky. Looking exhausted but radiating pure maternal joy, Lady Owen smiles warmly as she cradles her crying newborn baby boy, receiving the midwife's enthusiastic congratulations. As night falls over the peaceful coastal resort, a bright full moon shines through the soft clouds as word quickly spreads that Lady Owen gave birth safely. Sitting inside the elegant tea room, a group of noblewomen chatter excitedly, with one declaring what wonderful news it is, and another eagerly agreeing. Holding her teacup, a noblewoman in a red dress asks with mild surprise if it is true that the midwife and priest were already prepared, to which her companion confirms that is indeed what she heard. Gesturing with her finger, the dark-haired noblewoman explains that she asked the resort staff, and they revealed they have a prenatal and postpartum care program fully prepared, adding that some expectant mothers even came specifically for that, prompting gasps of amazement. As they sit around the tea table, the dark-haired lady lowers her voice to share gossip from the maids, revealing that they wouldn't let any outsiders in during the birth, which prompts another lady to realize that must be why she was stopped when she tried to enter and offer a blessing. Sipping her tea, the red-dressed noblewoman looks shocked as her companion adds that they even used a cloth to cover the laboring woman's lower half so only the midwife, priest, and healer could see. The noblewoman in red sweats nervously as she reflects on how it is customary for visitors to watch a birth to offer blessings, finding it shocking that the inn actually blocked them from entering. In a grim flashback panel, the woman imagines a chaotic and stressful traditional delivery where countless onlookers crowd around the bed to watch, highlighting just how revolutionary the resort's private and protective approach truly is. Gulping nervously, the noblewoman clenches her jaw as she thinks about what it would be like if she stayed at that inn when she has her first child. She realizes with immense relief that if she stays there, she wouldn't have to show her birth to just anyone. Gripping her teacup tightly with a determined expression, she resolves that if she's to give birth, it must be at this very resort. As night falls over the peaceful coastal resort under a crescent moon, the world's first postpartum care center begins to make massive waves in high society, leaving noblewomen everywhere in utter shock. The scene shifts to a sunny day at a windmill, where a mischievous laugh echoes through the air. Staring down at his ledger with a greedy, goblin-like grin, Dominic ecstatically notes all the money he is making, declaring that he will be able to pay off his debt in no time. Sitting across from him, Kalan, the former village chief, tells Dominic to stop smiling because he looks like a goblin, but Dominic retorts that he cannot help it when looking at a ledger showing they are fully booked all the way through autumn. The blonde knight steps in, pointing out that based on the reservations, there are plenty of expectant mothers who want to give birth there and suggests building a temple of the goddess of life right in the village. Kalon recalls how the noble women who gave birth at the resort gave such generous honorariums to the temple priest. Dominic enthusiastically argues that they should do it immediately and wonders why they haven't accepted yet, but the former chief cautions that this is a major matter and they should consult the villagers first. Kalon smiles warmly and gently, clearly pleased by how much the village is prospering under Dominic's management. Walking over, Kalan assures Dominic that no one will have a problem with it. In fact, they will love it, especially since the followers of the goddess of life are not obsessed with proselytizing. Dominic calls out to ask if he should go ahead with the plans, and Kalan waves back dismissively, saying he is heading to the seaweed processing plant. Tapping the hilt of his sword, the blonde knight watches Kalan leave with a thoughtful, silent expression. Turning to Dominic, the knight skeptically asks if he truly trusts the former chief, to which Dominic replies without hesitation that of course he does. When the knight points out that Kalan isn't a man of much formal learning, Dominic defends him, stating that he has years of experience and is far from being trapped in his own little world. The knight admits that is true, remembering Kalan is an incredibly flexible and open-minded man. Dominic advises the knight to always listen to an elder whose mind hasn't grown stiff, quoting the old proverb that when three people walk together, there's always something to learn from at least one of them. Looking thoughtful, the knight ponders the wisdom of learning from the wise and using the foolish as an example of what not to do. Walking side by side, the knight quietly remarks that he has learned another lesson from Dominic today, prompting Dominic to smugly ask if that makes him a pretty great teacher. Dominic quickly shifts the conversation, telling the knight that he actually meant he learned he needs to be humble, before opening his notebook and telling him to look at what he has written. Peering over, the knight reads a line aloud, questioning the note about cooking only with the most natural, unadulterated vegetables. The knight asks if Dominic is planning to open a restaurant, and Dominic explains that while they open the resort, competitors will easily copy the facilities, so he intends to start a business that is extremely hard to replicate. With a confident smirk, Dominic raises his finger and proudly declares his next venture, a tourism business. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the imposing stone structure of the training tower at Sinclair Castle under a bright, sunny sky. From inside the tower, a booming laugh echoes as a powerful voice comments on how Dominic is doing the most extraordinary things. Holding a letter detailing Dominic's exploits, a massive hand holds the paper as the voice marvels at Dominic securing investments for a mother's resort and blocking nobles from entering, wondering if he is bold or simply crazy. The incredibly muscular hand sets the letter down as the man notes that he has been staying inside to avoid annoyances in his old age. Showing off a remarkably shredded and powerful physique, the old warrior declares that he will have to leave his tower soon to see Dominic's village with his own eyes. Standing before the heavy wooden exit doors of his training room, the colossal, bare-chested warrior holds his sword as he prepares to venture out. Suddenly, his sword begins to vibrate and glow with a violent, blazing blue aura of concentrated mana. Grinning fiercely, the legendary warrior notes that since he became a sword master at his advanced age thanks to Dominic, he wonders what kind of gift he should bring him. With a heavy thud, the massive training room door is swung wide open, letting in a stream of bright sunlight. Stepping out of the tower, the formidable swordmaster suddenly stops and reminds himself that he should go see his grandson's face first. On a dirt path surrounded by lush trees, Dominic and the blonde knight drive a horse-drawn carriage as Dominic announces he is about to make a serious proposal, which the knight immediately dismisses if it's nonsense. Looking exasperated, the knight sighs as Dominic urges him to listen up because this is highly important. Dominic grins widely, giving a thumbs up as he asks the knight how he would like to transfer his affiliation to their village, promising him all the tteokbokki he can eat. As the carriage rolls down the quiet path, Dominic's voice echoes through the trees, desperately offering endless tteokbokki if the knight agrees to transfer. When the knight responds with a heavy sigh, Dominic frantically protests that he isn't joking and sweetens the deal by offering to give him the village chief seat itself. Turning his head, the knight bluntly tells Dominic that he seems to talk nonsense every time they have a village chief's meeting. Leaning back with a bored expression, Dominic complains that the meeting is nothing but useless chatter, prompting the knight to sternly warn him to watch his disrespectful mouth. In a comical chibi panel, Dominic angrily argues that his reports by letter should be more than enough, suggesting once a quarter is plenty, while the horse looks back in amusement and the knight scoffs at his flippant attitude. Regaining his serious composure, the knight drives the carriage forward, explaining that while letters are convenient, they are easy to forge, which is why regular in-person meetings are crucial to ensure everything is operating smoothly. Resting his face in his hand, Dominic sighs and reflects on how inconvenient it is that the world he is in lacks modern communication methods like registered mail or email. As the knight points out that the Lord seems to think highly of him as well, Dominic looks back in utter disbelief. Dominic points out that if the Lord truly thinks highly of him, he wouldn't be kidnapped or dragged to the castle every single time, prompting the knight to nervously clear his throat. As they travel under a bright blue sky, Dominic tries to deflect the conversation by offering to grab some tteokbokki, but the knight angrily commands him not to change the subject. In a flashy and enthusiastic display, a village elder musters up a bright, hopeful smile and eagerly asks if there is any business they can start with his village. A bald elder with a long gray beard quickly butts in to promote his own village and its iron mine, asking Dominic if he likes wine as the other elder looks on in frustration. Another bald elder slides in, telling them to stop putting Dominic on the spot, before immediately asking to reserve a spot at the resort for his daughter-in-law's upcoming delivery. Caught in the middle of the bickering village chiefs, Dominic sweats nervously as they shout and challenge each other to settle their dispute up on the roof. A simple transition card captures Dominic's exhaustion as he laments how much more tiring his situation has suddenly become. The butler opens the heavy doors to the meeting room and announces to the gathered village chiefs that another agenda item has just been added, catching Dominic off guard. The village chiefs complain that they are busy and that the meeting was almost over, but the butler explains that the Lord's meeting with the Council of Retainers has just concluded. Shifting moods instantly, the three elders smile cheerfully and eagerly ask what the new agenda item is about.
The butler presents an official document explaining that they plan to launch a monster subjugation campaign before autumn arrives and that each village must prepare. The elders react with immense excitement, wondering how large and long the campaign will be, while Dominic stands in the background looking completely bewildered. Dominic hesitantly asks if a monster subjugation isn't dangerous, prompting one of the elders to realize that this must be Dominic's very first one. The elder gestures to a map and explains that since their southern region is naturally protected by the sea, desert, and mountains, they do not face many monsters. He goes on to clarify that while it is indeed dangerous, each village stands to gain a tremendous amount from participating in the subjugation. Smiling warmly, the elder explains that because this is an unplanned mobilization, the Lord will procure rations, supplies, and laborers from the villages, and everyone knows the Lord does not lowball those costs. Realizing his own village has absolutely nothing to offer for the campaign, Dominic gets a comically sour look as his stomach begins to ache from the missed business opportunity. The butler suddenly interrupts, announcing that the Lord has separately summoned the village chief of Evergreen, leaving Dominic utterly shocked. With a sharp clap of his hands, the butler confirms that the Lord indeed wishes to see Dominic. Dominic is carried away horizontally by two blue-cloaked castle guards, looking completely deadpan as they announce they are leaving. Under a bright, sunny sky, the grand neoclassical stone architecture of the Lord's castle stands tall and majestic. Kneeling on the blue carpet of the throne room, Dominic and the knight offer their greetings, and the Lord acknowledges them before asking if Dominic has heard about the monster subjugation. Sitting on his throne, the handsome, dark-haired Lord smiles gently as he tells Dominic that he has a proposal to make. Dominic looks surprised, hesitantly asking if the Lord truly means to make a proposal to a humble servant like him, which the Lord confirms. With a devious grin, the Lord reveals that he wants Dominic to serve as the field kitchen manager for the territory soldiers. Dominic bows deeply, questioning why such a task wouldn't be handled by the standard cook soldiers or the head chef, though the Lord agrees that the head chef is quite skilled. In a flashback, the Lord recalls watching the soldiers eat happily during field training, noting that Dominic's culinary skills far exceed those of the castle's head chef. Dominic sweat drops in dread, realizing that his efforts to prevent a mass norovirus outbreak during training have backfired, leaving him with an exhausting job that promises no money. He reminds himself that as a successful resort owner, he has a steady stream of gold coming in and has no need for exhausting manual labor, yet he finds himself without a valid excuse to decline. Sensing his hesitation, the blonde knight shoots Dominic a stern, questioning side glance. The knight's expression darkens with intense fury as he fumes over a mere village chief dare hesitating before the Lord. The Lord watches the exchange with a calm, amused smirk on his face. Terrified by the knight's murderous aura, Dominic instantly throws himself into a deep bow and frantically denies that he is hesitating. Dominic quickly excuses his pause by claiming he was only worried about failing to meet expectations for such an important task, which the Lord accepts with a relieved smile. The Lord smiles warmly and promises that if Dominic manages this task well, he will reward him with something he truly needs instead of a few simple gold coins. Dominic bows deeply once more as the Lord praises Evergreen's rapid prosperity, humbly responding that he has simply been lucky and still has a long way to go. Dominic continues to downplay his success, claiming that Evergreen is still just a tiny country village without even a guard post, and that the rumors must be highly exaggerated. The Lord chuckles softly, amused by Dominic's persistent habit of whining and playing the pity card. The Lord playfully muses that if the rumors were indeed exaggerated, perhaps he should change the reward he had planned, making Dominic freeze in alarm. As the Lord starts to suggest that they might skip lowering his taxes since they aren't struggling, Dominic panics completely and interrupts with a desperate shout. Dominic immediately prostrates himself in a deep bow, loudly praising the Lord's immeasurable grace while the knight looks on in quiet disapproval. The knight's face is cast in a dark shadow of pure rage as he silently seethes over a mere village chief having the audacity to interrupt the Lord. Yakking outside the grand castle on a bright day, Dominic curiously asks what exactly the phrase Lord's Grace means. As they walk down the castle hallway, the knight explains that it is a mountain dialect referring to a grand grace bestowed by a king. The knight dramatically draws his sword and demands to know if Dominic is dreaming of treason, while Dominic casually cleans his ear, completely ignoring the wild accusation. Moving along, Dominic remarks that he is glad his village can participate, and the knight agrees that even if Dominic has to carry the whole workload, it is worth trying if it drops their tax rate. Dominic turns back with an eager smile, asking the knight if he can share any details at all about the monster subjugation operation. The knight gives Dominic a brief, cool look before turning away and muttering that they must discuss something else first, leaving Dominic utterly confused. Dominic chuckles softly and asks the knight if he isn't from the southern region either, teasing him as the knight blushes and looks away in embarrassment. Dominic ponders who he should ask for advice, suggesting the head chef, but the knight points out that consulting the soldiers would be much better since the reward depends entirely on their satisfaction. As Dominic looks up at the grand, glittering chandelier of the castle, he begins to realize the immense pressure of keeping the soldiers pleased. A bright, energetic, red-haired soldier offers a wide, cheerful grin and a friendly wink, full of youthful confidence. Dominic laughs and asks the red-haired soldier if he has been careful with shellfish lately, remembering a flashback of the poor soldier suffering from severe food poisoning, which the soldier quickly laughs off, claiming he cooks it properly now. Dominic explains that he is the new field kitchen manager for the upcoming monster subjugation and asks if there are any specific meals the soldiers would enjoy, prompting the soldier to think it over. The red-haired soldier admits that since training and missions are incredibly exhausting, they will happily eat absolutely anything as long as it is edible, leaving Dominic slightly underwhelmed. With Dominic and the knight listening closely, the red-haired soldier suddenly remembers a crucial piece of advice shared by a veteran senior. The soldier recounts how, during joint operations where multiple territories team up, the neighboring soldiers eat rich, hot stews packed with large chunks of meat, while their own men are left chewing on hard bread and dry potatoes. Sensing the underlying issue as he writes in his notebook, Dominic realizes that the food situation is actually a silent competition among the troops. A devious, sharp grin spreads across Dominic's face as he realizes this isn't just about food. It is a matter of pure military pride. Enthusiastically writing down his grand menu, Dominic declares that they are going all out and flashy, planning a feast of soft wheat bread, hearty meat stew, fresh fruit, and crisp salad. The blonde knight suddenly breaks Dominic's excitement by questioning if he is actually planning all of this with the budget in mind, shocking Dominic completely. The knight calmly suggests that Dominic should consult with the financial officer first before finalizing such an extravagant menu. The financial officer reviews the proposed documents, his hand rustling through the pages with a solemn air. Dominic's face pales in sheer disbelief and horror as he stares at the dismal numbers provided by the financial officer. The weight of the financial limitations hangs heavily in the air as Dominic realizes that executing his grand culinary plans will be far more difficult than he initially anticipated. In a dramatic flashback from his past life, Dominic recalls his exhausting days as a dietitian, planning meals around every minor detail only to have the kitchen staff ignore his instructions. He vividly remembers the agonizing stress of having to ration every single drop of sesame oil on an incredibly tight budget. Worst of all, he remembers the sheer frustration when ungrateful students would constantly compare his hard work to the superior meals served at the school next door. Snapped back to reality, Dominic stares at the tiny budget sheet with the exact same look of despair, asking if this small amount is truly all he has to work with. The financial officer explains that the budget was intentionally matched to the neighboring Delt territory, though it has been increased by 20%, leaving Dominic curious as to why they are comparing budgets. Realizing Dominic is from a new village, the financial officer strokes his mustache and prepares to share the political rumors surrounding the decision. The officer explains that the Delt territory possesses some of the richest and most fertile farmlands in the empire, meaning no one there ever goes hungry. However, the officer notes that full bellies do not pick up swords, revealing that despite their wealth, the Delt territory struggles greatly with military strength. He reveals that during the previous monster subjugation, the neighboring lords sought to seize the initiative through a clever tactic. The officer taps his desk with a knowing grin, recalling how the neighboring lord manipulated the situation to boost his soldiers' morale. As Dominic gasps in surprise, the officer confirms that the neighboring lord used lavish meals to motivate his troops, which turned out to be a massive success and left their own soldiers feeling miserable. With a thoughtful hum, Dominic pieces the clues together, finally understanding the deeper political conflict at play. The officer explains that while Sinclair County has been a proud knightly house for generations, the current lord is a civil official rather than a warrior. Because of his non-combat background, the lord is highly sensitive about anything involving his soldiers and their standing. The lord cannot bear to let the military's reputation or standards fall below the level established by his predecessor, the previous count. Dominic mutters in frustration, realizing why they matched the budget to Delt, but grumbles that they should have just told him the truth from the start instead of sending him in circles. Dominic confidently states that he now knows what needs to be done, though the officer warns him that it won't be easy since ingredients are much cheaper in Delt. Dominic thanks the officer for his valuable advice, and as they wrap up, the officer casually asks if there are any spare rooms at Dominic's resort for his wife. As night falls over the grand castle, the glowing windows reflect the quiet plotting taking place within. Back in his quarters, Dominic shakes his head with pens in his mouth, frustrated that Delt has the upper hand due to cheaper ingredients despite having the same budget. Realizing that unusual cooking methods are out of the question due to budget and time constraints, Dominic deeply contemplates his next move. The blonde knight returns to the room, announcing his presence to the deep-in-thought Dominic. Looking slightly apologetic, the knight scratches his cheek as he explains that he won't be able to help with the kitchen since he has been assigned to command the entire military operation. Dominic looks at the knight with a comically smug old man face, teasingly questioning his leadership skills while wondering why the knight is looking at him so intensely. Dominic mockingly asks if the knight will be all right fighting at the very front as the commander, prompting the knight to ask if Dominic is actually worried about him. Dominic playfully retorts that he is only worried about the knight's skills being exposed to the soldiers, waves him off to remake his meal plan, and leaves the knight fuming in irritation. The knight sighs in exasperation, deeply annoyed by a mere village chief having the audacity to dismiss him so casually. Dominic stares at his papers, realizing that their initial strategy was completely wrong from the very beginning. The next morning, sunlight bathes the exterior of a brick building as Dominic begins putting his new plan into motion. Dominic's subordinate reviews the order form with concern, questioning if such a straightforward menu is enough, but Dominic firmly slams his hand on the desk, declaring that they must protect the Lord's pride and that he has a secret plan. A fierce, highly determined grin spreads across Dominic's face as he prepares to execute his strategic masterstroke. Deep in a scenic valley surrounded by towering mountains, the vast military encampment is set up, bustling with anticipation. Standing before the Grand Commander's tent, a voice warmly welcomes the gathered soldiers, acknowledging the long and difficult journey they took to get there. Count Sinclair chuckles heartily as he stands alongside another knight, preparing to greet the arriving guests. "Oh dear, I'm late," mutters a voice as the delegation finally arrives. "Why, isn't that Count Sinclair?" asks one of the knights in surprise, spotting the lord in person. Viscount Delt, a plump noble with a thick mustache, smiles widely and says, "I didn't expect Count Sinclair to personally march out like this." Viscount Delt pats the Count's armor mockingly and says, "You have so many fine knights under you. You could have left it to them and stayed nice and comfortable." Count Sinclair smiles tightly, hiding his annoyance as he responds, "I came to see my territory's soldiers' bravery for myself." Tapping the Viscount back, the Count retorts, "And while I'm here, I was hoping to see the famed Viscount's sword skills." The two lords lock eyes in a tense, sparking glare of mutual dislike, prompting their nearby subordinates to sweat at how incredibly childish they're being. A knight steps in to break the tension, clapping his hands and saying, Now, enough greetings. Let's eat first. You must all be tired from the long journey." Viscount Delt proudly raises a finger and boasts, "I recently read a military treatise, and it described a way to win soldiers' hearts." Count Sinclair casually asks, "Oh, and what is that?" "According to the book, to win soldiers' hearts, first you must fill their stomachs well," Viscount Delt explains pompously, leaving the knight thinking, "Is he bragging again?" Viscount Delt sighs dramatically, putting a hand over his chest. "I would love to feed them well, but money is always the problem. I'm trying, but we still lack so much. It weighs on me." Count Sinclair smiles politely and replies, "In that sense, Count Sinclair, with the strongest military in the southern region, must care about soldiers' meals too, of course. Soldiers need full bellies to do their duty, don't they?" Viscount Delt grins wide and deviously, saying, "As expected of Count Sinclair. So, with that said, show me Sinclair County's hearty meals," the Viscount challenges with a smug look, eager to compare food. Viscount Delt chuckles, presenting his own soldier's menu of salted pork ham, kidney bean stew, vegetable soup, and wheat bread, saying, "I'm terribly ashamed to show you something so poor." The Sinclair Knights look at the lavish spread in complete disbelief. Poor? Just as I heard, Delt truly has plenty of fertile land to serve this much on a similar budget. The amount and variety of ingredients are impressive, but cooking this well in the field is remarkable. Viscount Delt winks proudly and says, "That's exactly what our territory focused on. Even fine ingredients become awful if the chef ruins them, don't they?" The knights nod in agreement as the Viscount adds, "We put in a little effort this time." Suddenly, Viscount Delt raises his voice, shouting, "However," and startling all the knights in the room. He points open-handed towards Count Sinclair, smugly declaring, "Surely it still can't compare to Sinclair County's soldiers." Count Sinclair maintains a calm, unfazed expression as he responds, "So please, teach me." Count Sinclair begins to walk out, leaving Viscount Delt thinking to himself, "So you want to protect your pride to the end?" As Sinclair says, "But since you ask, how could I refuse?" Count Sinclair turns back with a confident smirk and says, "Follow me. It would be best to see our soldiers' food distribution yourself."
Meanwhile, in the Sinclair camp, Dominic clutches his head in absolute panicked stress, screaming, please, come on. Haunted by his past military kitchen PTSD, Dominic frantically directs his staff, yelling, "Stars on the first day? Seriously? Put it over there. And above all, stay safe. Move that food waste bin over there. Don't give them anything to nitpick." A knight and a subordinate watch the frantic activity in bewilderment. "What is that chaos?" the knight asks, to which the subordinate replies, "I don't know. He has been muttering about severe military PTSD since earlier." Looking at Dominic's surprisingly efficient commands, the knight notes, "But how should I put it? He seems pretty used to handling soldiers. Why?" Dominic's subordinate is startled by the sudden realization of how natural Dominic looks running a military kitchen. Count Sinclair happily leads the group of visiting nobles into the dining area, telling his troops, "No, don't show respect. Soldiers, finish your meals." Viscount Delt's jaw drops in absolute utter shock as he catches sight of the food setup. The transition screen shows a thought bubble asking, "A spirit? Lamp?" In a flashback, Dominic explains his plan to his subordinate, who scratches his head. "As a heating device, its output is incredibly weak." Dominic replies, "That's fine. That's exactly what I need. You can get them for me, right?" The subordinate answers, "If it's just finding the items, that's not a problem. I just really can't figure out what you're going to use them for, Chief." Smiling deviously, Dominic says, "Same goes for finding blacksmiths and carpenters. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before. Chafing dishes." Back in the present, a soldier happily uses tongs to serve himself chicken drumsticks and fresh salad from warm metal chafing dishes. The narration reads, "In other words, an outdoor buffet." The visiting nobles stare at the high-end buffet in absolute shock, murmuring, "What on earth is this? I've never seen food served this way before." A knight closely inspects the setup and notes, "It seems you're using spirit lamps to keep the food warm and then arranging it so they can serve themselves whatever they want to eat." Count Sinclair laughs boastfully, saying, "Ho, ho, ho! Our chef's idea is quite genius, wouldn't you say? When I first heard it, I didn't get it, but once I realized the concept, I slapped my forehead and laughed in admiration." Sweating, Viscount Delt tries to save face by arguing, "From this, we can truly feel how much care the Count has for his soldiers, but if the standard is this high, the military budget must have bloated significantly. Most territories wouldn't be able to replicate this even if they wanted to. It's truly a pity." Count Sinclair smiles knowingly and chuckles. It seems there is a slight misunderstanding. Viscount Delt tenses up, sweat dripping down his cheek as he asks, "A misunderstanding?" Dominic walks forward as the Count explains, "The budget calculated by administration isn't much different from our peacetime budget. Did you perhaps receive additional funding? In my estimation, our soldiers' food budget is roughly the same as Lord Viscount's," Count Sinclair adds, gesturing to Dominic. It would be better if our chef explained it himself rather than me." Dominic walks up with an intense, determined look, thinking to himself, "This is my chance. If I play my cards right, that tax cut will definitely be mine." Viscount Delt screams in furious disbelief. "Impossible! Just looking at the variety of dishes, how could the budget possibly be the same?" Dominic bows politely and asks, "My lord, would you allow me to explain this to the other nobles?" And Count Sinclair warmly replies, "Go ahead." Dominic addresses the group, admitting, "First of all, it is true that a wider variety of dishes increases production costs." The Count adds, "Of course not. We utilize the allocated budget with extreme care and precision." While Delt asks, "In that case, is today's meal a special menu to welcome us?" Dominic gestures to the buffet line and explains, "This is by no means an extravagant or luxurious meal. Everything here was prepared strictly within the budget." Raising a finger confidently, Dominic continues, "Of course there is a factor like that." Dominic smiles with playful confidence, placing a finger to his lips as he prepares to reveal his brilliant budget-saving culinary secret. Dominic explains that they didn't reduce the variety of food for the hardworking soldiers, but instead cut costs elsewhere, prompting a shocked shout of "labor costs" from those listening. Viscount Delt is completely dumbfounded, asking what else could possibly be cut besides food costs to save on the budget. One of the knights explains that despite using soldiers for kitchen duty, cooking and cleaning for 200 people in a short period of time requires massive labor, which is why most territories avoid serving hot meals. Viscount Delt and his subordinates look on in stunned sweat as they begin to comprehend the clever strategy behind Dominic's kitchen plan. Dominic lists the major tasks involved, like cooking, portioning, prep work, and cleanup, asking the crowd if they realize how many workers those duties normally require. Dominic explains that by arranging a self-service buffet line, they're able to save not only an immense amount of labor, but also valuable time. Viscount Delt remains skeptical, doubting that a small team can handle preparing so many different types of dishes, but Dominic replies that it all came down to making a strategic compromise.
Dominic points out that reducing the number of kitchen staff saves both on their wages and on the logistics and food supplies they would normally consume, prompting a sudden realization from the Sinclair Knights. A warm, nostalgic flashback shows Dominic happily serving warm stew to hardworking people in the past. Dominic beams with a bright, charming smile as he shares his heartfelt culinary philosophy. Dominic admits that while every chef wants to use premium ingredients, he will always choose feeding everyone to their heart's content over high-end luxuries, as a dark flashback shows him sitting alone and hungry in his past. Dominic declares that everyone deserves to eat their fill and enjoy their meal, leaving Viscount Delt and the Knights deeply moved by his genuine passion. A Sinclair Knight notes with admiration that Dominic deliberately seasoned the food heavily, and Dominic politely praises the Knight's incredible insight. The hungry soldiers enthusiastically eat their fill as Dominic explains that hardworking troops need hearty, well-seasoned food to replenish their salt levels and restore their stamina. Dominic adds that even if the ingredients aren't premium, proper preparation ensures the food is deeply satisfying and delicious, leaving Viscount Delt completely speechless. Looking slightly nervous, Dominic glances over at his lord, wondering if the Count is pleased with his explanation. Count Sinclair wears a highly smug, immensely pleased grin, basking in the glory of his chef's brilliant victory over his rival. Viscount Delt clears his throat, sweating slightly as he accepts his complete defeat in their culinary comparison. Bowing deeply and respectfully to Count Sinclair, Viscount Delt formally concedes, leaving Dominic and the Count watching his humble departure. Late that night, Dominic relaxes happily on the grass with a drink in hand, celebrating their successful plan to completely defeat his lord's rival. Dominic reaches into his inner vest pocket with a satisfied smile. Under the bright moonlight, Dominic happily reads the official document from Count Sinclair, which cuts the tax rate for Evergreen Village to 20 for the next 3 years as a reward. Dominic gazes up at the starry sky and the full moon, sighing with absolute joy that he has finally secured the well-deserved tax cut. The blonde knight approaches, teasing Dominic for always thinking about food even on his night off, while Dominic takes another sip from his bottle. Scurrying on the grass with flushed, tipsy cheeks, Dominic happily greets the knight and asks him how much he must have had to drink. Dominic waves his scroll in a goofy, drunken celebration, declaring that his vacation has officially begun and his only duty now is to get drunk every single day. As Dominic muses about wanting some fried chicken to go with his drink, he accidentally trips on a large rock in the dark. Screaming in panic, Dominic tumbles and rolls all the way down the steep grassy hill, coughing and groaning as he crashes at the bottom. The knight catches up and warns him not to wander so far from the safety of the tents, but a tipsy Dominic jokingly replies that no monster would dare show its face with so many soldiers around. Dominic goofily reassures the knight, saying that if a monster does appear, the knight will surely protect him, or he will simply slam it down himself. The knight suddenly spots danger and yells down the hill for Dominic to stop shouting and stay completely still, leaving a confused Dominic wondering why. A thick drop of green slime drips onto Dominic's shoulder, and he slowly freezes in terror as he realizes something is looming right behind him. The knight calls out in concern, mistaking Dominic's stupor for having chugged down too much alcohol. Groaning in pain, Dominic rubs his aching head as the knight rushes down the hill towards him. The knight charges forward heroically, drawing his glowing sword with a powerful surge of blue energy. Giant, menacing black spiders with glowing red eyes surround the terrified Dominic as he cowers on the ground. A massive spider looms directly over Dominic, dripping saliva, as the knight warns him that it is a Groot spider which hunts by sound and orders him to keep his mouth shut. With a fierce glare, the knight leaps forward and unleashes a swift, powerful sword strike in a blue arc. In a single magnificent slash, the knight slices through several giant spiders, splattering their black fluids across the grass. Dominic screams in absolute terror as an entire massive swarm of Groot spiders emerges over the hill, looking like a massive mob. Remaining completely calm, the knight takes a deep breath as cool mist escapes his lips, preparing to face the horde. The knight stands tall, raising his sword with cold confidence as he tells the spiders to sleep well in the afterlife. Dominic watches in sweat-inducing disbelief, humorously taking back his praise because of how casually and dramatically the knight says such lines. With a swift, clean motion, the knight sheaths his sword back into its scabbard as Dominic watches with his mouth wide open in pure awe. The knight strikes a flawless, cool pose, leaving Dominic shouting in absolute excitement over how incredibly cool he is. The knight calmly instructs Dominic to report the monster sighting to the Lord, while a panicked Dominic urges him to quickly escape the area. The two of them turn around in alarm as a massive, powerful gust of wind and a booming sound echo from the dark mountains behind them. The knight pulls Dominic back to his feet,
checking if he has any injuries, and Dominic warmly thanks him for saving his life. Gripping Dominic's hand, the knight tells him to follow him immediately, leaving Dominic looking bewildered and asking where they are going. Back at the military camp under the full moon, soldiers and knights gather in a frantic panic, discussing the sudden emergence of 22 Groot spiders and worrying about casualties. Hanover reports that because they spotted the monsters early, they fortunately had no casualties, prompting the commander to sigh in relief that the gods are still watching over them. One of the knights points out that Groot spiders usually live in deep caves and are extremely rare, leading them to suspect that something unusual must have occurred in the mountains for them to move in such large numbers. Hanover respectfully requests to share his thoughts on the matter, and the commander warmly tells him to go ahead. Hanover explains that since the Groot spider is an extremely rare monster, its sudden appearance on the surface indicates a highly abnormal situation. The commander asks if Hanover believes something unusual has occurred, to which Hanover firmly agrees. Hanover reveals his theory about the Spider Queen's molting phase, explaining that after she finishes molting, they begin gathering a massive amount of food. One of the knights remains skeptical, questioning how a mere Spider Queen could possibly cause such a massive impact. Hanover closes his eyes gravely and warns them that the issue is not that simple. Hanover drops a shocking revelation, explaining that the creature the spiders revere as their queen is actually not a spider at all. Hanover names the beast Sentinelicid, explaining that the spider's queen is actually a mutated giant centipede, leaving the other knights completely flabbergasted. Dominic scratches his cheek in confusion, pointing out that it is strange since spiders are typically a centipede's favorite food. When the commander asks if that is true, Dominic nervously explains that while he isn't sure about monsters, normal centipedes do prey on spiders to survive. The commander wonders why spiders would gather food for their natural enemy, and the bald knight suggests it might be some kind of tribute to keep themselves from being eaten. Dominic insists that even looking at it that way, something is still very strange, prompting the bald knight to ask what he means. Dominic points out a key biological detail: centipedes do not eat rotting meat. The commander groans in frustration, muttering that the situation is getting too complicated and wondering why they are doing this. A sudden realization hits Dominic as a shadow of absolute dread falls over his face. Dominic speaks up, asking his lord what if the gathered prey isn't actually meant as an offering for the centipede. Dominic suggests that the prey might actually be an offering to another entity that has the power to get rid of their natural enemy. The commander gasps in shock as the terrifying implications of Dominic's theory sink in. Spurred to action, the commander immediately orders his men to select their best elite knights and form a scouting party. The commander instructs the scouting party that their mission is to uncover the connection between the spiders and the centipede, and to kill the centipede if possible. Hanover bows deeply and accepts the high-stakes mission with quiet determination. The commander turns his attention to Dominic for one final, unexpected instruction. Dominic looks back at the commander with a nervous and bewildered expression, wondering what is about to happen. Dominic is handed a golden sword as he stands alongside the knights of the scouting party, looking completely out of his depth. Dominic screams in protest at the sky, asking why he has to go, but Hanover instantly snaps at him to shut up. Dominic tearfully asks if he still has time to run away, but Hanover cold-bloodedly warns him that violating military orders carries the death penalty. Dominic quickly backtracks, claiming he was just talking to himself and arguing that he isn't even a soldier, but Hanover points out that once anyone accepts a mission, they are officially part of the military. Throwing his sword into the air in a dramatic tantrum, Dominic yells that he is going to end up dead either way, but Hanover reassures him that they will protect him and asks him to point out any insect behaviors they might miss. Dominic internally curses, thinking it is absolute bullshit because he doesn't actually know anything about monsters, recalling that his only experience with centipedes was his obsessed logistics sergeant catching them for stamina-boosting food during his past military service. Suddenly, a terrifying screech echoes through the air, causing Dominic to scream in pure, unadulterated terror. Spotting dark shapes flying over the mountains, Dominic asks if they are eagles, but Hanover gravely corrects him, explaining that they are wyverns migrating because mating season is near. Dominic sighs in relief that the wyverns are far enough not to spot them, and Hanover urges the team to continue their search to find the spider cave before nightfall. One of the scouting knights waves from atop a hill, calling out to the group that he has found something. Dominic and the knights plug their noses in disgust at a foul stench, with Hanover remarking that the brutal smell explains why they found the cave so quickly. Looking inside the cave, Hanover observes a massive pile of dead monsters and notes that the bodies have already started to rot. Hanover turns to Dominic and asks if he knows anything about the situation, but Dominic nervously admits that he has no clue.
Looking at the giant heap of rotting corpses, Dominic ponders how incredibly massive the creature must be, recalling rumors from his past world that in places like Australia, insects grow to giant proportions due to abundant food and a lack of predators. Hanover suddenly tenses up, realizing with horror that the beast's actual size might be far greater than anything the academics have ever documented. The entire ground begins to violently shake, throwing a terrified Dominic to his knees as he desperately asks if it is just an earthquake. Hanover spots the impending danger and commands everyone to draw their weapons and prepare for battle as the earth violently ruptures. A monstrous, giant purple centipede with glowing pink eyes bursts out of the ground, sending Dominic into a state of hysterical, screaming panic. With a sharp, ringing sound, a knight draws his sword and bellows for the squad to charge. The knights charge fearlessly, shouting that they must kill the beast before its entire body emerges to ensure the safety of the nearby villagers. As the knights rally their spirits to fight for their families and territory, Dominic frantically runs for his life, screaming that he is doing this to save himself. Dominic yells back at a knight, urging him to run and request reinforcements from the Lord, prompting the concerned knight to ask what will happen to Hanover. Hanover leaps high and strikes the centipede, shouting for his men not to worry about him, while a stunned Dominic watches in disbelief, wondering how he managed to climb up there. Dominic suddenly stops as a painful, alarming sound catches his attention. Seeing the knights getting brutally battered and overwhelmed by the giant centipede, Dominic realizes in despair that they won't stand a chance if the fight continues like this. Dominic notes that while the knight is desperately holding his ground, the giant centipede is far faster than expected and has an incredibly hard shell. In a flashback, the scene shifts to a military base building as someone calls out to look at a captured creature. Dominic recalls his conversation with his logistics sergeant, who greedily showed him a captured centipede and mentioned that it only targets the plumpest prey. The logistics sergeant explains that feeding centipedes to chickens provides unmatched health benefits, calling it the natural food chain where centipedes eat spiders, chickens eat centipedes, and humans eat chickens, leaving Dominic deeply disgusted. Dominic looks back at the sky where flying wyverns are migrating for their upcoming mating season. Dominic watches in silence as the wyverns fly off into the distance toward the mountains. Back in the battle, the knight commands his struggling forces to aim specifically for the gaps in the giant centipede's joints. Seeing his squad getting overwhelmed, the knight begins to yell for the wounded soldiers to fall back. Dominic suddenly steps forward, holding up a burning firebomb with a determined but panicked expression. The knight is completely shocked to see Dominic, internally wondering why the idiot hasn't run away yet. A close-up of the knight's face reveals his absolute disbelief and worry as Dominic stands his ground. The knight continues to sweat in disbelief, unable to comprehend why Dominic is refusing to flee. The knight angrily yells at Dominic, asking him what he is doing, which startles Dominic and makes him gasp. On top of the centipede, the knight blames Dominic's distraction for causing him to miss a strike, angrily telling him to get out of the way immediately. The knight leaps high into the sky as Dominic hurls the firebomb directly toward the centipede. With a swift, powerful mid-air strike, the knight slashes the firebomb, triggering a massive fiery explosion right on top of the giant centipede. The giant centipede's glowing pink eyes reflect the intense, blazing flames of the explosion. Covered in raging flames, the giant centipede screeches in agony, completely caught in the fiery blast. Dominic anxiously calls out to the knight, who slides across the ground to make a landing, asking if he is okay. The knight weakly grumbles that Dominic actually threw a firebomb at his own superior, but a panicked Dominic grabs him, urging him to stop acting tough and hide, while the knight protests that the battle isn't over yet. A massive, terrifying screech suddenly echoes from the sky above them. Looking up at the descending beasts, Dominic laments that things are getting even worse now that a swarm of wyverns has appeared. The knight raises his sword, resolutely preparing to fight to the death, but Dominic furiously yells at him to stay out of it because the chicken has arrived. The knight looks completely bewildered as Dominic explains that centipedes prey on spiders and chickens prey on centipedes, calling it basic common sense and shouting that the knight is driving him crazy. Dominic fiercely commands the knight to get down immediately as the danger approaches. 3 massive green wyverns descend from the sky, letting out deafening, savage screeches. The wyverns dive straight down toward the giant centipede, which is still covered in blazing fire. The leading wyvern savagely bites down on the giant centipede, crushing its tough armor in a single bite. The wyverns and the giant centipede engage in a brutal, chaotic battle, prompting Dominic to remark that they are really going at it. Dominic admits to the knight that while he wasn't completely sure, he had a strong suspicion that wyverns prey on centipedes. The knight is stunned and asks how Dominic could possibly be so certain of their behavior. Pointing his finger, Dominic explains that since the wyverns are in the mountains for their mating season, they are actively preparing to nest and raise their young.
Dominic points out that nesting wyverns would never allow a dangerous monster to live near their nest, especially since a giant centipede is the perfect nutrient-rich meal for their offspring. A sweat drop falls down the knight's face as he quietly processes the logical explanation and mutters that he understands. The knight stares at Dominic in mild disbelief as Dominic turns back to him to say something else. Dominic turns around with a wide, mischievous grin and glittering eyes, looking extremely pleased with himself. The handsome, dark-haired commander in white and blue armor warmly addresses Dominic as Village Chief Dominic. Addressing Dominic and the kneeling knight, the commander praises Dominic's wisdom and wit for preventing casualties, granting him a silver medal of merit and a financial bonus equal to a centurion's salary. The soldiers enthusiastically clap and cheer for Dominic, congratulating the village chief and declaring that he fully deserves the silver medal of merit. As the commander proceeds to announce the reward for the night, Dominic stands frozen with a comical, sweat-inducing look of pure disappointment, wondering if that is really all he gets. Under a bright blue sky, Dominic's inner voice screams in absolute despair, refusing to believe this is his actual reward. Dominic holds up the shining silver medal of merit, bitterly questioning what he is supposed to do with a piece of metal. Lying down with a comically disgruntled pout, Dominic grumbles that the heavy metal is purely symbolic and of no real use to him. Dominic complains that soldiers always do the heavy lifting while others take the real credit, prompting Knight Ian to enter the tent and ask what he's whining about now. Dominic sits up on his bed and asks if Ian will continue serving as the commanding officer, to which Ian explains that command has been returned to the Elder Lord, meaning he must return to his original duty. When Dominic asks what his original duty is, Ian calmly replies that his duty is the former Lord's order to protect Dominic. Dominic sighs that stepping down from command must feel like being robbed of a great achievement, telling Ian to cheer up since at least he didn't get stuck with chump change like a symbolic medal. Ian looks confused and asks why Dominic thinks he only got chump change. Dominic waves the medal, telling Ian that while he has simple tastes, he can't possibly think this cheap medal is a substantial reward, leaving Ian briefly speechless. Ian patiently explains that while the silver medal of merit is highly honorable and awarded for great feats, Dominic dismisses it with a sarcastic shrug. Ian then delivers a shocking revelation, explaining that the medal actually serves as an official voucher to claim the most valuable loot directly from the battlefield. Dominic stares in wide-eyed surprise as Ian begins to explain the true value of his reward. Trembling with anticipation, Dominic nervously gasps and asks, "Then?" Ian explains that the most valuable item from the battle was actually the giant centipede's carapace, which now officially belongs to Dominic. Overjoyed by the massive fortune, Dominic dramatically drops to his knees in worship, shouting, "Elder Lord, may you live long and prosperous life," while Ian sweat drops and mutters that he is a piece of work. In a carriage leaving the site, Dominic waves cheerfully to the knights who bid them farewell, with the text noting that the monster subjugation was not quite over yet. A beautiful view of the coastal town is shown under a bright blue sky, with narration explaining that a few days of absolute peace followed, bringing the exact life Dominic had always wanted. At Dominic's cottage, a high-angle view of the peaceful house is shown before shifting to someone stir-frying fresh vegetables and seafood in a wok over giant roaring flames. Dominic excitedly tosses ingredients in a wok, grinning as he comments on how incredible the dish smells. A portion of freshly made white noodles is placed neatly onto a plate. The ladle pours a rich red spicy seafood soup packed with shrimp, mussels, and vegetables over the noodles. The completed dish of seafood jampong is beautifully presented, with Dominic proudly announcing that his special dish is served. Dominic winks and licks his finger as he tastes the spicy soup, looking incredibly satisfied with his culinary creation. Bald Village Chief Patrick stares at the bowl with a wide-open, drooling mouth, holding his fork and spoon in anticipation. Ian holds a wooden spoon, drooling slightly as he looks forward to tasting the spicy dish. Blue-haired companion stuffs her cheeks with noodles, sweating from the intense spice but unable to stop eating. The former lord is absolutely delighted, grinning broadly as he declares that the dish is magnificent. Dominic smiles sweatily and asks the former lord if he is building up too much of a debt at home, to which the former lord laughs and says he has already eaten his fill at the resort. Sitting around the table, Dominic warns the former lord that jampong is bad for gout, but the former lord flexes his bicep and boasts that they shouldn't underestimate a swordmaster's body. The former lord and Patrick heartily praise the meal as a real man's dish with a great kick, saying only those who have tasted life's bitterness can appreciate this flavor. Dominic looks back at them with a deadpan expression, internally telling them to stop showing off. Dominic asks the former lord when he is planning to head back, but the former lord says he wants to stay at least for the highly anticipated centipede carapace auction. Patrick asks Dominic if it is really necessary to hold the auction in their village, noting that merchants believe holding it in the capital would yield enough to rebuild the village twice over. Dominic confidently replies that holding it in their village will make them more than double what they would get in the capital, leaving the others completely shocked. Dominic winks and holds up a finger, telling them to listen closely to his plan. A group of travelers carrying heavy backpacks arrive on a grassy hill overlooking the coast, sighing with relief that they have finally arrived. One of the travelers shields his eyes, looking ahead in awe as he wonders what lies before them. Looking down from the hill, the travelers are stunned to see a massive, highly developed resort village instead of a simple fishing village. Entering the bustling streets of Evergreen, the travelers find a crowded market filled with cheerful families and merchants, noting that they are indeed in the right place. A friendly merchant at a food stall calls out to the passers-by, offering hot noodles with a special promotion. Two hooded travelers drool heavily as they stare at a delicious, steaming bowl of noodles. The travelers discuss their food options, with some preferring meat and beer, while others are tempted by a delicious charcoal-grilled meat sandwich. A cheerful speech bubble against a clear sky declares, "Sounds like a plan." Travelers walk happily down the street carrying multiple filled shopping bags. More travelers walk by, enjoying their snacks and carrying packages, accompanied by a small goat. Meeting up in the middle of the street, the travelers ask each other in surprise if they bought things too, only to realize everyone is holding shopping bags. The travelers laugh merrily as they enjoy their time in the beautiful resort village. Standing on a high balcony, Dominic watches the lively crowd with a pleased, proud smile. Dominic relaxes in a lounge chair as a villager serves him hot tea, asking him if he would like to try their new tea. Dominic gently smiles as he prepares to take a sip of the warm, soothing tea. Flashback text appears on a dark background, echoing the other's shocked question about making more than double. Dominic explains that while selling the carapace in the capital might fetch a high face value price, the high fees and taxes are insane, though Patrick worries it'll be hard to get full value locally. Dominic confidently tells them that the auction itself isn't what's important, but rather the massive demand it brings to the village. As the others look on in confusion, Dominic explains that since their village is far from big cities, people traveling for a rare carapace won't just leave immediately after the auction. The former lord and Patrick suddenly realize the genius of his plan, smiling in deep admiration. Dominic points out that the visitors will spend a significant amount of money on lodging, food, and other local services, staying for a few extra days. Patrick agrees, noting how well local shops and the resort have been performing, prompting the former lord to ask Dominic if he has any interest in becoming their administrator. Dominic laughs off the offer, saying he is happy just being the village chief, though internally he is grinning about his true goal of making a massive fortune. Back in the present, the villager tells Dominic that the tea house they invested in is doing incredibly well and will recoup its construction costs in no time. Dominic smiles warmly, stating that since they built it 3 stories high, its success was guaranteed, and that it will serve as the village's pride. The villager mentions that tomorrow is the Birth Festival's festival eve and hopes everything goes smoothly, to which Dominic replies that he will head down to the plaza later to check on the stalls. The narration introduces the Birth Festival, a special event to pray for and bless the health and future of children, which was organized by bringing in the priests of the goddess of life who were already helping at the resort. Dominic smiles contentedly, thinking that when it comes to festivals, nothing beats a little prayer for good fortune, which means everyone will be eager to buy a talisman or amulet since the priests are offering blessings. While relaxing in his lounge chair and dreaming of making a quick fortune so he can retire, Dominic is suddenly startled by aggressive shouting coming from nearby. Looking over a stone wall, Knight Ian, a villager, and Dominic look down as some rowdy men argue, declaring that there is no such thing as a reserved spot in the plaza and that it is first come, first served. Below them, a group of aggressive thugs surrounds a woman wearing an apron, threatening that they don't mind hitting women, while Dominic looks on in sudden recognition. The woman in the apron cracks her knuckles with a terrifying smile, telling the thugs that she actually loves beating up men. Dominic's face goes pale with sweat-inducing panic as he screams in terror, realizing what is about to happen. The thugs continue to mock her, asking if they really need to break her bones for her to understand, while she calmly notes that they sure talk a lot. The thug's leader calls for his boys to teach her a lesson, while the other thugs laugh creepily, making crude remarks about wanting to give her a young man's touch. The woman single-handedly beats the entire group of thugs to the ground, pinning their leader while grumbling that she only planned to give them a quick wake-up slap until they started running their mouths. Dominic rushes into the plaza and frantically grabs the woman, calling out to Emmeline to stop, causing her to turn around in surprise. Dominic and Ian look at the battered thugs and sigh, feeling pity that they chose the absolute worst person to mess with. Dominic reveals that she's the former squad commander of the Kalan mercenary group, warning her that they would be in trouble if she broke any more of their bones. The bruised thug leader stumbles forward and asks Dominic if he is the village chief, to which Dominic calmly confirms that he is. The thug leader angrily protests, demanding to know if they are really turning away merchants who came to help liven up the village festival, which only infuriates Emmeline. Dominic calmly explains that they always welcome merchants, but points out that he saw everything from above and knows they started the fight, leaving the thugs sputtering. The thug leader nervously tries to negotiate, quickly correcting himself under Emmeline's death stare, and suggests they just forget about it and take another side of the plaza, while Dominic digs his ear in pure annoyance. The thug leader blinks in complete confusion, wondering what the village chief has in mind. Dominic gestures for the thug leader to follow him, telling him that since they came to do business, they should follow his lead. As they walk, Dominic silently grumbles that troublemakers like these always show up during festivals, resolving not to let them ruin the tourists' mood. They arrive at the town hall, where Dominic declares that there will be absolutely no price gouging at his festival, leaving the thugs shocked to realize they are meant to sell there. Inside the town hall, the thugs look at a map and complain that the location is too far from the plaza, but Dominic firmly tells them that only local villagers can set up stalls in the plaza. The thug leader tries to slide a bribe to Dominic, praising his business sense, but Dominic shuts him down instantly, warning him that he could end up in handcuffs and reminding him that former Count Sinclair is staying at the resort. Terrified, the thug leader quickly agrees to take the spot, and a pleased Dominic says they won't charge an excessive fee, telling Lucky to handle the rest of the contract details. As the disappointed thugs turn to leave while grumbling about what a pain it is, Dominic calls out to stop them. Dominic happily explains their strict fixed-price system, warning them to clearly list and display their items and prices, and stating that they will be instantly kicked out if caught cheating during inspections. Dominic praises Lucky and instructs him to have the patrol crew bring any outside merchants to the town hall, to which Lucky confidently replies that he will handle them exactly the same way, earning an appreciative laugh from Dominic. Lucky suddenly remembers a message and informs Dominic that the former lord wants him to drop by his place before dinner. Lucky adds that the invitation also includes Knight Ian, leaving both Dominic and Ian looking curious. Dominic wonders if something happened, recalling that the former lord mentioned he couldn't make it out today because of an important guest. Dominic's eyes spark with monetary ambition as he realizes the former lord might be planning to introduce them to this guest, which could be a highly valuable connection. Excited by the prospect, Dominic bolts out the door, shouting that they need to hurry so they won't be scolded for being late. Ian sighs deeply at Dominic's obvious greed, thinking to himself that the young village chief is incredibly transparent. They arrive at a grand and luxurious mansion under a beautiful clear sky, knocking on the door before being welcomed inside. Inside, Dominic and Ian respectfully bow to the former lord, asking if he called for them. An unfamiliar voice suddenly cuts in from the side, asking if Dominic is indeed the village chief, catching him by surprise. Dominic and Ian look across the luxurious room, spotting a burly, shadowed figure sitting on the sofa. The shadow clears to reveal a stout, cheerful dwarf with a long red beard and a horned helmet, who waves and gives them a casual greeting. The narration explains that in this fantasy world, various demi-humans such as mermaids, orcs, beastkin, and elves live together, with elves and beastkin being the most common. Dominic stares in awe as he realizes that the rare guest standing right in front of him is a dwarf. The dwarf asks if it is his first time seeing a dwarf, to which Dominic sheepishly admits it is, prompting the dwarf to introduce himself as Stonehammer. Dominic reflects that he never had a reason to meet a demi-human before, as they are typically under the protection of high-ranking nobles, making them impossible for a country bumpkin to see. The former lord commands Ian to come over for a moment, and Ian respectfully steps forward. Studying Ian closely, the former lord notes that it is clear, and asks if his body has been feeling a bit itchy lately, which Ian admits is true, but still bearable. The former lord calls Ian a foolish boy and orders him to come to the beach tomorrow at dawn to restart his training, causing Dominic to wonder if the knight is also becoming a swordmaster. The former lord laughs and warns Dominic to watch his mouth since becoming a swordmaster is extremely rare, explaining that Ian has finally reached the level of properly controlling mana. Dominic looks at Ian in confusion, asking if he didn't already know how to use mana since he thought Ian used it during their fight with the giant centipede. Ian patiently explains that there is a massive difference between simply manifesting mana and controlling it at will, leaving Dominic to admit that it sounds highly impressive even if he doesn't fully understand it. Turning his attention back, Dominic asks why the former lord called for him, guessing it wasn't just to introduce Stonehammer, prompting the former lord to remember his main purpose. The former lord lets out a booming, hearty laugh, smiling broadly as he prepares to reveal the true reason behind their meeting. Dominic is startled when the former lord suggests letting Stonehammer stay in Evergreen for a while the dwarf himself drinks the local tea and complains that it tastes awful and bitter. Dominic asks if Stonehammer's stay is just for a vacation, but the former lord explains that the dwarf intends to live there permanently, prompting Dominic to point out that any prospective resident needs a recommendation from the villagers. Dominic sweat drops in confusion, admitting that he honestly doesn't understand why a renowned dwarf like Stonehammer would want to move to their small remote village. Stonehammer is utterly shocked to learn that the village has neither mines nor a blacksmith shop. Seeing Stonehammer's genuine disbelief, Dominic realizes the dwarf had no idea about the lack of facilities, confirming his suspicion that something fishy is going on. The former lord notes that Dominic is surprisingly sharp and nervously admits that Stonehammer is actually on the run. Panic-stricken, Dominic warns them that harboring a criminal could lead to the entire village being punished for aiding and abetting. Stonehammer glares in extreme annoyance at the implication that he is some kind of common criminal. Dominic asks who is chasing Stonehammer if he didn't commit a crime, to which the dwarf explains that no one is chasing him, but he simply hates getting dragged into annoying human politics. Stonehammer explains that he asked Tio to recommend a quiet place, which led him here, leaving Dominic overjoyed to realize a legendary dwarf craftsman has basically fallen right into their laps. Dominic immediately changes his mind and enthusiastically welcomes Stonehammer to Evergreen, prompting the dwarf to remark on his incredibly fast change of heart. Stonehammer asks if he can build his house on a nearby hill, and the former lord readily agrees, even offering to set up a spot for his blacksmith shop. The former lord asks what Stonehammer meant by annoying things, wondering if a war is about to break out, but Stonehammer casually replies that he merely overheard something while passed out in a back alley. Stonehammer drops a massive bombshell, whispering that the crown prince is apparently not the emperor's biological son. The former lord, Dominic, and knight Ian are frozen in absolute terror and shock upon hearing this treasonous secret about the crown prince. Stonehammer continues to chuckle, remarking that the arrogant crown prince never looked like the emperor anyway. Stonehammer begins to ask if it isn't a funny story, but stops when he sees how utterly terrified and pale they look, tentatively asking Tio if this is actually a big deal for humans. The next day, Dominic nervously asks Stonehammer if he really hasn't told anyone else, and the dwarf insists that he hasn't. Stonehammer tells Dominic that while he may not trust humans, he can trust a dwarf because they don't lie, while Dominic frantically warns him to never repeat the secret, relieved that only they heard it. Stonehammer dismisses Dominic's worries, saying keeping a secret is easy, before immediately demanding that the village chief buy him some delicious sausages and beer from a nearby stall. Looking toward a lively tavern stall, Dominic asks knight Ian if he also couldn't sleep, and both of them admit that the shocking secret kept them awake all night. Dominic looks at Ian's pale, tired face and notes that the knight was clearly just as shocked by the news as he was. Dominic reflects that while it's hard to sleep after hearing such a bombshell, the dwarf is completely unfazed and having way too much fun eating and drinking. Ian asks if these street stalls are open every day, and Dominic explains that they are only here because tonight is the eve of the birth festival. Dominic mentions that there are usually a good number of stalls catering to resort guests anyway, which delights the hungry Stonehammer. Dominic sighs, hoping Stonehammer won't cause any trouble, as he and Ian realize they are the only ones feeling incredibly nervous. Dominic and Ian watch in silent disbelief as Stonehammer heartily downs mug after mug of beer and happily gorges himself on food. As Stonehammer laughs boisterously, Dominic and Ian sweat in pure terror, desperately praying that the dwarf doesn't accidentally blurt out the imperial secret. The next day, the village's very first birth festival officially begins outside a grand, spectacular white cathedral. While blessing Baron Owen's baby, the priest suddenly gasps and begins to tremble in profound shock. Holding the baby high toward the heavens, the priest loudly proclaims that a child beloved by Mana has been born into the world. The surrounding nobles watch in absolute awe and begin to pray as the priest declares that the child's future will be filled with boundless glory and brilliance. The baby's mother weeps tears of joy while the priest continues his divine declaration, telling everyone to remember this blessed moment of divine guidance. While Dominic wonders if this is some kind of spirit possession, Ian corrects him, explaining that it is a legendary divine descent and that he never expected to actually witness one. Dominic quickly catches on, recognizing the phenomenon as spirit possession in this fantasy world, and his mind immediately begins to scheme.
Thrilled by the divine spectacle, Dominic greedily thanks the goddess, realizing that this miracle will cause their festival souvenirs to sell out instantly. Dominic says that all that's left is the big auction tonight, though Ian wonders if they really have to go through with all of Dominic's elaborate plans. Dominic gives a highly mischievous and confident smirk, clearly planning something grand for the event. Under a beautiful crescent moon, a lavish masquerade ball begins on the beach resort to accompany the highly anticipated auction. The masked noble guests praise the romantic atmosphere, wondering if the village chief who organized the ball is actually from a fallen noble family. Dressed in sharp suits, Dominic tells Ian that guests can enjoy the ball even if they don't participate in the auction, while nearby guests praise the custom mask upgrade option. Ricky runs up to report that the custom masks are selling like crazy, and Dominic instructs him to keep accurate records so they can properly distribute the profits to the local craftsmen. Dominic and Ian turn around to see Stonehammer approaching them at the masquerade ball. Dominic is horrified to find Stonehammer completely shirtless and wearing only a small towel and a masquerade mask, sparking a hilarious argument when the dwarf claims showing off their muscles is a proud dwarven custom. Stonehammer expresses his desire to participate in the auction, but Dominic pointedly asks how he plans to do so since he doesn't have any money. Stonehammer cheerfully admits he has no money, but proudly declares that a dwarf's very existence is equivalent to wealth, leaving a confused Dominic to ask what he means. Stonehammer holds up a card and suggests auctioning off 5 of his custom crafting order vouchers, promising to forge whatever the winners desire within 3 months of his forge's completion. Dominic's eyes instantly light up with greed, deeply admiring Stonehammer's extreme confidence and realizing how incredibly valuable these dwarven crafting vouchers are. An announcement echoes across the resort, thanking the guests for waiting and asking them to take their seats as the auction is about to begin. Desperate to maximize his profits, Dominic immediately bolts toward the stage to add the dwarf's vouchers to the auction list, leaving Stonehammer running frantically behind him. Under a beautiful crescent moon, the resort hotel is lively with guests enjoying the evening, prompting someone to ask if they are planning to go to the masquerade ball. Dominic, relaxing in his chair, tells Knight Ian that he is staying behind and invites Ian to go ahead, though Ian admits he thought Dominic would be the one interested in networking. Dominic holds up a sheet of runic writing, pointing out that everyone at the ball is too busy looking for romance, and tells Ian to look at the paper instead. Dominic shows the document to Ian with an excited grin, proudly declaring that they have made an absolute fortune. Brimming with joy, Dominic generously promises to get Ian a brand new sword and armor since they have been through so much together. Ian declines the offer with a gentle smile, explaining that his sword is a cherished family heirloom from his parents that he has no intention of replacing. Dominic smiles warmly, thinking to himself that Ian will surely share his story when the time is right. Dominic stretches his arms and declares that it is finally time to tackle the things he has been putting off, leaving Ian to wonder what that could be. With a highly mischievous, intense grin, Dominic dramatically whispers the words, "Cha-cha, Jang, Mian." A peaceful bird's-eye view shows seagulls flying over the coast of Evergreen Village, with its lighthouse, docks, and houses bathed in the morning light. Dominic and Knight Ian walk side by side through the village streets, their footsteps echoing softly. An elderly village woman carrying wooden crates greets them warmly, and Dominic politely wishes her a good morning. The woman playfully offers Dominic a massage if his body feels stiff, causing him to sweat drop and laugh nervously, while a narration box notes that the festival was a great success. Dominic scratches his neck with a relaxed smile as a narration box explains that a few days have passed and the excitement has died down. A bustling street scene shows that despite the festival ending, the number of visitors traveling to Evergreen continues to grow steadily. Dominic reflects with satisfaction on the successful centipede carapace auction and the sweet extra income, noting that their tourism business is off to a great start. Dominic grins mischievously, thinking that now that they have some breathing room, he can move on to his next plan. The beautiful blue-haired mage greets Dominic with a bright, welcoming smile as he arrives. The mage comments that Dominic looks much better, and Dominic agrees that it is nice to live with a peaceful mind, noting that he finished making the lizard magic devices the night before. Dominic asks how the children are doing with their studies, and the mage proudly reports that the quick learners are already capable of pulling their own weight. As children run and play near a windmill in the background, the mage mentions her plans to prepare the smarter kids for the administrator exam, which Dominic enthusiastically supports. The mage calls out to Dominic, causing him to turn around with a slightly curious expression. Blushing slightly and scratching her cheek, the mage shyly asks if it would be possible for her to settle down permanently in the village. Excitedly facing Dominic, the mage adds that she would also love to open up a shop in the village. Dominic readily promises to issue a construction permit right away, but the mage mentions she was actually about to make a request, prompting Dominic to ask what it is. Dominic explains that he needs a way to speed up food fermentation, but the mage notes that while decay magic has a similar effect, it is high-level magic beyond her capability. An illustration shows a red potion bottle alongside 3 yellow mushrooms, representing potential ingredients or magical solutions. The mage offers to place an order for the fermentation acceleration materials, and Dominic enthusiastically asks her to order a generous amount. Dominic rubs his hands together with a sly, plotting grin, relieved that the fermentation issue is finally solved. A large black cast iron cauldron is slammed heavily onto the grassy ground with a loud thud. Muscular villagers unload barrels and cauldrons as a bald villager asks Dominic if he plans to make a lot of paste, to which Dominic reveals he is planning to open a restaurant. The bald villager is delighted to hear they can just buy it now instead of constantly asking Dominic to make it, and asks what kind of paste it is. Crouching near the cauldrons, Dominic explains that it is doenjang, and chuckles as he tells the skeptical villager that he will regret asking for gochujang once he tastes it. When the villager asks where Knight Ian went, Dominic explains he is training with the former lord, while a side panel shows Ian facing the former lord in his tropical shirt. The bald villager claps his hands to gather the crew, ordering them to bring a stone mortar over so they can get started. Dominic replies with a cheerful "yes, sir," and notes that since the villagers have helped make doenjang before, they know exactly what to do. Pouring ingredients into the stone mortar, Dominic explains they will use a 6:4 ratio of soybeans and wheat, adding that the wheat provides a sweet flavor. The muscular bald villager slams a heavy wooden pestle into the mortar with incredible power, shouting that sweetness is always good. Dominic instructs the villagers to knead the mixture and add salt water as the muscular men work vigorously. The bald villager yells for Dominic to make sure they get plenty of meat later, and Dominic laughingly promises they will eat until they are completely full. Dominic enters the kitchen with a gentle, satisfied smile on his face. Dominic lifts the lid of a bubbling cauldron, checking on pork belly and shoulder cuts that were drained of blood at dawn and aged in doenjang. Dominic smiles at the boiling meat, noting that it just needs to simmer a little longer before he can move on to the next step. Dominic vigorously squeezes a bundle of salted radish strips completely dry over a bowl. Dominic mixes the radish strips with a vibrant seasoning blend of chili powder, sugar, fish soy sauce, and minced garlic. Dominic happily dances and sings as he mixes the ingredients with both his right and left hands. Using a sharp chef's knife, Dominic carefully slices the hot, freshly boiled pork thin and lays it out on a cutting board. Dominic laments the lack of salted shrimp, but smiles as he remembers he has the samjang he prepared beforehand. A perfectly arranged plate of bosam, thinly sliced pork surrounding a mound of spicy radish salad, is shown alongside a scroll listing its nutritional and health benefits. The blue-haired mage steps into the kitchen carrying a wooden crate, and Dominic asks if the order has arrived, to which she replies that it came just in time. Dominic examines a red potion bottle containing a yellow powder, noting that this is the magical ingredient that cuts food fermentation time from 6 months down to just a week, though the mage warns him that it leaves a slightly bitter aftertaste as a side effect. Pleased with the magical ingredients, Dominic holds a crate of the potion bottles and warmly offers the mage some freshly boiled, incredibly tender pork before she heads off. Clenching her fist with determination, the mage remembers that 3 new types of cakes are coming out today at Auntie Emmeline's bakery, realizing she absolutely cannot miss out on them. Hurrying off in a flash to avoid missing the bakery sale, the mage runs away at full speed, leaving the muscular villagers in the dust. Looking on in utter disbelief, the bald villager and his brother carry a large jar, commenting on how people from the capital really are different for giving up meat just to eat some bread. With a polite farewell, the muscular villagers carry away the heavy cooking pots and jars to prepare for the feast. Standing before a long wooden picnic table lined with plates of delicious bosam, Dominic brightly announces that it is finally time for everyone to dig in. The hard-working villagers erupt in ecstatic cheers, their eyes sparkling with pure joy at the sight of the generous feast. While eagerly devouring the tender pork, the delighted villagers praise their choice of village chief, while the bald villager proudly claims he only handed the job over because he knew Dominic would do an incredible job. Dominic stands nearby, watching the villagers celebrate and laugh heartily as they enjoy the feast. Dominic recalls the terrifying first encounter when the muscular, glowing-eyed bald villager and his crew menacingly invited him to come eat in their village. Touching his arm with a gentle, nostalgic smile, Dominic reflects on how these villagers gave him a home and food when he had absolutely nothing, making them the very people he has always wanted to treat.
Dominic promises to gather everyone again in a week to treat them to a brand new, unique dish they have never tasted before, leaving the villagers deeply intrigued. Dominic flashes a mischievous, highly confident grin, teasingly warning them that they might even find themselves completely addicted to it. Suddenly, Stonehammer the dwarf comes running up in a frantic hurry, yelling at the humans to give him a bite of the delicious food too. Smiling sideways, Dominic playfully notes that the dwarf's nose is incredibly sharp whenever there is alcohol and meat around. Under a beautiful evening sky, the group laughingly invites the dwarf to join them, as he loudly demands that they hand over some beer as well. 1 week later, Dominic eagerly lifts the heavy lid off a cooking pot to check on his creation. Looking inside the pot, Dominic is pleased to see a rich, glossy black paste. Dominic scoops the dark paste into a wooden bowl, noting with satisfaction that it is finally ready to be turned into authentic chunjang. Dominic steps inside the clean kitchen to begin the next phase of his cooking. Dominic prepares the ingredients over the fireplace, noting that he just needs to stir-fry the paste with savory clam broth and sweet caramel sauce. Vigorously tossing the ingredients in a large wok, Dominic wonders how Knight Ian and the former lord are doing, since it has been a while since he last saw them training. Dominic's eyes widen slightly as a familiar voice calls out to him, wishing the village chief well. Smiling warmly, Dominic chuckles to himself, realizing it is a classic case of speaking of the devil. Dominic turns around with a bright, welcoming smile on his face. Dominic greets Knight Ian and the former lord, noting they arrived at the perfect timing. Dominic's welcoming expression instantly freezes into complete shock as he gets a clear look at his visitors. Dominic's sweat drops in concern, immediately asking Knight Ian what on earth happened to him. Looking absolutely exhausted and half dead with heavy dark circles under his eyes, Ian weakly replies that he is a sword expert, prompting Dominic to wonder if becoming a swordmaster is really worth looking so incredibly haggard. The former lord slaps his hand onto Ian's shoulder as Ian weakly claims he has finally gotten a feel for the sword and just needs a little more to master it, while the former lord dryly remarks that a little more will actually kill him. Laughing heartily, the former lord mentions he hasn't had much of an appetite lately and asks if they can join in on the interesting dish Dominic is making, which Dominic readily accepts. Removing his heavy outer coat, Ian politely offers to lend a hand with the cooking, which Dominic happily accepts. Displaying his impressive sword-handling dexterity, Knight Ian masterfully tosses the ingredients in a hot wok like a seasoned professional. Grinning, Dominic carries a metal container of oil, declaring that you absolutely cannot have jjajangmyeon without a side of crispy tang suyuk. Dominic happily coats the seasoned pork loin in starch batter and fries it to a perfect crispy golden brown in bubbling hot oil, dancing with joy at the sight. Having finished stir-frying his wok, Ian asks what he should do next, and Dominic politely requests that he finish deep-frying the rest of the ingredients. Dominic instructs Ian to fry the pork, chicken, eggplants, bell peppers, and potatoes, reminding him to change the oil before frying the vegetables. Leaning against his hand at the table, the former lord quietly watches the two cook together. The former lord smiles softly to himself, thinking about how much Knight Ian has softened up and changed for the better ever since he started hanging out with Dominic. Dominic and Knight Ian share a warm, joyful laugh as they work side by side in the kitchen. The villagers gather around the table, sweat dropping with highly skeptical and suspicious faces as they look at the unusual black dish. A steaming, delicious bowl of jjajangmyeon topped with cucumbers is served, prompting one villager to ask if such a black dish is actually edible, while another admits it smells fantastic. One of the well-traveled villagers proudly lectures the others, explaining that coastal kingdoms use squid ink to make black pasta, calling them country bumpkins for being afraid of the dark color. The confident villager takes a large bite of the jjajangmyeon and is instantly struck by its mind-blowing, incredibly rich flavor. Grinning widely and quickly backing away with his bowl, the villager tells the others that it won't suit their country tastes and offers to sacrifice himself to eat it all, only for the bald villager to instantly order him to freeze. Grabbing the bowl with a dark, menacing glare, the bald villager demands to know who he is trying to pull a scam on. Erupting into complete chaos, the other villagers immediately tackle the swindler to grab the delicious bowl, realizing his extreme reaction means the black noodles are absolutely heavenly. Dominic and Knight Ian stand back, sweat dropping in disbelief as a massive brawl breaks out over the food, while Dominic frantically shouts for them to stop fighting because there is plenty of jjajangmyeon, tang suyuk, and egg drop soup for everyone. Holding a finished bowl of his signature dish, Dominic smiles warmly, deeply satisfied that all his hard work has successfully paid off. While slurping and chewing on delicious black noodles, the villagers happily agree that, after all, you have to eat what you want to feel alive. The bald villager approaches Dominic with some hesitation, while Dominic turns to him in surprise, asking if he is finished already and suggesting he should have eaten more. The bald villager nervously scratches the back of his head, saying he has had plenty, but falters as if he is holding back something he wants to say. Dominic looks back at him with an open, questioning expression, asking him to pardon his hesitation. The bald villager quickly laughs off his hesitation, claiming he is being shameless and telling Dominic to pretend he didn't hear anything. But Dominic cheerfully offers to teach him, reassuring him that it is not that difficult. The bald villager stares back in utter, wide-eyed disbelief. Holding 2 bowls of black noodles, Dominic asks if the villager wants to open a restaurant, adding that his only condition is that he must buy the chunchang from him. A close-up reveals the bald villager's eyes wide with overwhelming gratitude and shock. Under a beautiful blue sky with fluffy white clouds, the bald villager tearfully yells out his heartfelt thanks to Dominic. Sitting by the water well, Dominic and Knight Ian wash the empty bowls together, with Dominic commenting that someone licked their plate completely clean, making dishwashing a breeze. Dominic turns his head in curiosity as Knight Ian speaks up. Knight Ian points out that if Dominic were to sell this recipe to a noble or a merchant, he could easily make an absolute fortune. Looking out toward the forest, Dominic gently replies that he knows, but they are family, which deeply touches Ian, who admits he never expected to hear those words from him. Dominic's chibi face frowns as he asks if that was a compliment, to which Ian's smug chibi face replies that he is glad Dominic noticed. Dominic smiles to himself, noting that since he supplies the chunjang, the key ingredient, it doesn't really matter, adding that their village has already grown significantly. Dominic vigorously wipes a plate clean with a cloth, remarking that while the village has grown a lot, it is still not enough. Dominic points a rolled-up cloth at Ian, asking if there is only one way to grow quickly, to which Ian correctly guesses that they need to attract outsiders to spend money in the village. Confirming Ian's sharp memory, Dominic asks what they need to become a place where people want to spend money, reminding him that they must become a symbol of value that people desire. Above a wooden well bucket filled with fresh water, Dominic praises Ian's answer of leisure and relaxation, playfully remarking that Ian would have done exceptionally well as a scholar instead of a knight. Dominic looks back with a bright, cheerful grin, addressing Ian as Sir Knight. Dominic asks what is the most important thing to become a symbol that people want, leaving Ian looking thoughtful and repeating the phrase. Ian wonders if it requires beautiful architecture or delicious food, but Dominic immediately rejects both of those ideas. Under the sun, the smiling former lord and Stonehammer stand together, as Dominic notes that even they must have experienced far better places than this. Dominic shoots a knowing, smug look at Ian, who listens intently. Looking quite bewildered, Ian hesitantly asks if the answer is people. From a high angle, Dominic excitedly shares his plan to build an academy so that talented people who can develop their territory evergreen will gather there. Against a clear blue sky, Dominic explains that teaching the recipe to Mr. Kalon serves the same purpose, as increasing the number of skilled people will make the village much more attractive. Ian pensively repeats the word academy, while Dominic chuckles and clarifies that it won't be anything grand like the imperial court. Dominic happily explains that they will first teach basic academics to the village children, and then set up vocational training programs that adults can learn as well. Ian's sweat drops in concern, noting that skills like carpentry, pottery, construction, and cooking are the specialized skills of craftsmen. Dominic reassures him that they will only teach the basics to help them find plenty of jobs, but Ian asks what would happen if those trainees simply left for another village once they learned. With a confident smile, Dominic raises his finger and tells Ian that it looks like he has to teach him another truth of the world, instructing him to listen closely. Dominic strikes a dramatic, highly confident pose, pointing his finger forward under the bright sunlight. Ian asks if Dominic is trying to create factions through family, hometown, and school ties, but Dominic replies that while things can go wrong and turn into that, he is not talking about forming cliques. Dominic opens his hand, explaining that they don't even have the power to do that, and clarifies that this isn't about a community of nobles splitting up benefits. Dominic leans forward with a sincere expression, talking about how he wants people to feel like they don't want to leave their hometown. Ian looks down thoughtfully, contemplating if such hometown bonds could really be considered a faction, a power struggle, or corruption. Ian admits he supposes not, and Dominic enthusiastically agrees, explaining that it is not a loss if graduates leave, since having people friendly to their village go out into the world is a massive win. Ian stares off to the side, looking deeply moved and contemplative. Dominic watches Ian with a warm, gentle smile, pleased by his understanding. Dominic suddenly requests that Knight Ian take charge of the military class, sending Ian into a state of absolute sweat-dropping shock as he yells, "What, me?" Dominic smilingly downplays the role, explaining that he just needs to teach them the basics of holding a sword, shooting a bow, and building up physical strength so they can pull their own weight. Ian tries to protest that he still lacks training, but a giant leg suddenly stomps in as the former lord loudly booms that Ian has his permission, startling both Dominic and Ian. Wearing a tropical Hawaiian shirt, the bearded former lord grins widely and commands Ian to accept it. Sweating and completely panicked, Ian yells out in protest toward his mentor.